Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Deku and Yui were in love? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Panicked, Yui Kodai was no stranger to suppressing it. Many a time in the past few years, she'd been on the edge of losing her cool under the surface, but retaining her stony expression. However, rarely did she keep this amount of panic at a simmer for this long. Her date, was it one, with Midoriya was still happening. They'd left the cat cafe some 40 minutes ago and were now taking a leisurely stroll around one of Misutafu's hilly parks. The day was cold and crisp and pleasant enough. Brown leaves crunched under their feet. 40 minutes since the cafe, where she'd kissed him. She'd kissed him and made an awkward, coy comment, and then they'd left. His arm was still intertwined with hers. But the only conversation they'd had was observational, pointing out things they'd seen in the park. The kiss remained unacknowledged. I was the one who initiated it, she thought furiously. I have to be the one to acknowledge it. But how could she? How would she even go about that? She'd never kissed a boy before. She still wasn't even sure if this was a date. Midoriya clearly hadn't hated it, but how were the two of them supposed to progress from here? She had no idea. Look there, said Midoriya calmly, pointing. Are those ravens? Yui followed his gaze. Black birds lurking in a dead tree. Crows, I think, she answered softly. Ravens are bigger. Raven. It rhymes with craven, which is what I am. Craven. A big old coward, that's me. She looked at Midoriya again. He seemed fine with the current circumstances, smiling in a relaxed sort of way. Maybe he thought they were already dating, and didn't even need to talk about it. That would make things easy. No. I'm making excuses. Deep down, Yui knew that she just wanted to maintain this status quo. She just wanted to keep wearing her mask and let Midoriya keep wearing his. As long as they were both comfortable, that's what mattered, right? But no, that wouldn't make for a very long relationship at all. To communicate. Her teeth clenched together. Her brain pounded. Outwardly, to Midoriya's eyes, she remained as calm-looking as ever. There's a gazebo at the top of this hill, he said, through some heavier breaths. Let's sit down for a bit. Okay, Yui answered. He was getting winded. She might have been too, but was so focused on her thoughts that it kind of didn't matter. The gazebo was gray, with chipped paint and dead leaves all around. Inside were some rocking chairs. The wind was blowing up on this hill, and it seemed to actually increase in strength as they went under the shelter of the gazebo, as if the openings in the structure focused and sharpened the gusts. Yui pushed her bangs back a bit, uncovering her eyes, and moved to sit down. The rocking chairs were a few feet apart. She had to separate from Izuku. Immediately, she felt colder, emptier, less whole. He seemed to frown for a moment, as if feeling the same, and then sat down in the other chair. God, look at us. We're so hopelessly attached to each other that we can't bear to separate. I've got to say something. We can't just let this hang in the air. Instead, she just began to rock silently in the chair. Her face seemed to be made of hardened cement. Try as she might, she couldn't bring herself to move it, to even smile. I've broken my facade around him before. Earlier on this very date, I did. I thought the kiss would be a breakthrough, but I've set myself back weeks. The war in her brain roiled on, as another gust of wind came through. Izuku's chair was facing the big opening that they'd walked through into the gazebo, and so it rocked backward a bit violently. Whoa, he chuckled, grasping the arms of the chair with white knuckles. Weather's kicking up a bit. Yes, she agreed quietly. Fantastic. Reduced to talking about the weather. How pathetic can I get? Still, this is nice, he said. Nice to get out and about. I've never really felt like I've had anyone I could just go on a walk with. Alone. A small shadow had fallen over his face. He's troubled. I should say something. I've got to say something. A distant howling grew louder and louder, suddenly flaring up from the edge of hearing all the way to being positively earth-shattering. Yui winced and brought her arms up to shield herself. A massive gust of wind came screaming into the gazebo. Her chair lurched, and she planted her feet down to stay steady. Izuku next to her was not so lucky. His wooden chair fell all the way back. He cried out as he and the chair slammed into the concrete floor of the gazebo. He landed flat on his back with a pow, and the chair shattered beneath him. As Izuku fell, he thought about what All Might had once told him. All Might. One for all surely increases your durability as well, right? Well, yes. But your body's own durability has to adjust, which is why you must learn to control it. From there, One for All will make you less vulnerable to impacts coming from outside of your body. However, that is only when it is activated. I'm not sure what you mean. Well, my boy. You see how emaciated I am right now. You don't look nearly this bad when not activating OFA, but in essence you're the same. Right now, neither of us have the quirk turned on and are susceptible to any old injury. If you were to push me over right now, I might break a bone. I would never do that. I know, my boy. I know. This all flashed through his head in an instant, and he winced as he realized this was about to hurt. Pow, crash. A shock spread through his entire body, snaking up his spine like a twisting knife. He felt a wholly unmanly yowl of agony escape his lips. The chair broke into pieces, and immediately all its wooden shards dug into his skin, causing another series of stings all over his arms and back. Izuku rolled, gasping, feeling like his whole backside was on fire. His head was pounding, but it didn't seem like it had hit anything. His neck had just taken a bit of a shock from the sudden movement. He rolled completely over, rubbing one arm with the other, trying to get up on one knee. No. I'm so stupid. How had he let this happen? Everything since the kiss. He'd just frozen up like an idiot. Like the socially incompetent idiot he was. Unable to acknowledge what it was clearly his duty to acknowledge. Yui had taken the first step, so obviously it was his turn now, right? But she'd shut right down. Right down. Of course she had. She was disappointed with him. Disgusted. How could she not be? Her face had been like stone again ever since the kiss, because he'd been unable to take the next step from there. He tried to make things return to normal, but he was just too incompetent. I was never cut out for this. And now, he'd been defeated by a gust of wind, swept over in a crashing rocking chair. It was so embarrassing that he was pretty sure if someone had been filming, he'd end up going viral. He was supposed to be the #1 hero one day. How could he be, when he couldn't even keep from falling over? Then, he felt her shadow behind him. Izuku turned while still on his knee, looking up at her. His heart was racing, his whole body flooding with the fear of the worst. She was even more disgusted with him now. How couldn't she be? Yui's face was stricken. She was reaching out with her hand, her pearly blue eyes widened in worry. Are you okay? She demanded, in a concerned tone that was wholly unlike her. No, it was worse. She pitied him. She didn't think he could take care of himself. He had to fix it. He had to do something. I'm fine, he blurted, a bit forcefully, and rushed up to his feet, still rubbing his wrist. Yui jerked backward as if slapped, and her arm fell limply to her side. Her wide-eyed expression got even more extreme. I'm fine. She'd reached out. She'd gotten too worrisome and overbearing, just like that. And of course he hated her for it. How could he not? It was just like say over again. Yui's body had gone cold. She shook, unable to say anything. No, I have to fix it. I have to. Midoriya, she breathed. Izuku bit his lip, his face having gone very pale. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Igatagabai. He activated his quirk and zoomed away, back toward Yui, away from her. Fast enough to kick up another gust of wind that buffeted at her hair and skirt. Yui held her hands against her chest. I ruined everything. Again. I did it again. All because I let my mask fall. She began to cry. Izuku bounded away, not caring that he was using his quirk outside Yui for something besides hero work, just wanting to disappear, just wanting to get somewhere to feel like garbage. I ruined everything. She saw that I'm not the hero I should be. And who would like me without that? It's all because I let my mask fall. He began to cry. Nito Monoma was still on the UA grounds, stewing, thinking, trying to formulate his next move. The two of them would be back soon from the outing, surely. He thought about this as he rounded the corner of a dorm building and saw the entrance gate in the distance. Oh, there was Midoriya himself. Only ... he was alone. And, he's been crying, Nito thought, suddenly disquieted. He could see it very clearly. The boy's face had a sunken look to it, and his eyes were streaked with red. And Yui was not with him at all. Nito's eye twitched. Something really disastrous must have happened. Should I stay out of it after all? If they destroy things on their own. He took an awkward half-step forward. Heroes were supposed to help those in need. Midoriya was clearly in need right now. The green-haired boy was walking away, but not toward his dorm. He was walking toward the woods. He had not seen Monoma. Nito didn't want to hesitate much longer. He decided to follow him. I should ask him what's wrong. Ask him what happened. For ... for my plan, yes. So I can figure out how to proceed. And, maybe it'd be worth it to cheer him up a little. Izuku sat down on a bench in a secluded area of the UA forest, expelling a long, exhausted sigh. He felt drained. I had my first kiss. I was so close to something, a real connection with another person. And I blew it. Of course I blew it. I have no experience doing this sort of thing. Several paths led away from this bench spot in a web, vanishing into the trees. He remembered he and Kodai had come by here while running together. That and the party were our only real good times together. What was I thinking? All Might was right. I didn't really know her at all. How do you get to know a girl like that? Surely it takes a bigger extrovert, a better people person than I am capable of being. I'm not good enough for her. Why, oh why, does she have to be my type? Even his own thoughts right now were filling him with disgust. He conjured an image of Yui in his head, and that same desperate longing feeling was still there, but mixed in with feelings of self-hatred and inadequacy, like a poison apple, or a toxin. He was supposed to be the next holder of One for All, and he couldn't even start a relationship. She'd even liked him, he'd been certain of it. But after the kiss, she must have changed her mind. He'd slipped up and failed to live up to her expectations. By that metric, how do I expect myself to live up to society's expectations for me? He'd never felt so profoundly in over his head before. He could keep going to class and training and learning lessons about becoming the best hero possible, but there were no classes about dealing with love, about dealing with girls. He felt trapped in a non-starter loop. He would never gain any experience if he didn't start some kind of relationship, and he'd never start a relationship without experience, much less one with the girl he really wanted to be with. He was stuck. Midoriya. Izuku sniffled and lifted his head. Someone was here with him. A floating UA uniform was standing there, about 5 feet from the bench. It was Hagakure. Hagakure. Izuku smiled sadly and averted his eyes. He was too tired to care that much now. You don't want to see me like this. At least it was her, and not one of his close friends like Uraraka or Tsu or Ida. They would be crowding him and worrying over him, and you're right, I don't. Hagakure strolled over and planted herself on the bench next to him. So I'd like to cheer you up if I can. Do you want to talk about it? I can't, he muttered, miserably. I'm sorry. Hey. He felt invisible fingers steeple his chin and lift his head up. Don't apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. He stared at the open space where her head was. He wondered if she was making direct eye contact with him. She smells nice. He opened his mouth, then realized he was about to say I'm sorry again, and closed it. Hagakure giggled, as if she knew what had just happened. It's all right, she said. Please don't think you're a burden on me or anything. I want to help you out, Midoriya. That's what heroes are for. Yeah, but Izuku just kept staring at the spot where her head would be. I shouldn't need a hero. Are you sure? She asked him. A pause. Izuku sniffled and felt himself give up physically. He slouched and swayed, ready to just lay down and sleep and never wake up. Hey, whoa. Arms wrapped around him. Warm, nice, soft arms. He felt Hagakure pull him against her, his head resting on her small shoulder, her chest pressed against his. He got a full whiff of her perfume. Izuku sighed and just let himself relax, sinking into her. Tears flowed silently down his face. He almost opened his mouth to apologize again, and thought better of it. It's okay, Hagakure whispered, rocking him a little. It's okay. Then he felt her lips press against his cheek. Izuku froze for a moment. No, wait, stop. She kissed him again, in the same spot. Just a peck. And again, slightly further down. And again, and again. She was peppering him with kisses, going down his face, then to his chin, then to his neck. Izuku shuddered. He sank deeper into the cuddle she was holding him in. He just wanted to succumb to the comfort that she offered. Hagakure sucked on his neck, hands running through his hair. Then, she released it and moved up to capture his lips in hers. No, I can't. Their lips barely brushed, but it was like an electric shock that mobilized his brain and body. He lifted his hands and pushed her off, gently, but firmly. Hagakure, he said, suddenly feeling very different about this whole situation. What are you doing? She seemed to twitch. You. Izuku wasn't really sure how to react. He'd almost just let that happen. What on earth is wrong with me? For a moment, he thought it was some cruel prank, sprung by Hagakure and Ishido. But no, they wouldn't do something like this, would they? They weren't like the girls from his middle school. Hey, managed a smile. I can't, he told her, feeling very strange, but not bad. I'm sorry, Hagakure. If you just did that because you really wanted to, and wanted to with me then I can't return it. She remained still and silent for a long moment. Then, I know, she muttered. I'm sorry, too. I can't believe myself. I just just totally took advantage of you when you're feeling horrible. I'm the worst. Izuku wasn't sure what to say to that. He'd never been in this situation before. Hagakure, I won't say I forgive you right away, or that was just fine. I'm really kind of out of it right now. But, I will say that I think I know how you feel. How long have you liked you? She finished, at a guess. A long time. Too long. I realized that when I saw you getting close with her, and I think I went a little crazy. You let the feelings poison you, he mumbled. You you can't let them do that. The reason you're upset, said Toru. Is it because of her? If she hurt you, She suddenly stood up. No, Izuku said firmly. You will do nothing. The invisible girl wilted again. You're you're right. I'm really sorry, Midoriya. I can tell that you don't like me in that way. But I want you to feel better and be happy. Honestly, Izuku sat up a little straighter. I do feel a little better, I think. My head feels clearer. What happened? Hagakure asked. To make you feel so down in the first place. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it. But yeah. It's about Kodai. I didn't. Toru paused, and perhaps gulped. I didn't make you cheat on her, did I? If it had been cheating, it would have been entirely my fault, Izuku mumbled, realizing it himself. Since you had no idea. But no, I don't think it counts, since well, we're not together yet, I don't think. Yet. Hagakure repeated the word. Yeah. Maybe we won't ever be, now. I really screwed up. Well, Toru rocked back and forth on her toes. I hope that whatever path you end up on makes you happy, Midoriya. That's what I want. I'm really sorry again. He could hear the utter regret and guilt dripping off her tone. It was almost enough to make him want to forgive her right then. But he knew he couldn't. He was at fault, too. I let it happen. Even though I think I love Kodai, I was ready to just. Now he really knew he wasn't good enough for her. Not mature enough, not prepared enough, not ready. It would be best to give her space. He'd learned that the hard way with Kekken when he was little. And that had turned out well. It had turned out like Kaken. Kodai, I'm sorry, he thought. And he stood up, brushing his pants off. I know what I'm going to do, I think, he said to Hagakure. He looked up and cut himself off. She was gone. Oh, he mumbled. Toru fled down the path, shame hanging over her like a dark cloud. I can't believe I did all that. I'm the worst scum there is. Horrible. How could I have let myself go that crazy? She'd apologized like 3 times, and of course he hadn't forgiven her yet, and it just didn't feel any better. At all. I should go find Kodai and tell her the truth. Apologize to her too. No, I have no idea what happened between them. I have no idea how she'd react right now. The best thing to do would be to just fade into the background again. Give everyone space, let them forget about her. It was easy enough, she'd done it before. No, I ought to atone. I have to make it up to them somehow. But what can I do? How can I fix the damage? She wasn't sure. But she'd said she wanted to make Izuku happy, and she'd meant it. Even if it wasn't with her, she would get those two together, no matter what it took. No matter what stood in their way. Nito Monoma's head spun. He'd seen the whole thing, though he'd wanted to run. It was like his feet had been planted. He'd seen the intimate moment between Midoriya and Hagakure, and then the ensuing fallout. He'd seen the invisible girl flee and seen Midoriya look around, wondering where she'd gone. Then he'd finally fled himself. So, he thought, now what? Hagakure had made her move. And it had clearly had some kind of effect on Midoriya, but mostly it had kind of fizzled out. How could he capitalize on it? Monoma hadn't filmed anything he'd seen or anything like that. Such scummy behavior was beneath even him. But there was another piece of very physical, very visual evidence of what had just happened. Oddly enough, with Monoma's position as an observer, he was the only one of the 3 who'd noticed it. It was sitting right there on Midoriya's neck. Yui trudged back into the dorm. Ryuko, Itsuka, and Setsuna were all sitting on the couch nearby. They all looked up. How did it go? Setsuna asked excitedly, getting to her feet and hopping over. Give her some space, Set, Itsuka scolded. Ryuko blinked dubiously. Is everything okay? She asked. Yui blinked at them. Of course Ryuko noticed something, of the 3 of them. But even she only suspects. Her mask was back up well. They were sure of nothing. She nodded at Setsuna and said, HM. And that was the end of it. Setsuna pouted. I see. You don't want to give me any juicy details right now. Have it your way, girl. I'll be going upstairs, she said. Want to change out of this outfit? All right, said Itsuka. We'll be here. Setsuna hummed agreement. Ryuko just stared with slightly narrow eyes. Yui passed their couch and went on toward the stairs. A disaster. A complete, utter disaster. And it's all my fault. I clogged up like a blocked drain, and got so desperate to unclog that I shattered my mask entirely. And he saw the real me. The me that everyone hated. The me I've never shown to anyone at UA. How could she have been so dumb? Maybe it wasn't too late. If she found him and apologized, and said all the right words and nothing more and no wrong ones the most careful speech possible. Maybe. That will take time. I cannot rush it. We'll need a couple of days to sit on it. Can't go now. She would fix this, though. She felt obligated to. Because I do think I love you, Izuku Midoriya as silly as it sounds. I cannot let this go. Izuku didn't notice the hickey until he was in the middle of brushing his teeth. His sleep shirt hung low on his shoulders, bearing the red mark clear as day on his neck. He inhaled sharply, almost swallowing a ton of toothpaste, and hacked it down into the sink. Then he looked back up at himself in the mirror, heart pounding, a panicked expression marking his reflected face. Hagakure did this. Oh my god, how could she have done that? She wasn't entirely at fault, Izuku. You know that you could have stopped her. You let this happen, too. Kodai probably already thought he was a pathetic coward, so how would she react if she saw this thing on his neck that was clearly not from her? He was doomed. Completely doomed. Done for. His palm completely covered the mark, but he couldn't just walk around with his hand on his neck constantly. He wasn't cool enough to pull off the look. I could ask one of the girls to cover it up with foundation but no. Uraraka, Tsu, Momo, and Ashido would all think it was from Kodai, and he would either have to lie to them, or tell the truth and risk being slapped and ostracized. I could ask Hagakure for some, surely she'll feel like she owes me. Wait, Hagakure would have no foundation. She was invisible. Izuku face-bombed. And I told him that couldn't possibly be right, because on the order it said. Kaminari's voice, approaching the bathrooms. Okay, time to really panic. If Kaminari of all people saw this, it was over for Izuku. OVER. Hurriedly, Izuku improvised pulling his shirt up over his shoulders and neck then further over his head, lifting his arms, as if in the midst of taking it off. He heard 2 sets of footsteps round the corner and come up to the sinks. Whoa, Midoriya. Siro's voice. Getting shirtless for us. Well, we've certainly seen worse. He could just barely see the 2 boys through the cotton of the shirt. Phew. He coughed. Yeah, I'm just gonna. Izuku walked hurriedly past them, pretending to struggle with the shirt but in reality trying to hold it in place. He bumped into the doorframe, let out an oof of pain, spun, and went down the hallway. Midoriya. Kaminari called after him. Huh, that was weird. Weirder than usual, anyway, said Ciro. Yeah, screw you both. Izuku pulled the shirt back down after he got back into his room, and sighed, leaning against the doorframe. What am I supposed to do then? He eyed his uniform, laid out on his bed. He picked it up and walked over to the mirror, putting the blazer back on and buttoning it up. With the blazer as he usually had it, the hickey was partially covered. Experimentally, Izuku flipped the collar up a little. It was completely covered now. Still, people might wonder why the change to my collar. Everyone in both our classes is so damn nosy. Maybe it was an inevitability that he'd get exposed. Maybe it would be better to come clean right now. Everyone hating me or hating me later. Wow, what a great set of choices. Izuku sighed, threw the blazer back off in disgust, and wilted onto his bed. Kodai ... Her face appeared in his mind again. Poisonous feelings swirled in his heart, so much that it felt like it actually ached for her. I blew it, huh? I completely utterly blew it. He still had to go through with his plan, though. He had to give her a day or two of separation from him, prepare and work out an apology, then go up and apologize profusely, then say he would give her more space. He didn't expect her to suddenly want to go out with him again or anything, just because he'd said sorry. The apology was just because it was the nice thing to do. Izuku knew he couldn't save himself any more than that. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve, he thought. What an awful ending to the year. Wake up. Yui stirred, smacking her lips. Her dark hair splayed out over her eyes. She blew it aside as she sat up. Her whole body was tingly. She felt like shit and did not recall why. Oh yeah, Midoriya hates me. That's why. Ryuko was standing next to her bed. You've slept in, she observed. Yui wiped crust from her eyes and gave her best friend a lingering look. How did you get in here? She asked plainly. Ryuko pointed at the door. Yui deadpanned. It was unlocked. MMPH, Yui murmured in a dismissive tone. She pulled the covers off herself and started to stand, moving past Ryuko. The other girl took a sidestep to stay in front of her. Yui looked up at her and blinked in annoyance. What happened on your date? Ryuko asked. Nothing good, I'm certain. Yui swallowed and averted her eyes sideways. I could be exhausted from how great of a time I had, she muttered. No, Ryuko was too observant. Way too observant. Yui didn't want to deal with this right now. Why was Ryuko able to get away with being so worrisome, when whenever Yui tried it, she ruined everything? But she couldn't bring herself to be mad at her friend. We kissed, she said flatly. Ryuko gasped. For a moment, a bright, jubilant, Setsuna-like expression crossed her face. Oh my god, Yui. I know you wouldn't want me to tell the others, but like. Yui shot her a withering, angry glare. Okay, what happened after that, then? Ryuko crossed her arms. I was the one who kissed him ... and then we just kinda ... did and ... talk about it. Yui half-whispered. It was unbearably awkward just to think of the situation. Ryuko closed her eyes. Yui ... are you serious? Yeah. Was he ... did he seem upset that you'd done that? Could it be that we've misinterpreted him this whole time? No, Yui interrupted. No, it was. I was just too scared. Then, he sort of ... fell. She winced. Ryuko raised an eyebrow. Fell. Izuku Midoriya fell. Like, he fell over. There were some rocking chairs ... and wind ... oh, it doesn't matter. Yui rubbed her arm with a dark expression on her face. But, I tried to help him up, and... he got spooked, didn't he? He got spooked and ran off, just like when he handed you that notebook. Yui nodded. Ryuko was always so good at filling in the gaps. Do you think he's mad at you? He is. Yui, don't be stupid. He's not mad at you. You don't know. She was unable to keep the edge out of her voice. You weren't there. But I know Midoriya. Well, sort of. Why would he be mad? If anything, he's probably beating himself up over this. You need to go to him, and... Ryuko stepped forward and poked Yui in the chest. You need to sort this out. You're not going to be able to keep a boyfriend if you can't talk to him. He's not my boyfriend. And he won't ever be if you don't. I know. Yui said sharply, raising her voice as high as it was ever likely to go. Ryuko sprang backward as if she'd been struck. Sorry ... but I know, Ryuko. I'm going to talk to him, it's just... She looked at herself in her mirror, and moved her hair behind her ears. I'll probably just make things worse ... and no one likes a worrywart. There was a long pause. Yui kept looking at herself in the mirror, not really paying attention to Ryuko. Then, the ghost girl said, Does that mean you don't like me, then? In a surprisingly vulnerable tone. Yui whirled in alarm, her eyebrows raised. There was hurt swimming in Ryuko's eyes. I didn't mean it like thaw. Yui, Ryuko said firmly, drawing herself up like a bowstring. I don't know what happened to you. What made you get like ... how you are, around most people? You never would tell me. But ... you can't let that define you forever. I won't, Yui thought. I'm becoming a hero instead. I don't have to think about middle school anymore. I'm not letting it define me. I'm just ... just choosing ... to be careful. Around people. That's all. She sighed. Itsuka and Setsuna are gonna want details, she muttered miserably, not even fully talking to Ryuko. Yes. Do you want to tell them the truth, or do you want to put the mask on? Yui's heart skipped a beat. Goosebumps crawled up her arms. She looked into Ryuko's eyes. The other girl seemed fully serious. You're the one who wears a mask with your costume, she said, attempting a subtle playful tone. Ryuko smiled a little. Okay, do whatever you think is best then, I guess. But if you need my help with anything, please ask for it. I doubt I'm ever gonna get a boyfriend, so living vicariously through you is my best option. The two girls shared a bit of laughter, and Yui felt a little better, almost ready to face the day, even. New Year's Eve passed by. There had been so many events in the dorms the past few weeks that both classes decided to just take it easy for that night, staying in their respective spheres. No one in class actually knew where Izuku had been while he was out with Yui. He had not told anyone, even his friend group. Not because he'd been trying to keep a secret, but just because there'd been no chance in between when he'd come up with the idea while leaving All Might's office and actually going on the outing. He was happy for the circumstances now, though, because no one was questioning him. He was able to act reasonably normal. No one asked about his collar, either. A few times, it felt like Hagakure was watching him, but she seemed more subdued than before, as well. Izuku sensed he'd probably need to talk to the invisible girl eventually, too. Should we go see if Class B wants to do anything? Kirishima asked at some point late in the night. Yaoyorozu sighed and leaned her head back over the top of the couch, eyes closed. Let's just ... she replied sleepily. Let's just chill. Ashido pouted. Oh come on, Yaemomo. That's not fair to certain people in the room. She then glanced over at Izuku, eyes glowing with mirth. Izuku laughed nervously. Haha ... it's fine. If everyone's just too out of it, then. He felt Tsuyu watching him from his left, very intently. Mina had moved on, talking to Kirishima about something. But Tsuyu was not breaking her stare. She knows something's up. Izuku was about to turn intently away from her, nervously ignoring it like he usually would ... but suddenly, annoyance ballooned up in his mind. Can I help you, Asui? He asked in a slightly confrontational tone, turning fully toward her. Tsuyu's already big eyes widened in shock. Ribbit. I was just ... Then please don't look at me like that. Her mouth twitched. Sorry, Midoriya-chan. Ida was sitting nearby and raised his eyebrows in surprise. Midoriya, you're acting quite short. Is there a problem? My problem is that you people are always asking if there's a problem. I'm fine, he answered, more gently. Just tired. Liar, said Bakugo, walking behind the couch. Mina and Kirishima broke off their conversation and looked at him. Midoriya turned and looked, too. Kako, Deku's sick of you all getting into his business, and rightfully so. You're all nosy as fuck. Don't think you're being subtle about anything you say, Ashido. Mina opened her mouth and closed it, as if working through what he'd just said in her brain. I've been trying. I apologized to him for what happened at the first party. Kaken, that isn't necessary to say, Izuku said, even though secretly he knew Bakugo had gotten right to the heart of his annoyance. Probably because that's exactly how he feels all the time. I'm not mad at anyone, really. Well, aren't you a saint? I certainly wouldn't be in your position. This is why I walked away when you asked me about girl problems or whatever. Bagging a chick should be a personal matter. Kirishima snorted. What? It's just ... your wording. I'm sorry again, Midoriya-chan, Sue repeated. It's not like we mean to be ... no see ... it's just. I know, he said, wanting to reassure her. Tsuyu was rarely visibly down about something, but when she was, it was usually his fault. Kamino. It's fine, Sue. Really. Sue looked like she wanted to say something more, but she just swallowed and nodded. Nearby, Ada leaned back, as if letting the situation go. Good. I can't ask them to help me anymore. I have to fix this myself. Me and me alone. Meanwhile, Class B was similarly lazing around in their own common room. How did it go? Setsuna asked Yui. Not well, Yui answered plainly. But we're going to figure it out. I'd rather not discuss any more right now. Setsuna opened her mouth in shock to protest, but Itsuka put a hand on her shoulder. She closed it again. All right, Yui. We're here if you need us, Itsuka added. The students woke up in a new year the next morning. Returning to class proved difficult at first, especially for the lazier students, but Izuku was already back in the swing of things. Looking as bright as ever, sensei. Ashido said to Aizawa when he walked into their homeroom that morning. It's not too early for me to fail you. Meanwhile, in the next room over, Vlad King shuffled his papers. Welcome back, he said gruffly to Class B. I trust that everyone had a productive winter break. Most certainly, said Shizaki, folding her hands. Despite the cold weather, I managed to grow several. Setsuna flicked her in the back of the head. Not that kind of productive, Mary Magdalene. Shizaki apparently found this very offensive, and refused to speak to Setsuna for the rest of the day. Setsuna complained about this to Itsuka and Yui. But Yui was deep in her thoughts. Izuku, I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart about what happened and I really want to try again. No, I can't just call him by his first name out of the gate. What am I thinking? ... She never shuts up about. Setsuna cut herself off. Yui, your hand is on your forehead. What are you doing? Who's Yui? Itsuka just sighed. During Class A's morning training, Kaminari got overzealous and accidentally punched Shoji in the face. Aizawa made him clean up the training area instead of having the robots do it. Shiro and Mina wouldn't stop laughing. The best part, Siro wheezed, holding his chest and bent over, was how Shoji just stood there. Not even a flinch. Minda added, howling. Shoji shrugged. It didn't hurt that much. Aizawa-sensei, you don't have to punish him. Kaminari kept sweeping with the singular broom he was given, his eye twitching. Thanks Shoji you're my new best friend, he said through gritted teeth. Mina just laughed harder. Deku, said Uraraka pointedly. It's our turn next. Didn't you have some new stuff you wanted to show off? Did I? Meanwhile, inside Izuku's head, I'm really sorry for running off, Kodai. I just got scared that no. I can't say I got scared. But it's probably already unsalvageable anyway. Unknowingly, he'd begun to mutter. Several of the class noticed. Momo began stealthily creating little Izuku dolls and balancing them on top of his head without him noticing, a deadpan expression on her face. He shook his head hard and they all cascaded off of him. Ashido snorted. Huh. Izuku blinked. Welcome back to Earth, said Todoroki. Later, with Class B, Awase ate some bad shrimp at lunch and lost control of his quirk, accidentally fusing himself to a window. Shishida tried to help him get unstuck, yelling at somebody to go get a teacher. Kaibara laughed and took pictures. Yui just watched the scene, holding her books against her chest, the large window behind her, casting sunlight onto her back. But if I don't say what he wants to hear immediately, or if I don't put him at ease, he might just run off immediately. This is complicated. I don't think I understand the joke. Todoroki's voice. Yui looked up. Walking up the hallway was the group commonly known as the Deku Squad. Ada, Todoroki, Uraraka, Asui, and of course, Midoriya himself. Uraraka was about to explain the pun to Todoroki when all five of them noticed what was going on. Izuku blinked. Shishida was trying to pull Awase off the window. The welding quirk user appeared to be about to puke, his cheek completely stuck to the glass. Ada gasped. Shishida, what's happening? I'll get help. Kaibara was still taking pictures when Tsuyu walked up and snatched his phone away. Be useful, ribbit. Most of the Class B boys were terrified of Tsuyu for some reason. A few other students were watching from nearby. Izuku was about to keep walking when he noticed her. Yui was standing there, backlit by the sun coming in through the window. Her arms were folded, hugging her books to her chest. A line of glow ringed her dark hair, one foot slightly in front of the other in a stable, confident posture. Izuku's heart flipped over. She's so pretty. She's so pretty. I'm hopeless. Her blue eyes widened at him. Yui noticed Izuku right as Ada dashed off to find a teacher. His sleeves were rolled up, showing off his forearms, subtly corded with muscle. The sunshine from the window behind her cast onto the side of his face. The shadows sharpened his profile and made him look more mature. His collar was flipped up too, adding to the effect. And his freckles seemed to dance beneath those jade eyes of his. She was more enchanted with him than ever. And of course she had to realize it after she'd already messed everything up. They made eye contact. Izuku opened his mouth, and two things happened at once. One, Shishida finally managed to wrench Awase off the window, hard enough so they both went tumbling backward onto the floor, forcing Kaibara into a hasty retreat. Two, Todoroki started laughing really loud. Oh, he boomed. I get it, Uraraka. The spell had broken. Yui looked away and hurriedly walked back down the hallway, still clutching her books close to her. She felt a burning sensation trail out behind her as she went, like a blaze of emotions. She wants to avoid me, Izuku thought. Of course, was he ever actually going to get a chance to apologize? After an exhausting afternoon of hero training, Izuku was ready to just collapse on his bed and fade away. But fate had other plans. Midoriya, lunch rush is feasting us all in the cafeteria, as a welcome back meal. We should all be going. Okay. When 2 hours, 7 p.m. Got it. He lifted up a weak thumbs up, without ever looking at Ada. At 7 sharp, the five friends walked into the cafeteria. To Izuku's surprise, the round tables had been largely shoved off to the side, and a long table had been set up in the center. A lot of Class B and A were already sitting down. Izuku spotted Takage, shoveling food into her mouth with a detached hand. She waved with the other one. Deku Squad, she said with a mouthful. Come join us. Itsuka bopped her lightly on the head. Don't be so crude, she said. But yes, you're more than welcome. Ada thanked her and they all sat down, scrambling for spots at the long table. Ashido and Hagakure had taken up the spots next to Setsuna and Itsuka, but several of the seats across from them were not taken. Todoroki and Uraraka sat down, and then Izuku, right across from Setsuna. She swallowed her food and grinned. Hey, Green. What's up? Nothing much. Other Green. Izuku's eyes widened. Why did I say that? Takage just laughed. Ada had been called over by Shishida, and after apologizing to his friends and receiving a bright "it's fine" from Uraraka, went over to sit with other people further down the table. Tsuyu walked all the way around and took the spot by Kendo and Yanagi on the opposite side, pointedly leaving the seat on Izuku's right wide open. Izuku wilted a little. I must have hurt her feelings before man. What's the matter with me? Nice of Lunch Rush to just put the food out in the center of the table, Todoroki commented, leaning forward and taking some noodles out of a bowl. It's like a proper feast. Uraraka, meanwhile, was horrified. Doesn't the food go bad, sitting out like this? You just gotta eat it fast enough, said Takage. Or you could store some in those cute chipmunk cheeks of yours. She winked. Uraraka blushed. Izuku listened to the conversation quietly, getting some pork for himself, and waiting on more food to be passed down this way. This is nice, at least. The cafeteria had a pleasant active buzz, and what they were doing now felt very communal. Izuku suspected that these dinners were some plot by Nezu to get them all to feel more like a family, but who wanted to think about that right now? He felt a presence nearby. Takage looked up and waved someone over. Yui, open seat. She pointed at the spot next to Izuku. Midoriya froze. Then, he sensed rather than saw her sit down. A familiar fragrance, one that reminded him of the movie night, brushed past his nose. Yui Kodai began to casually scoop food onto her plate, her usual expression plain to see. It seemed like a small fraction of the conversational noise had died. Yanagi was looking on with a raised eyebrow. Tsuyu was watching too, but more subtly. And who knew where Hagakure was looking? Well, this is a situation, Midoriya thought. His inner voice sounded like a squeak. He felt sweat trickle down his neck and pass over the hidden hickey. It's good, right Yui? Itsuka was saying. Kodai chewed slowly, cutely. HM. She nodded in agreement, smiling a little. Izuku's heart flipped again. Todoroki prodded him. Midoriya, pass the salt. Izuku gulped. It was going to be a long, long dinner. The dinner continued. The group of people vested in their particular conversation was 5 wide on both sides. On one side of the table, the order went, Ashido, Uraraka, Todoroki, Izuku, Yui. On the opposite side, beginning across from Ashido, Hagakure, Kendo, Takage, Yanagi, Tsuyu. So, Takage began, still chewing, everyone looking forward to the new year. Murmurs of pleasant assent and yes echoed around the immediate vicinity. I know we have to do a lot of agency and business stuff this year, though, said Uraraka. That kinda scares me a little. Kendo set her chopsticks down. Don't your parents own a construction company, Uraraka? Where'd you hear that? Oh, is it not true? Kendo raised her eyebrows. It is true. Just wondering where you heard it, Uraraka mumbled, taking another bite of her food somewhat grumpily. Izuku laughed nervously. Uraraka-san, we've told you before ... You don't need to feel bad about that. This is true, Todoroki put in. Everyone needs buildings. Takage and Ashido both snorted. I really wish people wouldn't laugh at everything I say. Stop saying funny things then, Ribbit, Tsuyu told him. Uraraka still looked grumpy. Deku, you don't really get it. Kendo opened her mouth to say something else, but then, Yui spoke up, and Izuku froze. Someone telling you to stop feeling a certain way doesn't make you actually stop feeling that way, she breathed. Yanagi whistled. Takage laughed and clapped her hands. True enough, Yui. But yeah, Uraraka, I don't think we care, at least. And I don't really know how anyone found out, either ... But yeah. Running a hero agency is probably very different from running a construction company. Anyway, Yanagi said. Unless you're a hero that's always causing collateral damage, Izuku muttered. Next to him, he heard Yui exhale a little. His heart skipped a beat. Was that ... Did she think that was funny? It was growing harder and harder to focus on anything going on. Ashido and Hagakure had somewhat broken off from the main conversation, and were talking to each other about something else on the end. Izuku's eyes passed over Hagakure's, and once again wondered where she was looking. So many people I need to talk to. Oh, why couldn't I have mustered up the courage before we got stuck in this group setting? Then, at least I could eat my dinner in peace. Whether I'm happy with the results of the conversation or sad, at least I'd be at peace. Todoroki was asking Takage a question. Your ... My parts, Takage laughed. How do I levitate them? The honest answer is, I don't know. It's almost like I have a second quirk, right? And they regenerate, too, Yanagi muttered. You have 3 quirks. That's just how mutant types can be, Ribbit. My own quirk manifests in quite a few ways, though not all of them are as useful to combat as Takage's. I guess that's why you're recommended, Ribbit. Takage laughed again, though this one rang hollow. I dunno. It's gotten harder and harder to remember why I was recommended in the first place. I guess now that we're about to be 3rd years, those first few head starts don't matter anymore. Everyone who was going to pass me in skill has done so already. Todoroki nodded sagely. I have felt similarly. At the beginning of school, it felt as if I was holding a line that no one had passed yet. But everyone else improved with their quirks much faster than me. Take Midoriya, for example. Well, Izuku laughed nervously. I'm a bit of a special case, aren't I? Oh right. Kendo pointed her chopstick at Izuku. Your quirk manifested right before the entrance exam, didn't it? More or less, yeah. That explains all the insane developments you've had. Like that whip thing you showed during our first class battle. It was almost like a separate quirk. You know how quirks are. Izuku had long since gotten used to brushing off questions related to One for All, even if people didn't believe him. I thought my quirk was just super strength since that was how it initially manifested. But apparently when it strengthens up it goes into that whip form ... It's not uncommon for a quirk misdiagnosis to happen, and then the power is recontextualized by some later development. Usually it's in a child, but since mine was later. Yanagi nodded. There was a boy in my kindergarten class who made origami swans without even touching the paper. His quirk was initially diagnosed as being able to control paper, but then he made one out of some fence wiring. Turned out his quirk was just the ability to fold anything. Uraraka shuddered. That's scary. Hope he didn't become a villain or something. Yanagi shrugged. I don't even remember his name. You could probably become a hero with a quirk like that, Izuku said, tapping his chin. You'd have to get creative, but the possibilities ... if weight is irrelevant. Then the ability to fold concrete or rebar would absolutely come in handy for rescue situations, and he devolved into a muttering storm, until suddenly, a finger reached out and bopped his nose twice. Beep beep, Midoriya, Kodai said in her neutral tone. Izuku flushed a deep red. Everyone else at the table giggled. Classic, said Ishido. She and Hagakure had rejoined the discussion. Trademarked, even. I didn't know there was such a solution to stopping his muttering, Todoroki said, in awe. Does that mean we can start using this all the time? He looked back and forth between Uraraka and Tsuyu. Tsu's lips danced upward in a faint smirk. No, it might only work if it's Kodai-chan. Ribbit. Ishido and Takage shared a glance. Kendo rolled her eyes. Izuku's brain flipped over and over again. Yui had retracted her finger, but he could still feel her presence. So close. Surely she wouldn't have done that if she wanted nothing to do with him. Could it be that there was still a chance? Inwardly, Yui Kodai was freaking out once again. What is wrong with me? Sitting next to him, outwardly laughing at his jokes, touching his nose. I wanted things to be normal again. I wanted that so badly. Imagine a scenario where her and Midoriya could just be comfortably holding hands right now, and everyone around them would accept it. Oh, Midoriya and Kodai. They're dating. They're a happy couple, huh? We wish them the best. And ... yeah. Midoriya was frozen up. Of course he was. He had no idea what she wanted. She'd failed to communicate anything whatsoever. And now she was throwing out all these mixed signals. I would have liked to talk to him one-on-one, but with all I've just done, I've probably just spooked him off even more. Her overwhelming feelings, the very things motivating her to do all this, were also the things standing in her way, lowering her inhibitions, destroying the careful persona that she'd created. Unfortunately, the people around them were just making it worse. You've been different lately, Kodai, Ishido was saying, with that patented golden smug expression. Maybe by the end of the year we'll have made a party gal out of you. Yui gripped the table to keep her hand from shaking. She felt as if she was nearing a panic attack. She could feel Izuku's eyes on her, and that made it worse. Setsuna snorted. Maybe if we tag team it. I've been working solo on her for years and not made much progress. Plus, these two are always stopping me. She pointed back and forth between Itsuka and Ryuko. Itsuka flipped her ponytail over her shoulder. Only because we have her better interests at heart. You're always up to something. The mood was now uncomfortable. Yui's vision wavered. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to. Why did I have to be so impulsive? He was muttering and being cute and I just thought it would be funny and... Besides, you know how she hates being the center of attention. Itsuka was still saying. Let's not be so loud, Ribbit. Yeah, Todoroki put in. Calm down. Setsuna huffed through her lips. I am calm, she said. Cool as a cucumber, green. She nodded at Midoriya. It's these two that want to baby her all the time. No, Ryuko protested. That's not true. Itsuka put in. I think, Izuku said, suddenly and forcefully, pushing his voice louder than the others, hard enough to make everyone shut up. That you should stop talking about Kodai as if she isn't here. Yui's grip on the table released. She sniffed and felt a single tear escape her eye. She had angled her head down, letting her hair fall over her face a bit, so she was pretty sure the only person who saw was Isui, directly across the way. Yeah, Itsuka breathed, her voice quieter. Sorry, Yui. You're right, Midoriya. Yeah, Setsuna muttered. Sorry, Yui. Mask on. Head up. It's all right, she said flatly. I want to take his hand and squeeze it and never let go. Then ... an annoyance pricked at the back of her brain. He's just stood up for me, like I would have stood up for Seiya in a heartbeat. Why is he allowed to stand up for me, but if I try to help him up, I ruin everything? Yui was mulling over this confusion as the conversation carried on. Had Ryuko been right? Was she vastly misinterpreting the situation? Or, little did Yui know how close she was to arriving at the truth. Because like Seiya, a girl he barely knew the existence of, Izuku was cursed by pride. A pride of a sneakier sort, the type that paradoxically affects the people with the lowest self-esteem and builds up toxically until Izuku felt a hand on his shoulder. Tsuyu and Uraraka had both been talking, and cut themselves off. Izuku turned around slowly and looked up. It was Nito Monoma. Boom. He coughed. Do you need something? Monoma's expression wasn't smug, or even remotely deranged like usual. His analytical blue eyes studied Izuku. And then ... his fingers lowered his collar, exposing the hickey fully to everyone at the table. What's this, Midoriya? He asked. Hey. Tsuyu raised her voice and leaned forward, a rarity. Don't get in his personal space like that. She had leaned far enough forward to notice it from her angle. Ouhh, Ribbit. Izuku's face twitched. He almost looked over at Hagakure and stopped himself. He could feel heat traveling up through his head. Instead of snatching Monoma's fingers away, He slowly removed the boy's hand, trying to keep his composure. He swallowed, averting his eyes and shaking a little. Setsuna whistled. You got a good find for once, Monoma. I hate that you were probably spying on us, but maybe Yui's already a party gal after as she looked over at Yui and cut herself off. Uraraka, Ishido, Yanagi, and Kendo all followed her gaze. Yui was staring at him with wide, betrayed eyes. The hickey was clear for her to see. Izuku felt his heart plummet. He wanted to close his eyes and float away. It was all over. This is a nightmare. I'm not here. I'm not here. I'm not. You didn't give him this, did you? Monoma asked Kodai. Slowly, Yui shook her head. He swept backward away from Izuku, as if disgusted. I told you guys. He boomed. I told you guys that nothing good would come from fraternizing with Class A, and now. Hold on, Todoroki interrupted. I don't really get it. Midoriya and Kodai aren't even dating. So, what's the big problem? You didn't see them. Monoma stepped forward again. They literally went on a date last week. Uraraka looked at Izuku with a confused, almost betrayed expression. Is that true? Yeah, sort of. The answer came from Setsuna. Yui told us all about it, anyway. Well, not all about it, but Itsuka and Ryuko nodded in agreement, but then the former looked up at Monoma. Back off, she told him roughly. You're causing a scene and making him distressed. It was true. More people from other ends of their table and even other tables were starting to notice. The cafeteria buzz had died down to whispers and murmurs. The flashes of 1,000 glancing eyes burned the back of Izuku's neck. He wanted to bolt, but he couldn't. He was frozen in his seat. I should hope that he's distressed. Monoma said roughly. Listen to me, Kodai. I know you probably don't care coming from me, but just listen to me this one time. This guy is bad news. I'm only telling you for your own good, alright? Back off, Monoma. Tsuyu repeated. If this needs to be settled, then it can be settled in private, ribbit. Besides, Uraraka laughed nervously. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. It doesn't make any sense, though, Ryuko said. Her eyes pierced Izuku. Where did you get the hickey from? Izuku couldn't bring himself to speak. He had no idea what to do. He could feel Yui drifting away from him, his whole social life collapsing. Midoriya, Uraraka asked, concernedly. You're not helping your case here, dude, Takage told him. If you just say what happened, then. He can't say. Monoma hissed. Because he knows he's caught. Didn't you all notice that he was wearing his collar up? He was trying to hide it from her. From all of you. This innocent anxious act he's got going on is just an act, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of everyone falling for it. Yeah, well, we're sick of you always having it out for our class. Ishido said roughly, standing up to hit him. No, Ishido, don't. Kendo talked her down. Everyone in the room gasped. The pink girl whirled. What? You want to do it yourself? Come on and chop him. You're the only one who can stop him anyway. Itsuka gulped. I don't know if. She leveled her eyes at Izuku. I mean, Midoriya, if you really would just explain. See, Monoma pointed. Even Kendo's on my side. Face it, Class A. We're sick of your shit. Isn't that right, Kodai? I know you like him, which is why I have to tell you for your own good. Yui had gone very, very pale. Izuku only allowed himself to look at her for a moment before tearing his eyes away. He wanted to sink into the floor and never come back out. She squeaked, in a small voice. Toru Hagakure got to her feet. Fuck off, Monoma, she spat. More gasps all over the room. In the distance, Izuku noticed Ada and Shishida getting up, as if they were about to come over and defuse the situation. The blonde boy's eyes widened. And what if I don't? Then I'll tell everyone what your deal is. Ishido was still standing, and turned back to her invisible best friend. Toru, stay out of it. We're only gonna make it worse for our class and Midoriya if. Yeah, you're right, Toru said to Monoma, ignoring Ishido. Midoriya was hiding it. It was completely hidden. So how did you know it was there? Monoma's face twitched. You spied on us, didn't you, you little weasel, Toru snarled. I knew you did. I knew it. You saw it all, didn't you? Always sneaking and trying to dig up dirt on us instead of letting us work things out ourselves. And now you're giving both of them, these sweethearts, she gestured to Izuku and Yui, a goddamn panic attack, for something that's my fault. Ishido's fist went limp, as if stunned. Kendo and Takage both looked up at the invisible girl. That's right. Hagakure buffed up her chest. I was the one who gave Midoriya the hickey. Tsuyu and Uraraka gasped. What? Ishido exclaimed. Yeah. I liked him for a while, and when I saw that his date with Kodai didn't go well, I tried to comfort him. It was my fault. Yui. She looked at the black-haired girl. You can beat me up later if you want. Yui had no idea how to react. She she comforted him. Why would he need comfort? Why? Could it be that Izuku had been unsatisfied with his own behavior during the date, instead of hers? What was she talking about? Of course it could be. Look at him right now. He was in the midst of taking the entire burden on himself, squirming and deer-eyed and vibrating like a tea kettle approaching an explosion. It's that. It's always been that. And if Hagakure put the moves on him, that would make him feel even worse. But Monoma wasn't done. So you admit it. He hissed, pointing at the invisible girl. Of course it was from one of you class of harlots. Do you honestly think you can just lead one of us along while you bat your eyelashes at each other the whole time? Do you think we're that gullible? Ada and Shishida are coming, said Tsuyu. Guys, calm down. Several other people had fled the cafeteria, possibly to go get a teacher. Yui's heart raced. Monoma, Izuku was saying doubtfully. As much as I want no one in our class to get their feelings hurt. This really does feel like something that's none of our business, I think. Yes, Ryuko put in. You must give Midoriya, Hagakure, and Yui some space to work things out themselves. And look at you again, Monoma said, his voice dripping with sarcasm and disgust. Talking about them as if they're not here. Yeah, I overheard what Midoriya said before I walked over. So how about it, Midoriya? Why don't you speak up for yourself instead? Anything to say? Ada and Shishida were closing the distance. Yui's brain flipped over and over. Seiya flashed through her head again. I'm fine. I hate you. No one likes a worrywart. Anything to say, Midoriya? Monoma repeated, much louder. You're not going to be able to keep a boyfriend if you can't talk to him. Ryuko's words, carving right through her like a knife. The feelings are why I want to keep the mask and yet they make me lower it. Because, Midoriya, time's a wasting. I can't have a relationship and hide behind a mask. This is who I am, Izuku. If you don't like this version of me, then we're not meant to be anyway. With a rush of adrenaline, Yui slammed her fists into the table and pushed herself up out of her seat. Everyone gasped. Ada and Shishida stopped. All the other girls' heads turned toward her. Midoriya doesn't have to speak to you if he doesn't want to, she said. Monoma snapped backward as if struck. His eyes widened. Even now, you defend him. He spat. That's ridiculous. No, shut up. Ada stepped forward to say something, and Yui held up a hand to stop him. I can handle this, she thought in a rush. Kodai, Monoma said in disbelief. You can't expect me to believe that you actually want to still. Shut up and let me talk, or I'll put you in the hospital, Yui growled. This was all just a big misunderstanding between several of us, and you had nothing to do with it in the first place. I know exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to cause a big enough scene so that Midoriya and I never feel like we can talk to each other again. You don't actually care about helping me, and even if you did, you know we all have good intentions here. I have good intentions. Midoriya has good intentions. Hagakure ... may have slipped up, but she clearly owns up to it now. It's something we are fully capable of solving ourselves, so we don't need your help. Clearly, you do. Monoma countered. If you're so delusional that you can't, don't you dare call me delusional. She poked him in the chest, taking steps forward, rhythmically forcing him back away from their table. Her lips drawn back past her teeth, her eyebrows arrowed down. I like Midoriya, and Midoriya likes me, and we're gonna figure it out together. Someone from Class A and someone from Class B. That thought scares you so much that you serve up this convoluted nonsense, and you call me delusional. Monoma grabbed her hand and yanked it off his chest, swinging it downward as if he meant to break her arm. A cry escaped her lips. In a millisecond, Izuku had swept up to his feet, his chair screaming backward across the floor from the force of his movement, and he had raised a fist up toward Monoma's face. The blonde boy flinched and released Yui, backing off, putting several feet between them. The two of them stood close together, glaring at him. He looked back and forth between them, panic and anger in his eyes. Is this how it is, then? He demanded. Fine. He backed up a bit. He nearly ran into Ada and Shishida, the former of which tried to reach out and grab his shoulder. I'm going. He brushed him off and stalked out of the cafeteria. Jesus Christ, Setsuna muttered. Itsuka let out a long, low sigh. Midoriya, Ada declared, stepping forward. Are you alright? Uraraka held up an arm to stop him. Yui and Izuku turned toward each other. They looked into each other's eyes for a second, both of them overflowing with emotion, and then they collapsed into each other, holding their foreheads together, hugging, gasping for breath. I'm sorry, Izuku was muttering. I'm sorry. No. It's okay. Yui hugged him tighter, resting her head on his shoulder so they could be pressed closer together. I'm sorry, too. Setsuna whistled, and then a bunch of people in the cafeteria started to clap. None of that, thank you, Ada admonished. Yeah, let's all just. Kendo shouted. Move on. Oh, Ada. We're class reps, let's get this under control. The two of them walked off to calm down the cafeteria as the buzz of chatter returned. Yui felt Izuku melt into her, warmth pulsing off of him in waves. She felt herself calming down as they stayed hugging, swaying a little. She hoped she was having the same effect on him. They broke apart slowly, but keeping their hands on the other's forearms. Blue eyes met green. Are you okay, Izuku? She asked, concern filling her expression and tone, and the last shard of her mask fell to the ground and shattered. I'm alright. I'll be alright. His breathing had slowed, but red rose to his cheeks again. You used my first name. Did I? Yui furrowed her eyebrows. Well, it seemed natural enough. How about you use mine too? Setsuna and Ishido cackled. Even Ryuko raised her eyebrows at Yui's boldness. Okay. Izuku forced the name out of his lips. Yui. Then, he grinned, and said it again. Yui. She smiled, too. Stop that, she said, giggling a little. Stop what? You're just ... You're too bright. Bright and infectious. I can't help it. She was still giggling, and finally broke her eyes away from his. Do you want to? Soon. She was still smiling, and lowered her hands off his arms. They both turned around, and saw Hagakure standing there. Her floating uniform shifted back and forth sheepishly. I just wanted to apologize to you both, she said. Kodai, I knew you were courting Midoriya, and I got really jealous and tried to undermine you. And Midoriya, I took advantage of you in a vulnerable state. I'm worse than Monoma, really. There was an awkward silence. Izuku gulped and then said, well, Hagakure, you weren't operating with full knowledge of the situation, either. And I didn't exactly stop you immediately even though I knew I liked Yui and was pretty sure she liked me back, so it was my fault, too. So for that, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to you too, Yui. He bowed. Yui blinked. Well, I'm not really sure how to respond to all this. I've never been in such a situation before. She folded her hands in front of her waist. I know I can at least say, thank you, Hagakure, for owning up to it and standing up for us in front of Monoma. That, at least, was the right thing to do. Hagakure nodded and sniffled. I'm gonna go think about some stuff, I think. I'm coming too, said Ishido, slinging an arm over her invisible friend. We got a lot to talk about, girl. How could you have a crush on Midori and not tell me about it? The two of them walked out of the cafeteria, Ishido chattering Hagakure's ear off. Izuku was still bowing. Yui kicked him in the shins lightly. Get up, you big dummy, she said. He straightened up. We should go talk, he said. Somewhere else he nodded toward the exit of the room. A lot of people were still watching them. Privately, yes, she nodded. The two of them filed out. Uraraka, Tsuyu, Todoroki, Setsuna, Itsuka, and Yanagi all watched them leave. Then, they all looked at each other. 3 Class A students and 3 Class B students. So just to clarify. We were all rooting for them the whole time, right? Yeah, of course. Duh, ribbit. Been waiting for it to happen for what feels like months. I'm glad we can get it all off our chests. That was dramatic, though. Of course it was. Midoriya was directly involved. Oh, stop that. Izuku and Yui stopped in a corner of a hallway, some distance from the cafeteria. It was dark and cozy. Yui sat down on the windowsill, looking out the window serenely. You're so pretty, Izuku blurted. She looked back at him with those enchanting blue eyes, and a mild smile. You're not bad looking yourself. They both laughed a bit, though there was still the pull of tension hidden under there. Izuku sat down on the windowsill, joining her, and took a deep breath. I just wanted to start by saying, I'm sorry for not doing anything after you kissed me, he began. I wanted to, but I just didn't know what to say, and I couldn't. I got really scared, and the longer I hesitated, the more I felt like you were drifting away. And then I fell, and, I don't know, I just kinda broke, I guess. I shouldn't have run off. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, too, she breathed. I thought it was me who should have spoken up. I was the one who initiated the kiss, after all. But I made no effort to communicate further. And when I tried to help you up, I thought you were mad at me for trying to help you. What? Izuku couldn't believe what she was saying. Mad at you? No, not at all. I was worried that you were mad at me. Yui smiled a little. So we were both worried. She seemed fainter, more introspective. We both really want this to work, huh? Him. Izuku coughed. Want ... what to work, exactly. He needed to hear it. They both needed to say it. Izuku, she said. I like you so much. I want to date you. I like you too, Yui. I want to date you, too. She closed her eyes and smiled wider. Yay, God, that was cute. If she wasn't careful, she was gonna give him a heart attack. He confessed. I'm really happy. Me too. They both laughed again. But, Yui, why would I be mad at you for trying to help me up? Her eyes went back to the window. Deep sapphire pools. I just thought you were probably like other boys. Boys don't like to be helped. Pride and all that. Well, that's boys' problem, not yours. Izuku felt a bit uneasy, though. Yui was right in a way. He was vaguely uncomfortable with receiving assistance from her. But it was because of One for All, right? Something he'd one day have to tell her about. But when she'd come to his defense against Monoma, he hadn't felt that at all. Just his love for her soaring through. So maybe there was hope. Maybe down the line this will be an issue I can face inside of myself. With her help. To tell you the truth, Yui half whispered. Do you remember that friend of mine I told you about? Saya. Izuku nodded. We had a really bad fight in middle school and we stopped being friends. Because I was constantly worrying over her and she hated it. That was when I stopped talking to anyone. Izuku's mind stirred with this new information. She felt willing to tell me about that. Clearly a thing that still affects her to this day. He almost wanted to tell her about One for All right now, but couldn't bring himself to do it. That means ... to stand up for me against Monoma. That must have taken a lot of courage, Yui. Recklessly, he took her hand in hers and squeezed it. Thank you for looking out for me. Yui's eyes brimmed with tears. It's what we should do for each other, she muttered. As heroes ... and partners. She squeezed his hand back, and then they stood up. Would you like to head back to the cafeteria? He asked her. She stared out the window. Actually, let's take a walk. Just the two of us. Okay, that sounds lovely to me. The two of them set off to exit the building, still holding hands. Izuku fell into a dream. A weary-looking woman was standing across from him, behind a kitchen counter. She was chopping carrots. She had long, straight black hair, and it seemed like she had been beautiful once. Better finish up, Buttercup, she said in a quirky tone to Izuku. Dinner will be ready soon. Tears were pouring out of the woman's eyes, but she did not seem to notice them. Buttercup, a strange, squawking voice repeated. Buttercup. Izuku looked down at his own hands. They seemed too small. He wanted to give the woman a hug. He tried to walk around the kitchen counter, but it seemed impossibly long, and beyond the fridge was not the rest of the house he'd known. Instead, it was a vast medieval-like hall, with torches and columns and strange whispers coming from the dark. He looked back at the woman. It was Nana Shimura. Izuku blinked. He was positive that she had not been Nana before. The first woman's eyes had been blue. Shimura-sen, he breathed. Izuku. Nana's hands were on her hips, as if he were in trouble. What have you been up to without telling us? Suddenly, he knew the place he was in. The kitchen was gone, and behind him was an arc of thrones. There sat the vestiges, the heroic line of descendants, those crowned with one for all. I've been following my heart, Izuku exclaimed roughly. In dreams like this, he always had a tendency to lose his temper quickly. He was never quite sure why. He felt a horrible creeping presence on the back of his neck. Nana. The thrones were empty. It was not as if the vestiges had disappeared, it was as if they had never been there at all. Only a strange golden light emitted from one, as if All Might's vestige had bothered to linger a moment, leaving behind some otherworldly residue. The voice of Yoichi Shigaraki, the first user, entered Izuku's head. 9, you must, he broke off in a strangled yelp. Izuku went through the white doorway. Beyond was the bank vault, and all for one stood there. His suit crawled with cockroaches. His feet dangled off the floor, but when he turned and saw Izuku, he sank down. Into the floor. Hugh, Izuku declared. What did you do with Tagata-senpai? What am I saying? What how did I get here? Where am I? Come and face me, Izuku Midoriya. All for one cackled. You don't even have a face, Izuku shot back. It was something he never would have said while he was awake. I have your little harlot, 9th. Izuku gasped. Tamura Shigaraki was standing in the Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall, hooded. His hair was shock white beneath the hood. His gnarled fingers were wrapped around Yui's neck. She blinked at Izuku in mute appeal, terror coursing through her perfect pale face. Nana appeared from behind. Come back to me, Tenko. She reached out for him. Izuku's eyes widened. Nana, no. As Shigaraki whirled about, he casually scraped his hand across Yui like she was a bottle carelessly knocked off a table. Her whole form dissolved away, carried by an unknown wind. The mall patrons gasped around them, but stood aside and did nothing. As always, Yui managed to get out before she was gone forever. Anguish wrecked him, sending him to his knees. Tamura was cackling. What do you want, grandmother? He demanded. But Nana was only looking at Izuku. You see, she said. Her grandson was pummeling her from behind, getting angrier and angrier, but she was ignoring him. Izuku felt wet tears roll down his face. He sniffled and watched as she seemed to effortlessly dismiss that which had just taken the love of his life away. Why doesn't it work on you? He demanded. Why did you just get away with everything? I didn't, said Nana softly. I thought I could love a man. I thought I could raise a child. And I couldn't. Images flashed through his head. A man raising his hand to slap his son. A dog being dissolved in a pool of blood. A dark, suited form looming over a crying child in an alleyway. Izuku, remember what happens to those who forsake their duty. I forsake nothing. Izuku screamed. A rushing wind was pushing at him now, making the words harder and harder to say. The thrones reappeared behind Nana. You are a ghost in my head. Nothing more. I don't have to listen to you ... and I don't have to repeat your life. Better that you didn't. It was not just Nana speaking then, but all the others too. Better that you didn't. 9. Shut up. He had never been so angry at them before. You're all dead. You're all dead and buried, and this quirk doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me. The world flipped and snapped apart. Izuku was falling, and then he was rising up in his bed, gasping, drenched in sweat. The covers cascaded away from him. A blue darkness coated the room. Moonlight listed softly through the curtains. A sliver of it touched the corner of an All Might poster, a white triangle on a black rectangle. All was quiet. Then, a knock on his door. Aoyama's voice. Midoriya, are you all right? Aoyama. Just Aoyama. It was only a dream. He was back here in his dorm. I'm fine now, he said shakily. Did I scream? Yes. I think Shinso is awake, too. Oh, tell him I'm sorry, and... Izuku could not find the words. Yeah, he finished lamely. Let me know if you need anything. Soft, retreating footsteps told Izuku that Aoyama had withdrawn. Not the first time he's had to check on me. It was not really spoken about during daylight hours, but Izuku and Takoyami often had what the other boys in the dorm thought of in their heads as episodes during the night. He had talked about it briefly with the bird boy before ... but it was clear that their problems came from completely different sources, and therefore they did not have much to help each other with. Besides, Takoyami had the luxury of being able to tell everyone that his quirk was sentient. The sentience of Izuku's own quirk was still a secret. Almost angrily, like he was rebelling against something, Izuku plummeted back into the softness of his mattress. He slept soundly for another couple of hours. Yui awoke feeling happy and well-rested. Her walk with Izuku last night had been so very nice. There was hard work ahead to be done, but she felt like she could do it. It was an odd feeling, not being stressed. For a moment, her brain even searched for something to worry about. She dismissed it as quickly as possible. I will not self-sabotage this early in the day. She checked her phone. She had her alarm set for 7:30 in the morning, but Izuku must set his for 7, because she had a message from him at 7:06. Good morning, Yui. We may not see each other today, but I hope your day goes amazing. Her heart fluttered. She hoped he could grow more bold about things like this, and even in person maybe. She texted him back, good morning to you too. Have a lovely day. And then thought, we may not see each other today, Izuku. I'll have something to say about that. I plan to see you every day I can. She spent the next half an hour getting ready, and at 8 she went down into the common area for breakfast. The rest of the girls were all downstairs already, except for Setsuna, who was the queen of sleeping in, and last-minute school preparations. Itsuka and Ryuko both noticed her first. Good morning, Yui, said the class president, pouring milk into a bowl of cereal. You look radiant this morning, Ryuko commented. Did you put on different makeup from usual? Yui blinked at that, surprised. I don't have any that's different. Come on, Ryuko shroom, Kinoko put in. Her eyes glittered. Yui's just a taken woman now. She shrooms brighter than the rest of us now. It's not fair, Pony complained. I could be taken if I wanted. Itsuka gave the transfer student a level look. Sure, if you ever decided to pay attention to Monoma's advances. Pony somehow pouted even more. I thought it was kind of funny to string him along for a while. But after what happened yesterday in the cafeteria. Speaking of which, Ibara looked up at Yui. Are you alright? That all seemed rather traumatizing. Yeah, Kinoko put in, suddenly much more serious. I know we're not as close with you. As these two she nodded at Itsuka and Ryuko. But we care about you a lot, Yui. I'm alright, Yui said reassuringly. It had a very happy ending. Kinoko giggled. Oh ho, I suppose it did. We saw you leave the place with him, girl. Pony leaned forward. Did anything happen? Izuku and I just went for a walk. First name basis, too. Ibara exhaled, as if in exhaustion, and made a cross in front of herself. Lord, protect this girl. Help her make the right decisions, please. Yui frowned. This is the most right decision I've ever felt like I made. Itsuka seemed excited. Oh, Yui, that's so good. I'm so happy for you, it's just. She looked around suspiciously. There is still a lot of baggage to be disposed of, if you take my meaning. Pony blinked. I don't understand metaphors unless they're mushroom-related, Kinoko grumbled. She's talking about Monoma, said Ryuko helpfully. He hasn't shown his face down here. They all looked over toward the sofas, where the boys were talking about the upcoming day of training. Monoma was not among them, but neither were some of the other guys like Kamakiri. Does he normally get up early? Yui asked. She genuinely had no idea. Ryuko raised an eyebrow. You're not gonna confront him or anything, are you? Yui thought about that for a second. Not right now. Kinoko giggled again. I like this new you, Yui. It's fun and quirky. Not that I didn't like you before, Shroom. I appreciate it, Yui told her. I know you pretty much got everything out there when you ranted at him last night, said Itsuka, frowning. But I have a lot that I'd like to say to him, anyway. Yui opened her mouth to protest, but Itsuka held up a hand to stop her. I know you don't want me to fight any battles on your behalf, but it's not even about that. It's about the divide between us and the other class, and even a divide within our own class. What sort of schism do you mean? Ibara asked in a hushed tone. Itsuka side-eyed the boys by the sofa. The other girls all followed her gaze. None of them were looking in this direction, but now that Yui thought about it, it was strange that the common room was so evenly divided by gender this morning. At the very least it was normal for Kirawaro to be talking to Kinoko, or Tetsu to be talking to Itsuka. Pretty much all the guys know that Monoma is nuts, but they still get caught up in his class rivalry pretty often. I mean, I get it. We're all pretty naturally competitive, but other bits of Monoma's ideology might be leaking into them too. To be honest, Yui. Itsuka blinked at her piteously. I'm pretty sure they're jealous. Who? Of Izuku. Yui was taken aback. Does someone in our class have a crush on me? No one that I know of besides Setsuna, Ryuko muttered. Kinoko snorted at this. Not jealous like that. Well, sort of. Itsuka looked back at the boys. I think some of them are just uncomfortable that Izuku seemed to just sweep you away. A few might even go so far as to think that it's unfair. Stupid boys, Pony muttered. If they wanted Yui, they should have done something about it. None of them have ever had the balls to ask any of us out. The other girls shifted uncomfortably. They all pretty much knew for a fact that that wasn't true. But apparently no one had bothered to tell Pony about it. Though not recently. Basically all of them had been asked out by some guy or another in Class B at some point. Mostly it had happened toward the start of their first year, before Pony had known much Japanese. This is annoying, Yui said after a moment. They should get over it. I think they will, Itsuka said reassuringly. With time. It's just some irrational guy thing, I think. I mean, I kinda get it, I guess. It's a natural feeling that Monoma just happened to take to the extreme. What do you mean, you get it? Kinoko asked incredulously. It seems irrational to me. Envy is one of our easiest, most natural sins to succumb to, unfortunately, Ibara admonished. Aside from that, Ryuko said with a smug grin. Itsuka's probably imagining how it would feel if someone like Ashido or Hagakure suddenly got with Tetsu. That's not. Itsuka turned red and then stood up abruptly from the counter. I'm going to get my bag from upstairs. The rest of them sat there for a bit, silently eating. Yui said, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We know that, Ryuko told her, patting her on the back. I think Itsuka is right, for what it's worth. They'll get over it in their own boy kind of way. Unless Monoma keeps up his schemes, then. A dark look passed over her face. The class divide might get worse. I suppose that's what Prez wants to put a stop to. Put a stop to what? Setsuna had appeared, still in her dinosaur PJs, yawning. Her hair splayed out everywhere. Ibara wrinkled her nose. We have class in literally 20 minutes. How on earth are you going to make yourself presentable in that time? I do it every morning, angel face. Like magic. Setsuna wiggled her hips as she leaned forward to look into the fridge. Ibara rolled her eyes. Anyway, Setsuna pulled out the jug of orange juice. Just saw Itsuka. On the stairwell. She was fuming. What did y'all do? Nothing. She's decided to do something on her own, I think, said Ryuko. And Monoma still hasn't come down, either. Pony's eyes were narrowed. Something fishy is going on, I just know it. Everyone from Class B walked toward the school together. A lot of the boys were talking among themselves, and the girls were doing the same. But no boy was talking to a girl. Yui picked up on this due to their earlier conversation, and now she couldn't stop thinking about it. And Monoma wasn't present at all. Kodai, a voice asked. Yui looked sideways, and then slightly down. It was Nyaranjiki Shota. He was a kind boy, and often got put into exercises with her and Ryuko due to the synergy between all their quirks. Are you okay? Shota asked. He had a permanent nervous frown. Yui couldn't remember seeing him smiling. Which is no better than me, I guess. Some of the boys had cut off their conversation and were watching Shota interact with her. I see. They all agreed on something, but left him out of it. Or maybe they're just using him to test the waters. In any case, she didn't like that they were leaving Shota out to dry, so she resolved to be as sweet to him in this conversation as possible. I'm feeling great, she replied. How are you this morning? Oh, Shota blushed, which she hoped meant he was just surprised at her questioning and not that he liked her or something. I'm doing good, I suppose. I was just worried since all that happened last night, and all. Yui made herself smirk a little. You should be more concerned about Monoma. He's probably the one who isn't doing great. Yeah. The other boys were now almost completely silent, walking behind them like a pack of ravenous vultures. Shota was frowning, seemingly unaware. I don't know what his deal is. I've never really subscribed to his schemes, for what it's worth. I guess he's probably just moping in his room. HM. Well, I'm pretty much already over it. Yui straightened her bag on her shoulder. Let's just have a good term as heroes in training. Shota brightened a bit at that. You seem really happy, Kodai. I'm glad. For a while there you were more disconnected than ever. Is it Midoriya that's done this? I suppose you could say that. But I also made some realizations about myself, too. Cool. Shota grinned. That's great. I don't know if, like you guys are together or something. I don't know much about that kind of stuff. We're together, she clarified helpfully. Oh, in that case, I wish you guys the best. Me too, said Honuki suddenly from behind, holding up a thumbs up. Yui's eyes widened in surprise. Bondo also nodded, and Fukudashi had an approving smiley face on his speech bubble. The other boys had fallen behind them and remained silent, so at least some of them are fine with it. Yui grinned. Thank you guys, she said. Honuki laughed in surprise. You know, I think that's the first time you've ever smiled at me. Here's hoping it won't be the last. At this point, they had reached the main UA building, and the conversation cut off as they joined the loud bustling flow of incoming students from all classes. Yui was feeling a little bit better. Itsuka, whatever lingering resentment flows between everyone. I'm sure we can fix it. When Class A reached the door to homeroom, Izuku looked down the hallway to where Class B's homeroom door was. This is one of the few windows during the day in which I could see her. A magical thing happened. There she was indeed, among her classmates. Their eyes met. A shiver went up his spine when he saw her blue eyes, and for a moment his brain tried to remember something that recently happened. What did I forget? Some blue eyes that weren't hers ... but surely they were. Where else would I have seen pretty eyes like that? In his stupor, he'd taken several steps forward, breaking out of the mass of his own class. Yui had done the same. It was almost awkward, the two of them entering the empty space between the two groups. Half the other students were openly watching them and the other half were pretending not to. But then Yui was smiling, and brought him into a hug, as naturally as sliding into an old pair of boots. He felt the warmth radiating off of her. Good morning, she said. Good morning, he replied. I wonder if I'll ever get brave enough to greet her with a kiss. The thought terrified him now. They'd still only kissed the one time. As they parted, Yui looked him up and down. You look great. Huh. I'm just how I always look, I think. Exactly. Oh. Izuku flushed. Behind him, someone whistled. He was pretty sure it was Ashido. Well, you look beautiful, too, he told her. As always. He made sure to add that at the end. Yui smiled and shook her head, biting her lip. Well, I'll see you later, yeah. Yes, definitely. He grinned nervously and moved a hand through his hair. Yui turned, her skirt whirling, and went back toward her own classroom. Izuku's grin faded a little when he saw some of the other Class B students. Did he detect resentment in any of those glances? And where was Monoma? He must have already gone in. Come on, Deku, said Uraraka from behind, tugging his sleeve. He did so. Today, class, said Aizawa. We're going to be doing another joint training, Vlad King announced. Whispers washed over Class B. The boys all exchanged strange glances. Itsuka looked worried. But, the blood hero continued, raising a finger. Today's will be a little different. You'll be pairing up with someone from Class B, said Aizawa, over the loud clamorous reaction that Class A had to the announcement. You'll be fighting another pair of one Class A and one Class B student, said Vlad. This means that everyone will be fighting someone familiar to them, and someone less familiar. Yui's brain spun. What if I have to fight Izuku? I haven't been in combat with him since the first joint training, and even then not directly. And one more thing. Aizawa's grin turned familiarly evil. This time, you are picking your partners, and then you both will mutually pick another team to fight against. All 4 people have to consent to the match before it can take place. No more random drawings. Yui, I can team with Yui. Izuku exulted. We've never fought together before. This will be great. Flashes of something went through his mind. Familiar faces, important faces ... and the Ark of the Vestige Thrones. He banished them. I can fight with Izuku, Yui thought in relief, while her class rumbled around her. Only ... we also have to pick our opposing team. She looked around suspiciously, and it was as if a lot of her eyes were on her now. That's right. Anyone who wants to fight Izuku is gonna pick me. But there had to be mutual consent between all 4 before a match could start. That was good, at least. She hoped she would get a chance to talk to Izuku about what was going on beforehand. All right, then. Aizawa clapped his hands. To the field. Suit up. Outside the training ground, with the sun above their heads, the students of classes A and B were milling about in a crowd, searching for people to partner up with. Izuku walked past Uraraka as she was approached by a very excited Komori. The buzz of chatter rose higher and higher. Hey, seen Tetsu anywhere? Kirishima asked, suddenly appearing next to him. Izuku did a quick sweep of their immediate surroundings. No, sorry. Maybe you should team up with someone who has a very different quirk to yours. That's a good idea, man. Thanks for the shout. Kirishima gave him a thumbs up and walked off. Izuku kept going, looking for someone obvious in particular. He broke in between Kamakiri and Shiro, who were muttering to each other in low tones. The Class B student gave him a harsh glare, while Shiro seemed apologetic. Izuku scrunched one eye up in a dubious glance, and then backed into Yui. Oh, there you are. She had a look of relief on her face. Almost instinctively, they sort of leaned into each other, her whole body pressing against his chest. It was something like a hug, but weird. Izuku blushed, and they both backed off of each other a little, suddenly aware of how many people they were surrounded by. What? Were you worried I wasn't gonna pick you? He managed to put a teasing tone into his voice. Not even a little bit, she shot right back. I hope you have a plan. Well, it depends on who we fight. I've given some thought to the synergy between our quirks. I bet you have a whole notebook page on it, huh? Yui teased, her blue eyes twinkling. It's not finished. She giggled. Well, she turned in a circle. I guess we better find a team to fight, huh? Izuku had a dark look. I think they'll find us. Just then, Kamakiri and Shiro appeared behind them. Fight us, Green, Kamakiri snarled. Shiro was scratching his neck a step further back. Sorry, Midoriya. I couldn't convince him not to at least ask. That's all right, Izuku replied. He wanted to say that he was waiting for someone in particular, but fighting these two might actually be pretty goo. No thank you, said Yui. Go harass someone else, Kamakiri. The bug boy's eyes narrowed at her. Remember your manners, Kodai, he grumbled, and the two of them walked off. Izuku looked back at his partner in shock. Her eyebrows were angled down in a scowl. Why so hostile? He asked. They want to beat you up, she grumbled. Everyone wants a piece of you. It's so annoying. He swallowed. Even after 2 years, it was hard to get used to being the center of attention sometimes. And I brought it on myself. Well, you're the only one who will get a piece. I can promise you that. Yui blushed a deep red, and Izuku realized how that could have been interpreted. Ignore what I just said. Erase it from your memory. Let's go find a team. What if I don't want to erase it? Yui thought as she followed behind him. What if I want to take that and develop a whole fantasy out of it? She reached forward and took his hand and squeezed it, allowing him to lead her along. Katsuki Bekugo was not accustomed to looking for allies. In elementary and middle school, people had just gravitated around him. In physical activities, he was usually the captain, and if he wasn't, he was picked first. That was just how it was. It had been a similar situation at both sports festivals, and usually in class exercises he could at least count on Kirishima and Dun's face to revolve around him, sometimes even Ishido. But now he had to team up with someone in Class B, and honestly, this was stupid. He didn't want to talk to any of the extras. They pissed him off, especially that copying freak. Of course, he was well aware that Class B was also pissed off by him, because they didn't know him, and they didn't see any side of him outside his standoffish surface-level persona. But what choice did he have? He wasn't about to approach some random and grovel to them. That was not his way. So he stood in a corner and waited. And waited. And waited. Damn idiots. He clicked his teeth, watching the crowd begin to solidify in groups of 2, and then groups of 4 as people figured out who they wanted to go up against. They have no idea what they're throwing away. A bunch of extras circled around Todoroki immediately. Don't they know I'm much more agile? Then there was a hand on his shoulder. It felt so familiar that Katsuki opened his mouth before he even turned around. Oi, shitty hair, we can't team up with our classma. He cut himself off. Kaibara was staring at him, his fingers formed into drills, and tightening in their grip. I want to kick Midoriya's ass, the boy said. Katsuki grinned. Now we're talking. Kodai, you guys still need combat partners. Oase called to her. She ignored him. Izuku kept going, pulling her along. Midoriya. Fight me, Tetsu shouted. Mina was standing next to him, and face-bombed, shaking her head. Izuku had a grave, solemn expression. He seemed to have a destination in mind, all the way across the platform. Suburaba stepped in front of him. Oi, Midoriya. Izuku stopped. He tried to step to the left, and the air barrier user matched him. Get out of the way, please, Izuku mumbled. No, what are you doing? Suburaba put his hands on his hips and stepped closer in a confrontational way. Dragging Kodai along like that. She can walk by herself, you know. I was the one who grabbed him, Yui said, unable to keep the bite of poison out of her voice. Why was her class being so irritating? Suburaba snorted. Behind him was Sato, his partner, and a few other people were now looking at the scene. Oh, sure. Stand up for him again just like you did in the cafeteria. For all your bravado, Midoriya, you really don't know how to fight back. You won't goad me into a thing, Izuku interrupted. A shadow had fallen over his face, leaving only the gleam of his green eyes. Step aside. Ugh. The brown-haired boy threw his arms in the air. Why won't you just fight us? You're running out of options too. I'm fighting him. Izuku pointed. There, to Yui's tower, stood Bakugo and Kaibara. Sen Kaibara, one of Class B's best hand-to-hand combatants. He'd asked her out at the start of their first year, and after she'd said no, he had hardly ever attempted to talk to her again. They were paired on a class project once, and he'd actually been extremely respectable, dividing up the work and allowing her to do her half by herself if she'd liked. None of that respect was in his eyes now. He was glaring at them with pure venom, while Bakugo just looked plain excited. Hey-ha. The blonde slammed his fist into his other palm. You finally get it, Deku. When Yui heard the plan, it did not ease her worries. Are you sure? She muttered. Yes, you've mastered the timing, Yui. I know you have. I've seen you do it with Yanagi and Shota many times. That's not what concerns me. I don't like this spot, Yui said. She looked at their surroundings. The moment the timer started, Izuku had carried her to this spot in the midst of the industrial pipe maze in the arena, a sort of corner with a tall steel wall behind them. And worse, the wall had various things sticking out from it, juts and overhangs. Plenty of things to fall on their heads, and only 2 routes to escape. I know it's bad, said Izuku. But the goal is to keep Kaken as immobile as possible. He won't run from a fight, and so if we lure him here, he'll be as tied up as we are in here. Kaibara is going to go for you too. They're going to ignore me. She felt sick to her stomach. She really wished it hadn't ended up like this. Izuku sighed sadly. I know. It seems like I'm not able to do anything without putting a target on my back. But he thought about what Kaken had said the other day. When their other classmates had been nosy, the blonde boy had told them off. He doesn't care about all that. He might be the only one that does. Ironically, he's the only one I can now fight without any baggage. It was an ironic twist from 2 years ago, when it would have been the exact opposite. Did that account for Kaibara? Well, maybe Kaken would find it advantageous to keep his teammate in line. But maybe not. In any case, this was the closest thing to a fair exercise he and Yui were going to get. You're our ace in the hole, he told her. If they ignore you, then you mess them up. Yui straightened her cap. Her lips were pursed in cute concentration. I will do my best. In the distance, explosions. Izuku crouched. Green lightning coursed about his body. Yui felt goosebumps crawl up her arms. Here he comes, he said. Boom, boom, boom. They both saw the next explosion as it flowered out against one of the maze walls, ahead of them to the right. Pipes and scrap metal scattered through the sky. Izuku prepared to jump, but suddenly a flash of brown and white came from the opposite side of the corner, and another explosion. Yui's eyes darted back and forth across the area. A distraction. did Bakugo throw one of his grina. From the left side explosion, Kaibara came leaping, falling out of the billowing fire with every one of his limbs rotating at high velocity. Izuku leapt up to meet him. And Bakugo came in from below, blasting himself forward right along the ground, right for Yui. Yui gasped and threw a metal hexagonal nut from her belt, enlarging it at Bakugo's face. He blasted through it instead of dodging. And as Izuku jumped up, he grabbed a piece of the flying metal with Black Whip, spun it upward, and threw it at Kaibara. Kaibara shredded it with his drills, but got knocked off course and into the wall. Yui slid sideways, having bought herself a split second from Bakugo's attack. But he corrected course almost immediately with another explosion. Izuku flicked his fingers downward, and a vertical jet of air enveloped Bakugo from above, his explosion dissipating out in the wind toward the walls. Yui felt Black Whip wrap around her torso, like they'd planned, and Izuku pulled her into the air. Kaibara was sliding down the wall, sending out sparks by grinding against it with his drills. He kicked off of it, 1-2, and Bakugo launched himself up toward them. Izuku grabbed a pipe with Black Whip and threw it to Yui. She shrunk it. Bakugo maneuvered himself past another one for all air blast, and Yui underhanded the pipe at his leg, then enlarged it. It struck him and he hissed, blasting backward to regather himself for a moment. Izuku continued to float, preparing to grab another pipe with his whips for Yui to use again. She felt their connection sever. The Black Whip disappeared, little energy strands dancing out from its broken, frayed form, as Kaibara dashed through it, spinning his whole body. He struck the opposite wall and rebounded, launching up toward Izuku and breaking the other whip. Yui landed on the ground and rolled. As Kaibara spun, she threw another piece of metal at him. Bakugo came in and blew it up. Izuku went down to fight him, but he ducked and let Kaibara jump off his back, his drilling arm aimed downward at Izuku's face. Izuku used Fajin to launch himself backward, and Kaibara's drill struck the ground, cracking it in a web. To slow his velocity, Izuku grabbed onto an overhang with Black Whip and spun wide around it, breaking it off the wall and then throwing it to Yui. She caught it and shrunk it. She turned, preparing to lob it at their oncoming opponents. And Bakugo used his other explosion, the bright one that did less physical damage. The air crackled with dazzling light. Yui threw an arm over her face, shielding her eyes. She heard Izuku swear next to her. They've got better synergy than we expected, and they're not entirely focusing him either. They're making him protect me. I can't be useless like this. Bakugo was coming in from her left. Izuku was preparing to launch over her to meet him. Yui turned to face him. Kaibara was coming down from above. His drills grinded against the wall and separated a hanging pipe, a mere 10 feet above Izuku's head. It plummeted. Yui had time to jump up and shrink it. She knew she did. She'd done reflexive saves that quickly before, though rarely. But Bakugo was nearly upon her, and she had to defend herself too. All this flashed through her head in an instant. If that hit Izuku's head, he'd probably be out of the fight. But she couldn't leave herself open to an explosion. And the scene at the gazebo flashed through her head again. I'm fine. Oh, sure. Stand up for him again just like you did in the cafeteria. Yui just couldn't break free of all these thoughts. She hesitated. Izuku managed to react himself, sparing his head, but too late for his back. The pipe struck against him as he tried to move away. CLUNNNG, the whole world seemed to vibrate. And Kaibara was right behind the pipe, tackling Izuku, preparing to shred him. Izuku activated smoke screen. Dark clouds billowed over the battlefield. Yui lost sight of all. Then a burst of light from the explosion was right in her face. An almost predatory adrenaline seized her body. She ducked low and rolled under the explosion, Izuku's smoke going everywhere, the shadow of Bakugo passing over her. More loud clangs and bursts off to the right. Bakugo swept back around. She heard him coughing. She didn't hesitate. He heard her coming, of course. His reflexes were second to none. He turned and prepared to blast her, but Yui was not Uraraka at the sports festival. She lifted up the piece of metal that Izuku had thrown her earlier and enlarged it. It shielded the blast and absorbed it. And she ran 2 more steps forward, jumping and falling more than running. Really, slamming the whole of it right into him with all the force she could muster. Pow! Bakugo gasped in shock as the two of them went falling back onto the concrete. The smoke billowed around them. She pushed the shield deeper into his face, removing his vision. Then she grabbed his arm and yanked his gauntlet off, shrunk it, and threw it as far away as she could. All in the span of one adrenaline-jazzed second. His fist came around, probing blindly, and she kicked him in the shins. His other palm opened against the shield, and an awkward half-explosion blasted up against it. Yui felt heat strike her face and fell sideways from the blast. They rolled. Bakugo tried to kick up and get back into the sky, throwing the shield aside, but she grabbed onto his boot, pulling him back down. Goddamn, angel face. Let go, damn it. Yui snarled, baring her teeth like an animal, punching him in the back of the knee to keep him down. Another blast went past her head, missing her ear by an inch. She felt him trying to slip out of his boot to get away from her, and she shrunk it ever so slightly, tightening it on his foot to cut his circulation off. Holy shit. Bakugo barked. Fine. You wanna fight. It's a fight you'll get. Don't say I didn't warn you. He plummeted back toward her. Yui felt an almost cold clarity wash over her, like Izuku had noticed many years ago, separately from her. Bakugo's first attack was almost absurdly easy to dodge. Time seemed to slow. She moved out of the way. Bakugo's fist slammed him into the ground. 2 explosions crackled out against the concrete. His crouched, exposed back was to her. Yui leapt up onto him, locked her legs around his neck, and tackled him to the ground again. He choked out, Izuku's smoke still flooding the area and their lungs and their eyes. She rolled left, delivering a swinging kick to his face as she did, and then heaved herself upward toward him. She pummeled him, battle fever overcoming her, doing everything she possibly could against an opponent that would always be inherently stronger, faster. I will keep you away from Izuku, no matter what. Izuku had to admit he was not fighting his best. In any normal circumstance, there was no way Kaibara could have gotten that hit off. He had fought Shigaraki and all for one, for Christ's sake. He had dodged attacks 1,000 times faster than that. But the sight of Bakugo launching himself directly at Yui had frozen Izuku right up. It had activated something terrifying inside his brain, something he'd only felt a precious few times. The most clear time he could remember was when All Might had almost died at the USJ via Kurogiri closing a portal on him. A cold, seizing terror. But this was worse somehow. 1,000,000 times worse. All Might ... This is what you warned me about, wasn't it? Nana Shimura's solemn face on her solemn throne flashed through his head again, as he released more and more smoke, trying to buy some time to collect himself. No, shut up, Nana. Leave me alone. Kaibara's drills were loud. Izuku hadn't really noticed before, with Kaken's explosions and everything. But without a louder noise to shield him, the Class B boy was incapable of stealth. He was attacking from the left. Izuku dodged. Kaibara did not let up. He swung with his right arm, then his left, and then aimed a kick at Izuku's shins. Izuku danced out of the way, jumped upward, and tried to wrap a black whip around the boy's shoulders. Kaibara reached up behind himself and swiped with his drills, shredding it. He jumped up onto a nearby pipe, trying to match Izuku's height. Izuku dived him, aiming a 5% OFA kick for his torso. This didn't even knock out Stain. It ought to incapacitate him, though. Kaibara's eyes widened in terror and he dodged sideways. Immediately, a drill came for Izuku's head. Izuku jumped up to the next higher pipe. Kaibara drove his arms into the pipe, vibrating it and throwing Izuku off. Izuku floated in midair. Kaibara launched to attack again. Izuku flicked himself sideways with an Air Force blast. The wind enveloped Kaibara and he went flying into another set of pipes, but he jammed his drills into them to halt himself, and slid downward, grinding out sparks. Izuku used more smoke. They were now fully in the depths of the maze walls, far from the clearing, where he could only assume Kaken was now fighting Yui. Why would he not keep coming after me? Both of these matchups are unbalanced. Was this part of some master plan Kaken had conceived? Or, perhaps, is Yui somehow blocking him from what he wants to do? A surge of hopeful pride went through him. He could only wish for that to be the truth. In the meantime, though, Izuku rebounded against one pipe, and then another. Green sparks streamed out behind him. His danger sense relocated Kaibara in all the smoke and pipes and darkness, and he dive-bombed the boy again. Kaibara's reflexes were, admittedly, very strong. He ducked and rolled beneath Izuku, then swept out a leg to knock the green-haired boy off his feet. It was actually so quick that Izuku had to go ahead and use the Fajin he'd been building up, instead of just a normal OFA leap, to dodge it. Fajin accidentally took him way too far, crashing through several layers of pipes as he tried frantically to slow down. Kaibara was jumping from ledge to ledge, trying to reach him. Izuku grabbed a loose piece of metal with Black Whip and threw it. Then another. Kaibara dodged the first, and shredded the next as it came to the spot where he'd dodged to. Izuku had predicted his movement, to no avail. I'm gonna have to use at least 15% to gain enough speed where I can land a hit on him without him dodging. But I don't want to hurt him that badly. Izuku tried 10%. He threw himself at Kaibara again. But the boy did manage to dodge again, just barely, and an attack came immediately after. This one actually did graze Izuku in the arm, causing a small sting of pain, and then Kaibara kicked another pipe toward him, which Izuku dodged. He circled his opponent, floating and bouncing off of more ledges. Kaibara's eyes were locked into him, darting around, following his every movement. And they were wide with terror. Izuku felt strange. Kaibara wasn't sneering, or gloating, or gleeful about any of this. He had managed to actually hurt Izuku more than vice versa, but it was all he could do just to survive and stay in the fight. He was fighting with pure desperation. It was a look that Izuku recognized. He'd felt it inside himself against opponents like Shigaraki, and Overhaulin, and even Todoroki and Kaken. That's what I've become to guys like him. I'm not even using my full power and he's pulling out all the stops. They're all targeting me because a flash of something like guilt went through him. Izuku sighed. Kaibara was still watching him dead on, that fierce, determined, terrified look still in his eyes. He raised his spinning arms, preparing to defend. Izuku dropped toward him using 20% of One for All. Katsuki had used his last bit of built-up power, his last grenade. The damn girl had actually shrunken it. Every time she managed to make contact with him, which was much more than he'd been expecting, she shrunk his costume on him a little, activating her quirk a bit every time. His clothes were now uncomfortably tight. He could feel the blood pumping through his whole body. And to make matters worse, he couldn't find the gauntlet she'd tossed somewhere. Pump, pump. Katsuki tried to attack her again. She was miraculously dodging it. He'd only struck her directly once, and her soot-covered face looked no less determined. Pump, pump. He could almost feel his forehead vein poking out. His whole body hurt. Her blue eyes pierced him. Pump, pump. He had to end this now. He launched himself toward her. She threw a small shiny thing into the air. I know what that is. He lifted one hand up to blast it while blasting her with the other. The nut enlarged over his head. It was hexagonal and falling down. She was trying to constrict him in the center of it. It wouldn't work. Kodai, to his complete disbelief, drove herself through the bottom of his explosion, where the power was weakest, ash streaming past her face as she got herself scalded just to drive an elbow into his stomach. Katsuki spat and thought, screw it. He brought his other palm around and blasted her directly. Pump, pump, pump. Kodai collapsed, her massive hexnut trap hitting the ground with the clang next to her. She murmured, boom. With her soft voice, and Katsuki's clothes tightened impossibly tight, the blood pumping in his head got loud. His whole body was tingling, and he'd lost the use of his arms and legs. He fell. Goddamn, she got me after all, without even needing the damn nerd's help. Heh, looks like Deku had found himself a pretty nice catch. His world went dark. The fight is over. Team Midoriya and Kodai win. The intercom announced. Izuku stood up straight, breathing hard, letting the green lightning around him die out. The gleam in his eyes faded. He stared ahead at the pile of down pipes and metal, scattered out from the impact. Kaibara lay in the center of it, his chest heaving up and down, his eyes fighting to stay open. Damn it. The Class B boy choked out. Should have known that was gonna happen. What percent was that? Izuku couldn't lie to him. 20, he answered, quietly. Kaibara coughed. A sad smile spread across his face. I never had a chance at all. Izuku felt wholly out of his element. I'm sorry. Jesus, man. Don't be sorry. Kaibara tried to struggle up, and Izuku rushed over to help him. But he waved him off. I'm the one who should apologize. I just got ... so ... I don't know what came over me. Izuku gulped. Do you resent me? Well, Kaibara managed to get up on one elbow. It seems stupid now that you want me to say it. Izuku steeled himself up. If ... if you liked Yui, or something ... then ... I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry. I know, you and her look really happy together, but it's just ... man. Guys like you ... and Bakugo and Todoroki ... it could have been anyone. You're all just so above. You especially, man ... you're just ... good. I don't doubt that Kodai's really head over heels for you. And I wouldn't doubt that ... had anything been different ... that any of the other straight girls would have fallen the same way. Izuku blushed. He didn't know how to respond to that. I think the view you have of me in your head is bigger than what's really ... erm ... there. I could get defensive. Tell him that my life hasn't been easy either, because it hasn't. But that wouldn't solve anything. I didn't want to get revenge or anything stupid like that. I just felt like. Kaibara looked him in the eye. I felt like I had to at least try. And I knew I was gonna lose. But if I didn't at least try, and let out my frustration somehow. Izuku knelt down in front of him and put a hand on his shoulder. I get it, Kaibara, he said, simply. I get it. I kinda figured. At least, that's sort of how Kakin and I have operated for a while. That's why I came right to him. Sometimes we gotta just hit each other really hard for a few minutes. Kaibara chuckled. His hair fell over his face. There was a trickle of blood going down his forehead. Well, thanks for obliging me, I guess. He accepted Izuku's help, and they stood up together. If Kendo had heard all that, she'd say we were being dumb, stubborn boys. Kendo tries to fight Yaoyorozu constantly, so I don't think she has room to talk. They both laughed together. Much later, Izuku reunited with Yui outside the infirmary. Did Recovery Girl lash you? He asked her. Yui looked glum. She said that if I'd left Bakugo in that state for even 10 minutes more ... his legs may have had to be amputated. Vlad King is probably gonna give me detention on top of everything. Izuku sucked in breath through his teeth. Yeesh, I just couldn't think of what else to do. I know it went too far for training. I know that. But I really was just overwhelmed and filled with adrenaline and I couldn't think of what else. Hey, Yui, you literally beat Bakugo. He also got you, but that is insane. You should be pro. Heroes shouldn't have to resort to something like that. I should have thought of something cleaner. Kakin is nuts. He would have taken you out instantly if you'd even taken the time to think. And on top of everything, he's your friend. And I almost ruined his hero career. Would have if the robots didn't come. You'd have never forgiven me. What? Yui, don't even think about stuff like that. It wasn't even really close to happening. Yui stays on top of those things. I just felt like I had to keep him away from you. I had to make up for my hesitation from earlier. Yui, I saw Kaibara drop that pipe on you and freaked out. I thought I was over that feeling, but it all came flooding back. Yui, I came to Yui after everything that happened with Seiya because I wanted a healthy place to stoke my over-worrying tendencies. I thought that if I helped people as a hero, they wouldn't get so resentful for me caring about them so much. Yui, but what good does it do if all that stuff still holds me back? How can I be a good hero if I'm always thinking about that? Yue, I can't, that's how. I can't. Izuku didn't know what else to do, so he grabbed her by the shoulders and kissed her on the lips. Yui froze stiff for a moment, but then she relaxed against him, sighing and melting into his chest. Her hands went up into his hair, her arms curling around his neck. He pulled her closer, his hands sliding down from her shoulders to her waist. Their lips moved against each other. Half a minute later, they separated. Yui's eyes were half-lidded and sleepy. All the energy and stress seemed to have gone out of her. I never thought I'd have to get you to shut up somehow, Izuku said honestly. She managed a small smile. Well, if you ever have to do it again, do it like that. Monoma woke up from a long nap. It was curious. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept during the day. Aside from the rigorous schedule that Yue put them all under, he simply wasn't that type of person. There were always things that needed to get done, always more responsibilities, and not enough waking hours to begin with. So this was strange. To drift away for 2 hours and have the sun be in a different position outside the window. He blinked slowly, his eyelids still feeling heavy. His head spun. He was fairly certain the nap did him no favors as far as recharging his energy. He looked in the mirror he had across from his bed. His face looked withdrawn and utterly despondent. He had dreamed during the nap. It had been just long enough for that. He dreamed about going to school again, and facing all those people, and how angry they were. Ugh. He leaned over and buried his face in his pillow. A knock on the door. Monoma, you in there, man? Oase's voice. Nito didn't respond immediately. Then, the knocking came, more insistent. Open up. Kamakiri snarled. We need to talk. Nito sighed and lifted his head. It's unlocked, he called. The door came open after a moment. In stepped a lot of his male classmates. Aside from Oase and Kamakiri, Tsuburaba was also here, and Tetsu, Kiwaro, and Rin. Jesus, dude, said Tsuburaba. Were you asleep? Yeah, it looks it. You're in trouble, you know, said Rin. We told Vlad you weren't feeling well, but he felt like he needed a real excuse. So you're gonna have to give that to him. You call that trouble? Nito laughed hollowly. Look, said Oase, we know you caused a scene and all that. What are you guys here for? But you can't stay holed up in here forever. You've gotta come out and own up to it. Own up to it. Nito breathed. Yes, and apologize. That's the only way I could show my face and carry on with my studies, and even then. What? Apologize? Kamakiri looked baffled. Who the hell am I talking to? Nito blinked at him, slowly. I mean what do you not want me to? Tsuburaba, Kamakiri, and Kiwaro all exchanged glances. Oase and Rin looked at their feet. Tetsu snorted. All right, guys, clearly he's not game. You should stop now. What? Just because you don't want to help doesn't mean we aren't allowed to do it. You have no authority over us, said Tsuburaba. Kaibara's taking some time to think and so should all of you. That's my advice, anyway. Tetsu turned toward the door. I only came to make sure Monoma was okay and to make sure he came back to class. For my friend. I don't care about schemes. Good luck with that. He left the room. The darkness deepens. Kiwaro muttered. Schemes? Nito asked. What happened today? We did 2v2s, Oase explained. Each pair was a Class A student and a Class B student. You had to pick your partner and the pairing you would fight against. Nito smiled bitterly. Who fought Midoriya and Kodai? He didn't even need to ask for clarification. Kaibara and Bakugo. The latter two got their asses kicked, Kamakiri said tactlessly. Well, that's not really true, said Rin. Bakugo took down Kodai at least. But she took him down with her. And considering it's Bakugo, I think that counts as an ass-kicking. From her. Nito's eyes widened. Kodai took down Bakugo. Well, they took down each other, but... And Midoriya, he muttered, took out Kaibara with ease. Idiot. He never should have even tried it, Kamakiri snorted. We'll never measure up, will we? Kiwaro muttered. Kodai probably only managed to win because Midoriya was helping her. The rest of the matches. I won mine, said Oase. And most of the girls won theirs, Rin added, but most of the winning teams felt like they were carried by... The class aside, Tsuburaba finished for him. Yeah, okay, I see why that would make them want to come to me. But, Nito thought, Kodai beat Bakugo. Unfathomable. Would that have ever been possible if all this hadn't happened? I can't help you, he muttered. Tsuburaba's jaw dropped in disbelief. What? Kamakiri snorted. Funny joke, Monoma. Get out of bed, dude. No, I don't want to. You're behaving like a child, Kiwaro snarled. And you aren't. Nito dared to raise his voice at them, and they all took a step back as if struck. Do you even hear yourselves right now? What are you asking me to do? We can't let this continue, man, said Tsuburaba. Class A is taking everything from us. Even in an exercise like today's where we're all mixed together, it seems like they take all the glory. How is that possible? They do it so effortlessly, they never even spare us a thought. It sickens me. How long until Komori decides she likes one of those guys? Kiwaro muttered. I don't know if I can stand the thought. Or Tsunotori, Oase added. You cannot control other people's feelings, Nito told them. He felt lost, empty. Do they think this way because of me? But you can control your own. It's just fucking unfair, Kamakiri growled. And everyone is acting like it's not a big deal. We're being silenced here, man. I can't take it anymore. Small blades were sprouting from his skin. He seemed unaware of them. We've got to do something. We've got to take action. No, said Nito. Oase looked desperate. Monoma ... Come on, man. You've got to have a plan. You always have a plan. Not this time. I'm not helping you with this. You guys are on your own. I'm done. Nito rolled back over in bed. Maybe taking another nap. Yes, that would be good. Anything but talking to them right now. These are the people that care about me enough to come check on me. Not Kendo, who hits me but has always tried to offer me advice. Not Shizaki with her Christian diatribes. Not Wise Honuki or Shishida. These guys, poisoned by envy and inferiority and ... They're my crew. My lot. They think I'm their leader. How did it come to this? Monoma, Kirwaro breathed. Wait, get out of my room. Rin sighed and was the first to break, leaving and giving up. Oase followed, then Kamakiri, muttering swears under his breath. The last two lingered for a second longer before going, too. Kirwaro closed the door behind him. Nito thought he might have drifted off to sleep again. He wasn't sure. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that eventually, Kodai would thank me, that she would become an Iron Force, a real hero, that I could lift everyone in Class B up and we'd be truly great. But greatness doesn't have to come from me. In fact, it can't. If being with Midoriya is what caused Kodai to win against Bakugo, something basically none of us have ever done ... then that's what it takes. The sun set outside. He could hear distant noises below, in the common room. Perhaps people were making dinner. He was unsure how much time had passed. Someone else knocked on his door. He froze up, going stiff under his covers. It's Kendo, he thought, terrified. I know it is. She's gonna hit me and she's gonna yell at me and she's gonna... The voice that spoke was one he had only heard a few times before. I am leaving some food outside your door, said Yui Kodai. Please eat it. You need to eat to stay alive. Obviously, her footsteps faded away. Goosebumps went up Nito's arms. He turned over and sat up in bed, staring at the door, utterly astonished. The next morning, Yui found a note on her door. All it said was thank you. I'm sorry. The rest of the week proceeded in a strange fashion. Monoma returned to class, to a barrage of questioning comments from the boys and demands that he apologize from the girls. All he did was quietly go to his desk and not talk to anyone. Yui supposed she could tell the girls about the note, but something told her that might make them even more upset. After all, what kind of apology is that? She hadn't expected much more from Monoma, but still. Vlad and the other teachers tried to get him to participate more in class with little success. Monoma did his work quietly, did hero exercises as quietly as he could, and when seen around the dorms, he was either reading or attending to some chore quietly. At one point, they had a very large science packet that they had to do in groups of 4. It was so large that it was pretty much impossible for someone to do on their own. However, Monoma flat out refused to join a group, and Bondo, Kirwaro, and Rin were left in a group of 3. They didn't finish ... but Monoma finished the packet on his own. Not only that, but he finished before everyone else. When he was done, he turned it in at the front and walked back to his desk, and put his head down. Yui didn't much care one way or the other. She was certain that the note was all the apology she was going to get, and she'd only taken him the food because she'd been in a reconciliatory mood. Even after getting detention and a verbal lashing from Recovery Girl, Izuku had reminded her that there was simply too much to be happy about to be holding grudges and things. So she, in her mind, had already reconciled with Monoma and moved on. Both of them, in their own quiet ways. Unfortunately, the rest of the class did not seem to agree. Oh well, I have Izuku now. She had taken to meeting up with him right after classes ended and walking back to the dorms with him. It was 10-15 precious minutes of time they had together. The first day after the partner exercise, at the end of the day, the two classes emerged from their side-by-side doors and began heading the same direction to exit the school. Yui stepped up toward the class of students and joined Izuku, her hand sliding into his. She gave it a soft squeeze. Uraraka and Sue noticed her. Hey, Kodai. Hello, Kodai, Ribbit. How was your class today? It was alright, Yui said in a hushed voice. She still wasn't quite used to speaking to them. And yourself? Tsuyu opened her mouth to respond, but then someone stepped up beside Izuku and Yui. Oi, Kodai, said Bakugo. Yui turned, terror striking her heart. She noticed Izuku's face. He looked fierce. He was staring Bakugo down as if daring him to do something. Protecting her, keeping her hand in his. But Bakugo looked dead serious back. You're nuts, he said flatly. I didn't know any of your class had it in you to not be extras, except for maybe Hands and the Mud Guy. But you're pretty good. Keep it up. It'd be irritating if it was a fluke or some shit. If you ever want a rematch, just name a time for Gym Gamma and I'm down. He turned and began to walk speedily ahead of them. Kaken, Izuku called. Bakugo briefly turned back around. Izuku gave him a kind smile. Thank you for using Yui's name. Pa, Bakugo screwed his face up at him. I didn't do it just because you told me to. She earned my respect. And then he kept going. So, that it happened. And the week had continued on after that. They were finally to the weekend, and Izuku met with Yui after class once again. They walked with the larger group for a bit, Yui making polite, slightly more confident conversation with Uraraka, Sue, and Ada until they exited the building and began the walk toward the dorms. Like usual, the two of them broke away from the main group and took the longer, winding path, giving themselves more time together. They walked under dead, leafless trees, looking almost crystalline under a mild white sun. It was crisp but not freezing in the air. Izuku kept his grip tight on her hand. I am almost used to this, Yui muttered. And you are too. Izuku turned to her, making an cute face of confusion. What do you mean by that? She grinned, a little mischievously. Your hand hardly sweats anymore. Oh, he flushed. He hadn't even really been aware that he'd been sweating. I'm sorry if it was gross. It's all right, she assured him. Part of me is thankful, because your hand is always really warm. He flushed deeper. They turned along a wide curve of the path. A soft wind blew through the bare branches, shaking them a bit. Yui shivered a little. Izuku noticed. Maybe we could do this instead. He folded his arm out, allowing her to hook hers through it. We'd be sharing more body heat this way. Blood was pumping into his face. Yui hummed agreeably and put her arm through his. She snuggled up to his side as they walked, almost causing him to trip. They synced their footsteps. For a minute, nothing was said. I listened to that album you sent me, by the way, Izuku told her. Oh, her eyes seemed to brighten. What did you what did you think? It was nice. Nice to listen to. But well, I'm sorry, but I don't really remember anything specific from it. Don't apologize. It wasn't supposed to be catchy. Yeah, I guess I'm just used to well. Most of my music input is hero themes and motivational soundtracks for workouts and stuff. He sheepishly scratched his neck. Yui poked him in the side. We need to broaden your horizons, mister. They both giggled a little. What did you say the genre was called? He asked her. It's folk. It's meant to be stripped back and be more about a nice feeling than hyping you up. I guess it did feel very natural. Acoustic is the word you're looking for. Okay, just flex all your knowledge on me, why don't you? He smiled at her. Say, have you ever talked to Gyro in my class? I bet she'd love to talk music with you. Izuku. Yui gave him a level look. Just being into music doesn't make me like Gyro. She is a total music nut. Everyone listens to music. Except for me, I guess. Besides, Yui continued, I like to talk to you. She leaned into him a little more. He blushed again. Right. After another minute, he asked, how did you get into folk? Yui seemed to withdraw for a beat. It wasn't anything physical that Izuku noticed. He picked up on it purely from a subtle change in her expression, a slight shifting in the air between them. He almost opened his mouth to say it was okay if she didn't want to say, but then she did anyway. When I was a kid, my family went on a cruise to a place called Alaska. I know about it, Izuku said with a nod. It was easy to forget that while America often seemed so far away, there was a piece of it to the northeast of Japan, not all that distant in the grand scheme of things, but across the Earth's date line. An entire day behind us. We had Yui screwed up her face. Excursion. An excursion day in a town called Kodiak. There was a restaurant there, a sort of American country restaurant, with things like steaks and ham and bread made out of cornbread, and there was a folk band playing there. I see. Izuku smiled. That must have been a fun trip. Yui seemed distant. Yes, though I don't know if I do well with boats. Yeah, seasickness can be a big problem. I know when we did water rescue training last year, Kirishima got so sick from the rocking that he had to be airlifted out. Aizawa was so mad at him. Yui giggled at that. He hoped he'd managed to distract her, at least, from whatever had been bothering about the memories of the trip. Maybe it's about her family. In any case, Izuku didn't want to intrude upon her privacy, so he didn't bring it up. Where does one draw a line like that? The balance between communication and privacy. Is it different for every relationship? Is it different for every stage of a relationship? How on earth do people figure this out? Together, he muttered. Yui overheard him. I don't know. I don't know what I was talking about. What were we talking about? Yui smiled, her eyes shimmering prettily. You're a goof. Thank you. I do try. Out of the trees, the Class B dorm came into view. Yui shifted on her feet for a moment. Izuku sensed that she was working up the nerve to ask him something. What is it? He asked her gently. Would you like to? Her face reddened. You could come in, if you like. Since it's the weekend, we don't have to. Izuku looked back at the dorm building. Because of homework during the week, they had not really spent time with each other in the afternoons or evenings, both generally agreeing that they studied better when they were by themselves. But of course all the work they had right now wasn't due tomorrow. It was due in 3 days. Meaning, well, alright. He took a deep breath, somewhat scared. If you're inviting me. He knew some of Class B didn't exactly have the highest opinion of him. But at least Kaibara was cool with him now, and maybe they'd had time to cool off over the course of the week. And if I see Monoma. Yui had told him about the note and the blonde boy's strange behavior for the past few days, so Izuku didn't expect any problems from him. They walked up the steps and into the Class B dorm. The last time Izuku had been here was to carry Yui to her bed on Christmas Eve. It had been dark and empty at the time, but unfortunately now it was not. Takage, Kendo, Tsunotori, and Komori were all talking in the common area, while some of the boys were cleaning up the kitchen. Takage turned at the sound of the door and immediately grinned, showing her sharp teeth. Hey, Yui. Hey, Green. Kendo raised surprised eyebrows. Midoriya. Please make yourself at home. You're welcome here, of course. If Yui invited you in. Sorry, things are a bit of a mess. She leaned over and straightened a pillow on the couch. Honuki, please hurry up in there. We have a guest. Almost through with the dishes, the boy reported from the kitchen. He waved. Hello, Midoriya. Hey, Midoriya, said Shota. The third boy helping them was Rin, who had his back turned to the cabinets, and said nothing. Izuku nodded at all of them in turn. Yui moved to slip out from his arm, and Takage was suddenly upon them. Oh, you guys are all cuddled up in the cold. That's adorable. She got in Izuku's face. Quite the catch, aren't ya? If only I'd known beforehand that Yui had a thing for green hair. She made a show of sighing and slumping her shoulders. Izuku felt oddly impervious to her energy, or at least more impervious than he would have been a few months ago. It's more than that, he told her. You've got to be a complete package. Yui made a funny squeaking noise, and Takage's mouth fell open, gaping at him. Behind them, Komori cackled. He shroomed you right back, Setsuna. You shriveled probably back off before you realize you're out of your element. Setsuna joined her in laughter. You two have been making each other more confident, haven't ya? It makes me really happy to see. It doesn't take much to make you happy, though. Yui commented in a quieter voice. She took Izuku's hand and made as if to lead him to the stairs. Midoriya, if you need anything, just let me know, okay? Kendo said. You worry too much, please, commented Tsunotori. Yeah, look at you. You're practically tearing your hair out. Takage cackled. It's all right, Izuku reassured her. My dorm looks like a bigger mess than this, I promise you. And we're going to be upstairs, in my room, Yui added, a little forcefully. So, now hold on just a second. Komori stepped forward. She had a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Speaking of hair, Midoriya's is all frazzled from the cold. It's all tangled. Several pairs of female eyes fell upon his hair at once. Izuku felt suddenly, profoundly unsafe. I like it tangled, he said, defensively. Yeah, but what if Yui doesn't? Takage asked him, taking a daring step forward. What if she wants to be able to run her fingers through it without getting all caught up on snags and snares? Yui blushed deeply. Guys, Tsunotori was suddenly, inexplicably behind him. She nodded with an analytical gaze, framing her chin with her fingers. The boy needs work. Needs work, Komori agreed with a nod, to be good enough for our Yui shroom. Shizaki and Yanagi had appeared at the steps. What's going on? Yanagi asked. Yui looked at her in desperate appeal. Save us, she mouthed. Okay, leave him alone, said Kendo, stepping up and putting her hands on her hips. Let them go upstairs and hang out together. Setsuna wilted. Come on, Prez. We just want to fix him up a little. Tsunotori said. Fix him up. Shizaki seemed confused. I'm not sure I follow. Suddenly, Takage looked as if she was way too excited. And Kendo's eyes suddenly filled with fear. Izuku looked to Yui, then back to all the girls surrounding him. He wasn't sure what had just changed, but something had. Kendo gave Takage a warning look. Do not tell her what you're. Ibara. Komori interrupted, jumping over to the vine girl. Look at Midoriya here. Look at his head. Don't you think something's wrong? Oh no, Yui squeaked. Izuku looked at her with a quiet whisper. What's happening? There's only one thing Ibara takes more seriously than God, Yui muttered. Hair care. He looked back at Shizaki, who now had an expression completely unlike any he'd ever seen on her. Then, the vines on her head flared up, and she nodded to Komori. I understand. Kendo face-bombed. Takage and Tsunotori laughed victoriously. And then Izuku was being carried by vines to an unknown location. That was how, for at least 30 minutes, the girls of Class B played with and styled his hair. It was overwhelmingly mortifying. It had begun with about 5 minutes of Shizaki washing and then slowly combing his hair out, running her fingers through it, admonishing and getting onto him about caring for it properly the whole time, while Takage, Tsunotori, and Komori watched from behind like coiled-up springs, ready to pounce on him. The nail in the coffin had been when Shizaki had turned him around in the swivel chair, away from the mirrors, and shown him off to Yui and Ryuko, who had been standing further back. Well, do you approve of this? Ibara had asked her. Izuku had hoped Yui would save him. Get him out of this. But she was looking at him with a strange, interested expression instead. See what else you can do, she muttered. And the gleam in the other girl's eyes made Izuku's heart sink. Even Kendo eventually relented, after about 10 minutes of trying to get them to stop. It had culminated with Takage asking, if you want to get in on this, just say so. And Kendo had blushed and stormed out of the room. They put products he didn't understand the function of into his hair, curling it, waving it, making it stand up in strange ways. They tied it up in ties and clips. They even got Yui to join in after a fashion, giggling faintly as she did so. Well, at least she's having fun. He felt thoroughly probed. At some point, Takage had gotten a hold of his phone, and had taken a photo of Yui messing with his hair. Shizaki's hand was in the corner of the photo, but mainly it was just the two of them. Look how cute. She squealed, showing it to everyone. Yui was blushing. Even Izuku had to admit it did look sort of cute. It's a shame we can't cut it, Shizaki said with a sigh, after 30 minutes. A nice trim could do wonders for you, Midoriya. Well, why can't we? Komori asked with an evil grin. No, said Yui and Izuku, at the same time. At least they still had boundaries of some sort. Eventually, after his hair had dried, it naturally returned to its normal mop-top state. Tsunotori was baffled. Is this some kind of magic? She asked, poking his head in disbelief. Izuku shrugged wryly. It's always been like that. My mother attempted what all you've just done for many years. Some beasts you just can't tame. Takage gave him a mischievous look when he said that. I bet Yui will give it her best shot, though. Shizaki covered her face with her hands. Setsuna, if you will just lay off the innuendos, please. Komori and Tsunotori laughed. Anyway, we're done here. Yui took Izuku's hand and he stood up out of the chair, letting her lead him to the door. He was still not even sure whose room they were in. Have fun, you two. Komori called. Takage whistled, and Pony just laughed harder. Yui rolled her eyes. Izuku let her lead him up to her room, up some stairs and down a hall. They were in rushed silence for a minute. Sorry, he said, reflexively. She turned to him with a raised eyebrow. What for? Who? I don't know. I feel like I should have put a stop to that. Yui paused for a moment, but then shook her head. I didn't stop it. You didn't stop it. It was fun. I didn't mind. They can get annoying, and that's why I went ahead and pulled you out. But it was still fun. I guess, as long as Yui had enjoyed herself. As they reached her room and stepped inside, a buzz came from Izuku's phone. He pulled it out. It was a text from his mom. Izuku, honey, your girlfriend is so cute. When do I get to meet her? His blood ran cold. A profound sense that his life was utterly over fell over him like a wet sheet of fabric. How does she know? Attached to the text was a link to a social media post. A social media post from his account. It was the photo that Takage had taken, of Yui running her hands through his hair. Wait, what? He blurted aloud. I thought she just used the camera. How'd she get into my phone? What? Yui looked back at him, standing in the middle of her room, confused. He was still at the door. Who? Izuku laughed in a high voice. Well, it seems like my mom knows about you. He got the sense that these chaotic matters were only just beginning. Who? Izuku laughed in a high voice. Well, it seems like my mom knows about you. Your mother. Yui's expression subtly changed. Izuku read it as her being nervous or anticipating something. When can I meet her? Izuku swallowed. His mother meeting Yui was something he had only thought of a little bit, and the prospect still somewhat intimidated him. Whenever you want, I guess. My mom is probably happy to host us for dinner at any time. Yui's face reddened. Well, I look forward to it. Izuku awkwardly closed the door behind them. The two of them stood apart in her room, swaying in place, unsure as to what to do. He surveyed her room. He had been in here before, of course, but only briefly, and at night, and he'd been a bit distracted. Yui had Ultraman posters on her walls, along with a poster that looked like it must have come from her family cruise to Alaska. Her desk had a pleasant color-changing lamp on it, along with a metal globe, some knitting materials, and 2 small plants. More plants lined the windowsill, and warm string lights were hung up behind her bed, which had a red comforter. There was a soft white carpet taking up much of the floor next to the bed. Yui went to the bed and sat down. She patted the spot next to her. Almost robotically, Izuku joined her there. I like your room, he said. It's very cozy. She subtly brightened at that. Thank you. Wasn't much for decoration before coming here, but the other girls helped me. That was nice of them. Yes, but Yui's face darkened. They can go too far sometimes. Yeah. Izuku scratched his neck sheepishly. About that, Takage sorta posted something about us on social media. From my phone, from my account. That's how my mom. What? Yui's blue eyes sharpened, and she suddenly leaned closer to him. She did what? Yui, it's not a big deal. It's just. She whipped her phone out with steely speed and rapidly reached the post. Her eyes darted around the image and then the caption. Her lip was quivering. She did that without your permission. I mean, yeah, well, I was sort of stuck in a chair getting my hair assaulted. Yui's face twitched. She set her phone back down and looked him dead in the eye. Are you? Her head tilted cutely. Why aren't you upset? Oh, Izuku's face reddened a little. Should I be? I mean, my mom was gonna find out eventually. And no one else that isn't a student here follows the account, besides Kaken's parents. Izuku. Yui curled her lip. Besides, much worse has been done to me by girls back in middle school. Haha. Izuku, you don't have to bury this. If you're not gonna be mad about it, then I will. I'll go tell her off. Yui got up abruptly from the bed. Wait, no. Izuku gripped her desperately, terror striking through him. No, I don't want you to stand up for me. I can't allow it. I am the next symbol of peace. You've already done so much, so let's just smile and pretend to not care about it and wear a mask and... Oh God, he'd messed this up, hadn't he? Strange feelings were bubbling up inside him. Why did Yui have to fight all his battles? What was he, anyway, trying to deflect this sort of thing like it was no big deal? That had never worked for him at Aldra. It had just made people more likely to target him since they knew he wasn't gonna fight back. Even if Takage is just trying to help. She's like a Shido, or Hagakure, or even, in a way, like those popular girls back in middle school. Not nearly as malevolent, but if she hears this from Yui, she will just point at me and say that since I'm not saying anything, I must not care that much, and it must not be a big deal. And these things will keep happening. The two of us won't get any peace. I will talk to her, Izuku promised out loud. I will do it, so please stay. I'm sorry. His grip on her shirt tightened, his hands trembling. Yui's eyes softened. Okay, Izuku, she murmured. And she sat back down next to him. Almost naturally, their arms slid around each other, and Yui buried her face in his chest with a muffled sigh. The pleasant scent of her hair wafted up to him. She was very warm. Izuku flushed again, and scooted back a bit, to lean against the headboard of the bed. She came with him, and they remained like that, holding each other. This is cuddling, he commented, his voice sounding awkwardly high-pitched. Yui responded, with a soft giggle that tickled his chest. Do you want to do anything else? Like, watch something, or, I think I'd just like to stay like this for a bit, she answered. Well, all right. Izuku tightened his grip on her a little, and they settled in against her pillows. Minutes ticked by. His eyes blinked slowly. He felt her chest rise and fall against his, their slow breathing nearly synchronized. Their legs were all tangled together, and he was over-aware of the suppleness of her thighs. Yui seemed perfectly content. I have made her this way. She feels content and safe with me. A fierce, protective pride swept through him, unlike anything he'd ever felt before. It was daunting. This was a responsibility he never imagined that he might assume. Tired, Yui mumbled. What we do is so tiring. Yeah, Izuku breathed in agreement. I could do this after every day of school if I could. Well, he cleared his throat. Whenever you're free, just shoot me a text and I can be right over. Or you can come over to mine, if you like. And we can just rest. Yui hummed agreeably. I'd like that. One of his hands was on her back. He began to rub it through her shirt, massaging her, moving his fingers in circles. Yui purred like a cat and snuggled in closer to him. A goofy grin spread across his face. It occurred to him that Yaoyorozu had been correct. He was falling in love with her. The feeling was filling him up. He was drowning in it. Yui lifted her head up to stare into his eyes. He met her gaze. Her eyelids were half down, and her cheeks seemed remarkably flush. Their breaths mingled in the space between their faces, and then as easily as that, they were kissing. It was immediately a different feeling from the previous kisses they'd shared. Izuku's heart wasn't just fluttering, it was pounding. He lifted Yui as they kissed, pulling her up and sitting up straight. She settled in his lap and wrapped her legs around him. Her hands traveled up and down his chest and shoulders. He ran his hands up her legs and squeezed her thighs, then her butt. He couldn't help himself. Yui gasped throatily into his mouth, tilted her head, and deepened the kiss. Her tongue slid forward and found his, wrapping and tussling with it. They rocked and bucked against each other. His hands found her supple waist and rested there, as they kept making out. Izuku's head swam. He was long past forming coherent thoughts. How many minutes had passed? 5, 10. She tasted wonderful, like vanilla cream. He didn't want to stop. Never wanted to stop. He slid up one of his hands to her hair and ran his fingers through it. Her dark, silky hair. He gripped the back of her head and kissed her harder. A soft moan escaped her as their tongues battled. One of her hands came down and gripped his other hand, the one that was still on her waist. She took it, gently, and guided upward. Up to her breast. Izuku faltered, hesitant. His hand hung in the air, away from her chest. Izuku, she breathed, in between kisses, rocking against him more and more. It's okay. Kiss ... you can. Carefully, he reached forward and cupped her breast. Softly, slowly. Her body seemed to tighten a little, and it occurred to him how sensitive they must be. He massaged it with some trepidation, as Yui's kisses became more insistent and rapid. His other hand slid down and went under her shirt, going back up to grip the bare skin of her back. He felt her bra straps back there, and his heart skipped a beat. Thoughts were starting to creep back in. How far are we about to go? Does she want to go further? I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Even though his body certainly was. He kissed her forcefully and squeezed her breast just a little. Another moan escaped her, and she suddenly locked her arms around his neck, at the elbows, and they were falling, her backward and him forward. Izuku hung over her, breaking the kiss for a moment, gazing into her eyes. They were both gasping, red-cheeked, flooded with body heat. Her hands went up to either side of her head, near where his own had come to rest. Her legs were bent upward on either side of his. Her dark hair splayed out behind her on the bed, and her blue eyes looked up at him vulnerably, her chest rising and falling, just barely brushing his at its peak. Izuku got his breathing under control. He didn't break eye contact with her. We should only do something that we're both totally ready to do, he said. A hint of instant disappointment flashed through Yui's eyes, but it was gone a moment later. You're right, she muttered. She broke eye contact with him and looked to the side. I'm sorry, I got carried away. Don't apologize. It was lovely. You're lovely. And I want to do more with you. But, I think we should plan it. It shouldn't be a moment where we get swept up like that. It's a big deal, you know. He had no idea where these words and opinions were coming from, since he'd hardly ever thought about it, but they seemed right enough. Yui nodded. That all makes sense. She sighed and closed her eyes. You're really smart, Izuku. And I'm glad that you're so respectful. I wouldn't have you any other way. A happy feeling went through him at that. He pushed himself off of her and fell next to her on the bed, so that they laid side by side. Their chests continued to rise and fall as their breathing slowed, coming down from the high that they'd reached. Almost immediately, Izuku felt some kind of sense of biological disappointment. His brain knew that they were doing the right thing, but his body was still responding to her presence, and intrusive thoughts about how nice and soft and warm she'd felt kept flooding in. How she smelled, how she tasted, how round and supple she was in all the right places. Does she feel this strongly about me? I find it hard to imagine, but these feelings might just be taking us over. He found that it was not something he entirely wanted to stop. Yui sat up. Come on, let's watch something. Let's watch some Ultraman. Izuku brightened. Anything to take his mind off of this would maybe be good right now. Sure. They settled in on the floor in front of her bed, the soft glow of the TV bathing their faces. They started an episode. Yui leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her. Around 15 minutes in, a fight scene started. Izuku giggled when one of the monsters jumped. These effects are gloriously awful, he said. That's why I love it so much, Yui hummed. It makes me laugh. I'd take this over all those fast modern action movies any day. Well, Izuku clicked his teeth. To its credit, at least it shows everything in stable wide shots. Those movies they're all so close in and shaky now, to hide gaps in the choreography. They should just make a documentary about you. Yui poked him in the chest. Your fights are always super cool and they're not even choreographed. Filming one would be as easy as just pointing a camera at the sky and letting it happen. Izuku hadn't considered that at all. There were several documentaries about All Might, so it stood to reason that if he became as big one day, then there would be some about him, too. Well, you've got to have some real eye candy in there, so you'll be in the documentary too. Yui giggled. You're learning. She snuggled up to him. They watched 3 episodes. Yui had seen them all before, but Izuku hadn't in a long time, and he had some funny reactions. She was glad that he seemed to be genuinely responding well. The fact that he had known about Ultraman and had a past with it all seemed too good to be true. All of this felt too good to be true. She felt his chest rise and fall beneath her head. His warm form was so pleasant to lean against. She wondered if he was aware of how he made her feel, and if he felt the same way. I was leading us in that make-out session before, and he stopped us. But maybe he is just afraid of his own feelings. She got the sense that they were both probably quietly overthinking it to themselves. Izuku had an uncanny ability to guess her thoughts and emotions, even as she was getting better at letting them display more easily on her face. And that went both ways as well. Sometimes it feels like we can understand each other without having to say too much at all, which was just fine with her. The prospect of meeting his mom, though that was a bit scary. There was no way she wasn't fiercely protective of him. He's a mama's boy through and through. She smiled to herself, despite her anxiety. I will have to step up and talk about myself and about what I want from him, which I don't fully know yet, or understand. The idea that she would be in a documentary about him it had been a throwaway joke, sure, but it also made her think. Would this relationship last a long time? Would they even be an established hero couple someday? That made her head spin, but she didn't hate the idea. And she knew that if she was going to, her face flushed. Lose my virginity. I want it with him. I want it to be him. But that was like, a lot to process right now. Even as the environment around them was cozy and relaxed, that feeling made her paradoxically more in love with him, and therefore more excited and thinking about things that were entirely unrelaxing. She wished she could just settle down, but it was hard. The 3rd episode ended. Izuku checked his phone. Well, it's getting kinda late. My classmates will be expecting me for dinner. He began to stand up. Yui stood up with him and walked over to the TV to turn it off. When she turned back around, he was putting his things back in his pockets, turning for the door, getting ready to leave. She just wanted a little more. Just a little more from him before he went. She needed it. Wait. Izuku turned back, his face inquisitive and cute, one eyebrow up. She walked up to him and kissed him again. She was worried that he'd pull back, tell her she was coming on too strong. But he responded. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her closer. She leaned on her tiptoes, her lips moving against his. She hummed, gripping his shoulders tightly. She didn't know what came over her, but she began to twist. Their lips broke apart with a pop and she pushed her butt against him, as his arms instinctively went around her front. They gasped and breathed together, swaying and rocking in place, him pushed up against her from behind. Yui felt profoundly not in control of herself. Izuku's lips found her neck. Yui gasped. An electrifying feeling seized her entire body, goosebumps spreading down her arms and legs, as his lips moved against that warm, sensitive place. He sucked and licked at it, sending little tingles out from the spot. Her toes curled, and she curved her body back into his, breaths coming out of her high and squeaky. He seemed like he was about to pull away, but she reached up with one arm and put it backward around his neck, holding his head in place. "Don't you dare stop," she breathed. He kept it up. His hands wandered around her front, brushing against her boobs just a little. She pushed her butt against him more. "Bite me," she blurted, her face growing impossibly red. "Where on earth did that come from?" "Bite me, Izuku, please, just a little, just a little." He hummed in affirmation and she felt his teeth nibble at her neck. A whole new feeling swept her, and it sharpened and flooded her lower body. A stirring that became a heat that became a wetness. Yui moaned as his teeth lightly scraped her. And then his lips dragged back and away. His body moved off of hers. She sighed, feeling that wonderful sensation of pleasure fade out of her, relaxing her body and going flat-footed again. She turned back around, keeping her hand on his neck, and gave him one last appreciative kiss on the lips. "Thank you," she murmured. I didn't really know what I was doing," Izuku confessed. "You were wonderful. We should we should keep figuring out what we like. Both of us." Yui smiled faintly. "I agree. Okay, I'm gonna get going now." His face was furiously red. Robotically, he turned toward the door, opened it, turned back around, looked at her again. Yeah, Yui echoed, still smiling at him. I low. Izuku coughed. "I like you a lot, Yui." "Thank you." Yes. "See you tomorrow." "You have a good night." "Good night to you too," she breathed. He'd almost said it. Soon. Then the door closed between them, and he was gone. Satsuna Takage was cleaning up dishes with Itsuka and Ryuko when Midoriya reappeared downstairs. "Oh, hey, man of the hour. You heading back to your place?" she asked him. "Yeah." He walked past the kitchen area toward the door, somewhat quickly. There was a shadow over his face. Itsuka stepped up. "You're welcome back anytime, Midoriya. Hey, is everything okay?" Ryuko's eyes widened. "Midoriya, did something happen?" The green-haired boy stopped and turned around. He looked Satsuna dead in the eye. "You got into my phone and posted on my social media without my permission," he said. Satsuna gulped. Sorry, Green. I saw the post from my end, gave it a like. It's doing really well, actually, so you don't have to." "Takage," he interrupted her, and something about his tone made her shut right up. "For what it's worth, I think you're cool, and even funny. But this crossed the line." Satsuna laughed nervously and looked toward Itsuka and Ryuko. "Aw, come on, Green, don't be like. I'm serious. If you ever invade my privacy like that again, or Yui's, I will get the administration involved. And that is a battle you will lose." He turned away and left the building. Satsuna's gut reaction, after she began to get over her terror, was annoyance. She opened her mouth, tried to think of something to shout after him. Trying to think of anything he'd done that had ever crossed a line. But couldn't think of a single thing. Of course not. He was Izuku Midoriya, and this time he was totally right. "Damn it," she muttered. Itsuka and Ryuko were staring daggers at her. It was not a good feeling, being on the receiving end of a righteous fury that the boy usually only reserved for villains. It really made her feel like garbage. Yui appeared a moment later. "Hey, Yui," said Ryuko. "Hello, Yui," greeted Itsuka. The dark-haired girl seemed inquisitive. She gave Satsuna an honest look. "Did he say something to you?" Satsuna put her chin down on the kitchen counter and stretched out her arms in front of her, depressed. "Yeah," she muttered. "I'm sorry." Yui grinned a little. "Just do better in the future, and I think we'll be fine." Her blue eyes seemed distant. "I'm just glad he's standing up for himself. But he really didn't want me to do it for him. That's still something. We will have to work through." "So then I had to open my big mouth," said Yui, giggling. "Well, big at the time, anyway." Izuku nodded along, holding her close by her hips on his bed. "Well, now I know that your mouth can still be big when you want it to be." He was not brave enough to say that out loud without blushing. "I told him, sir, what if you did it like this?" Yui made her voice high, an absurd imitation of her younger self. She blinked her pretty blue eyes like an innocent young child, her long eyelashes fluttering. "What if you did it all on the internet, sir? Have one big project that everyone can share, and all the effects and sound and music people can do their work at the same time." It seemed perfectly sensible to me. She flipped a length of her black hair out from the front of her face to behind her ear, and then scooted forward into Izuku a little, her arms around his neck and massaging it lightly. "I knew that there was online software and applications for spreadsheets and documents and stuff like that. That was what my mom worked with all the time." Her eyes briefly flashed away to the wall, and then back. "So why not have it work for a film?" "And what did he say?" asked Izuku, chuckling. Yui sighed and rolled her eyes. He started sputtering about file sizes, and transcoding, and how the industry has never done it that way, etc. I think he was trying to make me look and feel like a little kid who didn't know what she was talking about, but I think I had him stumped. I was too revolutionary for him to handle. She had taken on a faux haughty voice, moving her shoulders back and forth playfully. I could have changed the film industry forever if I'd moved on from there, but now I'm here. Instead you changed my life forever, Izuku blurted, staring into her eyes. Yui blushed and laughed, averting her gaze nervously. Her hips shifted against his. You're funny. Don't say things like that so casually. Well, he sounded like quite the man to have as a friend's dad. Working as an assistant editor must be stressful. Yeah, I mean, I only finally brought it up to him because I was tired of hearing him complain about that stuff all the time. He was always talking about how the producers would unlock the picture and make him send it back and forth between different teams, or how there'd be an error in the rendering of the dailies ... all kinds of stuff that I saw as an easy fix if everyone was seeing the same film at the same time instead of emailing each other whenever they have a problem. The movies are so archaic. And he was so proud of it, too. He was always saying I work in the industry. All the time. When he would make toast for Seiya and me, it'd be, well, as someone who works in the industry, and so on. Never the film industry. Just ... the industry. Like it was the only one. She was giggling as she explained it. I guess those sorts of people get big heads about it, Izuku commented, moving his hands in circles on her hips a bit. Just imagine ... he's like, I work in the industry. He made his voice absurdly deep. And then ... KRSSHHH ... sir. That's great, but there are people behind you in the drive-thru. Yui laughed much louder at that, shifting against him, and he joined her. Hey haha. Hi. She sighed and tilted her head sideways, smiling at him. You're funny. You already said that, Izuku pointed out. She poked him in the nose. I'll repeat myself as often as I want. For example, you're cute. Izuku felt heat in his ears. Stop. Don't be silly, haha. It's true. Well, you're cute too. Thank you. She grinned and leaned to kiss him. Since she was sitting in his lap, she had to lean down and cradle Izuku's chin in her fingers, tilting his head up to meet her lips. They separated after only a second, slowly, but Yui's head moved forward, her mouth open, as if she was anticipating another kiss. She breathed on his lips and then darted back. Izuku wondered if she was teasing him. He noticed something on the underside of her chin that he'd noticed before. He moved his hand up from her hip, stroking her front until he reached her neck, and then he rubbed the faint scar lightly. How'd this happen? Yui smiled and screwed her face up at him. Not as interesting as all yours, I'm afraid. Was it not a battle? She shook her head. No, I was really young. I fell forward while playing soccer. Another girl tripped me. Izuku sucked in breath through his teeth. That sounds painful. Wait, isn't soccer usually played on grass? This was indoor soccer. On a gym floor. Oh, that seems dangerous for kids. Yui shrugged. I lost a bunch of skin. The scar was like a very obvious red until middle school, when it finally faded to only really being noticeable if you see from an angle like. She looked down at him and shifted her hips again, her lips twitching up into a little smile. Izuku swore she was doing that on purpose. How old were you? 3 or 4. Izuku frowned. He supposed it would have to be that. Old world sports were not really popular anymore post-quirk emergence. The only ones who still played them, really, were quirkless leagues and very young kids whose quirks hadn't come in yet, at around age 3 or 4. It was good for parents, he supposed, since kids had endless energy at that age. Signing them up for a normal sport made sense right up until their quirk came in. Izuku himself had never done something like that, though. Haken's playground antics usually expended most of his daily energy. Later on, after, well, the diagnosis, his mom had tried to sign him up for a quirkless soccer league, but Izuku had declined. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't even remember why he had done so. It might have been nice. Yui poked him in the chest. Hey, Izuku. What are you doing? Izuku started. He realized he'd been staring right into her eyes, but thinking about something else, for what was probably at least half a minute. He didn't want to give her the wrong idea. I drifted off somewhere. Sorry. She smiled and shook her head, not breaking eye contact. You can't just gaze at me longingly like that and not even be thinking about me. That's not fair. Sorry. Izuku repeated, blushing. She ran her hand through his hair. Her eyes darted down to his lips again. He knew what she wanted. It was just, come on, dear, she muttered, her hips starting to move in his lap just a little. I feel like I'm always the one initiating our kisses. Come here, Izuku. Kiss me. Well, when she said it like that, there was no way he could say no. When their lips met, Yui sighed happily, and Izuku realized she'd just been waiting for this. He had been too, though it took a lot for him to even admit it to himself. They kissed and kissed as their hands explored each other. For the past 3 weekends it had been like this. They would have a date on Friday night, going out somewhere interesting, like shopping or to the arcade or karaoke or something like that. Then, they would come back, to Yui's room or Izuku's ... and just make out. For hours. The next day, they would spend most of it in one room or the other, alternating between studying, watching TV, talking, and kissing. Izuku knew he was getting addicted to it. Drunk on her. Sometimes they would briefly separate, talk about stopping soon, and then keep going for another hour. Last Friday they'd ended up kissing for 4 hours straight, from 10 p.m. after they'd gotten back from their date, all the way to 2 in the morning. That had been especially bad because Yui had simply collapsed on top of him at the end of it, fallen fast asleep, and they'd ended up spending the night together. That was the only time they'd slept in the same bed. They had not done that again ... or escalated past kissing at all. At any point, Izuku would kiss her neck and her chest, and she would nibble on his ears, and they'd grind on each other, occasionally changing positions so one of them was on top of the other ... but they never took it all the way. Most of the time, Yui just sat in his lap like she was doing now, or they'd both lay sideways and kiss, getting tangled up with each other and twisting the bedsheets all askew. But they never took it all the way. She was moving her hips on his again. Usually she did this if they were in this position, and Izuku responded, more out of necessity than anything, because he was hard, and it hurt not to move. But he had no idea if she wanted to escalate, because they had never done so or even talked about it since that initial conversation. While he was hard and she was wet, neither of them had any idea how to move on from here. It was a frankly terrifying thought, no matter how much either of them would crave a release. Yui began to kiss him a bit harder, sucking on his mouth and biting his lip gently, pulling it away with her whenever she separated. Izuku shuddered. That felt nice. Then she was moving across his cheek, planting little wet kisses along his face as her hands moved up and down his chest. That felt nice, too. And finally she blew hot breath into his ear, and began kissing and nibbling it. That felt nicest. Izuku gasped. It always sent tingles down his whole body when she did this, right down to his feet. She knew how to push all his buttons. How much time have we spent doing this by now? He wondered, as he began to gently massage her breasts through her bra. His fingers circled her nipples and her breathing grew high in pitch. Izuku, she breathed. If you added up all the time, would it take up a full 24 hours? Have we spent a full day just ... like this? Izuku leaned down and began to kiss her chest, in a line right above her bra. He knew he was falling deeper and deeper in love with her. This was such a trap. He could hardly focus on anything anymore. He was always thinking about doing this when they weren't doing it. Izuku, she repeated. Please, you're gonna. Slightly alarmed, Izuku pulled back gently, and looked back up to stare into her eyes. Her eyebrows were raised and tilted outward. Her mouth was slightly open, and she was brushing her hands up and down his neck lovingly. She seemed rather lost in pleasure. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered, feeling a little guilty. Was that too much? It's fine, it's fine. She managed a weak smile. It's just, I want you so bad. Izuku opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Wow, lame. Even now I suck at this. What should I say, even? That we should just go ahead and do what we're both craving to do. You're not on birth control, he managed, weakly. Yui shook her head. Do you have any? She coughed, blushing, and glanced around his room briefly. Condoms. No, Izuku frowned. He supposed it would be easiest if he just went and bought some. But he'd have to do self-checkout. To buy condoms and use a man checkout line was a mortifying thought, even though he supposed people did it all the time. What's wrong with me? I'm literally a hero. People recognize me on the street sometimes, and I'm afraid to buy condoms. Actually, now that he thought about it, that might make it even worse. What if people at the drugstore recognized him as he was buying them? They'd want to know who he was planning to do it with. Yui's chest rose and fell as she took a deep breath. Well, that's fine. I'm sorry. No, don't be. She gave him a deep gaze, cradling his cheek in her hand. It isn't inherently your responsibility, but a lot of things are, he half whispered. A great many things. Listen to me, Izuku. You needed a break. You deserve this. You deserve to just sit here with me and enjoy yourself and relax ... so don't feel bad about it, okay? Please. I wish I knew how to make you not feel bad. You do the most just by being you, he muttered. And being here. Yui smiled. Well, you know how to make me feel nice, at least. She shifted her hips again. In more ways than one. See mirror. She pulled him backward so he would lay on top of her, and they kept kissing, falling back into their familiar rhythm. Just a bit later, Yui briefly stopped to take a sip of water and to check her phone. Her eyes widened a little as the screen light bathed her face. What time is it? Izuku asked. It's past midnight. I ought to be going back. We're going to your mom's tomorrow. I want to be well rested for that. Yui, I'm telling you ... my mom's gonna love you no matter what. I am still nervous. And ... well. She blushed, unable to make eye contact all of a sudden. I dunno. It's silly. Izuku nudged her. It's okay. I never think you're silly. Say it. What? Yui laughed. I really want to impress her. You know, I want her to not even believe that you found someone as good as me. That's so stupid, right? I must sound like the most egotistical person alive. Honestly, that's really sexy, Izuku blurted. Yui cut herself off. Oh. Her ears turned a fierce red. I see. I mean it. I love how confident you really are on the inside. How fiercely prideful you can get. I love that about you. You make me more confident, too. He poked her in the belly affectionately. If you want to knock her socks off, then by all means go for it. You won't see me complaining. Yui bit her lip. Yeah, but ... it means I should probably get going. Yeah. She began to move off the bed and stand up, but Izuku picked her up by the thighs and lifted her off himself. She squealed in surprise and threw her arms around his neck. When her feet found the floor and stabilized, the two of them standing together, she began to laugh weakly, and then they were both giggling. Phew. I wasn't expecting that, she breathed, and leaned her face against his chest for a moment. Oh, that scared me a little. Sorry, Izuku apologized again. No, I liked it. I like how strong you are, she said huskily. I feel so protected when I'm with you. She began to get back into her outer layer of clothes, gathering her things and preparing to leave. When she was almost ready, she briefly turned back to look at Izuku. He looked right back at her. They stood there next to his bed, staring. Yui made a soft sigh and moved toward him again, putting her arms around his neck. His hands instinctively went to her hips. They stared into each other's eyes. I really gotta go soon, she whispered. I know, he whispered back. They kissed anyway. Maybe part of their minds intended for it to be a short goodbye kiss, but it quickly got out of hand. Izuku moved his hands up under her shirt and rubbed her back softly. She moaned, and then separated, shrugging back out of the shirt she'd just put on, and pulled him onto the bed again, keeping him close, as pressed against her as she could possibly have him. And they kissed for another half hour. Finally, Yui got up, got all her stuff together, and moved toward the door. And they shared a real goodbye kiss, though even this one lingered for a few seconds longer than expected. Good night, she whispered. I'll see you tomorrow, Kay. Tomorrow, he echoed. Sleep well. I shall. She pecked him on the lips one more time, and then went out the door. Izuku was left alone. He was suddenly conscious of the yawning quiet in his ears, of the creeping dark cold of his empty room. But the ghost of her warmth lingered. He could still feel her touches and kisses all over him. Like when one spent all day at the beach, and when laying down to sleep, one could still feel the rhythmic push and pull of the waves. Yui, as she walked back to her own dorm and set her things down, preparing to have a rather late shower, was thinking much the same thing. She could still sense Izuku all over her. It was so comforting. He was so exploratory and attentive to all of her, and he always knew where and when to tease her most sensitive areas. The only way she could describe the warm, fuzzy feeling she had now was well felt. She felt well felt and loved, though they hadn't even said to each other that they loved each other, or gone past what was essentially not even yet foreplay. She was rather tired, though. Sleepiness always really took hold of her after she and Izuku separated, and it usually pervaded throughout her day now, whenever she wasn't with him. It was hard to focus on anything else, even as their hero studies grew more and more robust. But regardless, tomorrow she would meet in Midoriya, and that meant shower. Take shower now. She would just have to be sure not to fall asleep in there, because that would be bad. Izuku woke up to a faint sweet scent. After turning off his alarm with a blind arm reach, he lifted his head up slightly. He bunched his covers up in his hand and lifted them to his nose. It was in fact them. His covers and sheets smelled of Yui. Well, wasn't that just nice? A warm, hopelessly in love head spin right away, first thing in the morning. He felt dizzy. I really should tell her I love her at some point. He got up and began to get ready for the day, when his phone buzzed. He had 2 texts. One was a good morning text from Yui, which he replied to immediately before checking the other one. The other one was from All Might. Midoriya, my boy. Just letting you know that we've moved locations for today's training. We'll be in the J gym due to an incident with some third years that requires repairs. See you there. Izuku's eyes widened, his toothbrush hanging out of his mouth. He'd totally forgotten that he was doing one for all training today. That is weird. When have I ever once forgotten about one for all? And All Might, and being a hero, and hero training, and wow. Silly me. I'm so scatterbrained these days. Well, it's a simple fix. He remembered now, their training started at 9 and would only go to noon, and he and Yui weren't planning to depart until 2. So everything was fine. He had been hoping for them to hang out a bit before they left, but now that wasn't really possible. But whatever. When have I ever used that word in reference to hero training, either? Izuku shrugged. He was just being goofy. He'd been having some real focus problems lately, but maybe this training would snap him back into the game. He shot All Might a text saying, no problem, and went back to brushing his teeth. Briefly, as he turned away from the mirror, he thought he saw someone else standing there, in the mirror, out of the corner of his eye. A dark-haired woman, taller than himself. Hands on her hips. Nana Shimura. Izuku looked back into the real bathroom, in the space behind himself. There was no one here. All the other boys were either sleeping in or getting morning exercise. He was alone. He rubbed his eyes and sighed. I'm going crazy. Before he and Yui had really started getting intimate, it was rare for him to stay up past midnight. Now he was doing it all the time, and spending that late time doing some rather physically and mentally stimulating things. Oh well. Before he left, he looked back into the mirror one more time. No Nana. Of course. Obviously not. What do you have planned for the rest of your day, my boy? All Might asked. Izuku bit his lip, concentrating as he floated in midair, holding up 17 crates with black whips. Save for the very first time he'd unleashed the quirk, he'd never been able to maintain more than 20 whips for any period of time, let alone having them all do something. Are you trying to distract me? Is this part of the training? He called down to the gaunt blonde man standing on the floor of the gym. All Might chuckled. No, I'm just genuinely curious about your life, young man. Izuku scrunched his eyes up. It was taking all his concentration just to keep these whips corporeal. Gonna have a massive headache for this later, I just know it. I'm going out with Yui. All Might whistled. Still not used to hearing you say her first name. Well, where to? Planning to spy on us, All Might. You and Midnight or whoever. Why would we do that? The teachers have bets on students' relationships. You guys are super nosy. That's a serious accusation, young man. Who told you of this? Kaminari and Maita. All Might deadpanned. Now, young Midoriya, you know how much you can trust that piece of information. We're going to my mom's place. Izuku decided to answer the question anyway. Has young Kodai met your mother before? No. His fists began to tremble, knuckles white and bloodless beneath his gloves. The weight of the crates was starting to snake its way up through his muscles. That's nerve-wracking, young man. Do you think you're ready for it? I mean, Izuku's voice sounded smaller. I'm sure it will be fine. He dropped a crate, then another. Then it was like a cascading flood of boxes crashing to the floor. Izuku sighed as he released his body from the tension it had been holding, and floated back to the ground. You were trying to distract me after all. That was not my intention, All Might insisted. He looked contrite. Your mother is a very fine woman. Izuku raised an eyebrow. I just mean that ... she will be kind. To young Kodai. I'm sure of it. Well yeah, my mother can be kind to anyone, but that doesn't mean she likes them. And Yui, I want her to actually be herself. Man, I just hope it goes well. Izuku rubbed his forehead and closed his eyes. I'd just like to have one part of my future feel certain for once. All Might's blue eyes, sunken into the shadow of his angular face, shimmered with some weighted emotion. He mussed Izuku's hair affectionately. Your future, he said, looks brighter every day. I'll try not to ask you about these matters while we're training again. Keep training to training. You have enough to worry about, and I want you to stay focused. Izuku gave his mentor a long look. The man was smiling, but his tone and subtle facial mannerisms spoke of some barely suppressed doubt. Being with Yui has made me good at reading people. The thought terrified him. All Might was trying to be supporting but was doubting Izuku could handle it on the inside. What happened if things began to fray even more? Today he just dropped some boxes. But what if he dropped a civilian or something? Then those doubts would have to manifest into something else. Izuku shook his head to himself and walked over to the crates. Right now, what All Might was doing was remembering that Izuku was his own man, his own hero. And so he was only offering supporting advice without telling him what to do. Now I just have to remember that myself. He thought of Nana again. One for All seemed to be curled up in the back of his head, like a cat who was slightly scared of its owner. You can't tell me what to do either, he growled at it. Yui met Izuku at the gate at 2 like they'd planned. Today she was wearing her longish tan duster jacket, over her white turtleneck and black pants. It was sunny out despite being cold, so she kept her sunglasses nestled on her hair above her eyes. She wanted to look good but also appropriately modest. Midoriya seemed like the type of woman to be mortified at the idea of her son with a girl who showed a ton of skin in public. Even if I wouldn't be averse to doing that, it's wintertime anyway. And most of Yui's wardrobe looked about like this. Izuku, as he always did when she dressed up a little, lost his ability to speak for a few seconds. Just long enough for her to grin a little. What? She asked goadingly. You look pretty, he told her. Thank you. So do you. Izuku's eyes widened. Me. PR. I mean, if you say so. He laughed a little and folded out his arm for her to hold on to. She accepted it with a smile and off they went. What's your apartment like? She asked after a minute. Oh, I mean ... it's not much. You'll see soon enough. It's about what you'd expect for an apartment intended for 2 people. Izuku frowned. Yui searched his face. She knew his dad was not around, but she'd never received that many details. But I can't really pry when I haven't been forthcoming about my family situation, either. It did not take them long to arrive at Izuku's building. Yui wasn't great with directions, so she didn't know where Yui was from here, but she felt like if she craned her neck and looked in the right place, she would still see it on its lofty hill. It must have been nice before the dorms, she commented, to live so close. Yeah, haha. Izuku scratched his neck. I've sort of lived in the school's shadow my whole life. It was a nice motivator, even if sometimes I wanted to move. His face grew dark. But Mom's work is here, so here we stay. He smiled and pointed up the stairs. Let's go. They reached the door. The door was gray, austere. Yui realized her heart was racing something fierce. She licked the inside of her mouth. It was dry as a bone. I'm liable to open my mouth and do nothing but squeak. She refused to shut down and act like her old self in here. She would make a good impression, damn it. Izuku knocked and waved at the peephole. Mom, it's me. I'm here with ... Yui. Inside, there was muffled shuffling. Yui took a deep breath through her nose. Unconsciously, she gripped Izuku's arm more tightly. The door opened, and Yui found herself angling her head down, having been staring at the space where she'd expected Inko's height to reach. The woman inside the apartment was short, plump, but unquestionably Izuku's mother. Her green hair and worry lines on her face dispelled any alternative notions. Welcome, you two. She smiled, eyes gleaming genuinely. She waved them in with that rushed motherly fierceness. Come in, don't dally on the doorstep. They stepped inside, and Yui bowed shallowly. Sorry to disturb you, she said in her neutral, careful tone. Oh, don't worry dear, make yourself at home, said Inko, waving a reassuring hand. Her son and the girl took off their shoes and coats, hanging the latter on the set of hooks by the door. Inko put her hands on her hips. So, how's my precious boy doing? She pinched Izuku's cheek. He winced cutely. He got those freckles from Hisashi, and Ko wondered how much they'd contributed to the girl's attraction to him. I'm doing well, Mom. Training and studying and living pretty steadily. How are you? Inko shrugged. It's been good recently. Peaceful last couple of months in the neighborhood. Not many villain attacks. That's lovely to hear, said Yui Kodai. She had just finished putting that long tan coat of hers up on the hook, probably the most expensive coat that had ever been hung in the Midoriya household, and her slender hand brushed down it gracefully to return to her side. She'd been clinging on to Izuku when Inko had opened the door. Nervous. There were no such hints now that Inko could see. The girl scanned the apartment with those cold blue eyes. Her clothing and posture gave her a refined air, to the point where Inko felt the need to dart her own gaze back over the living space to see if she'd cleaned up well enough. You have a very nice home, the girl said after a moment. Her voice was level and airy. She had dangling gold earrings on that shifted in the light whenever she moved her head. Thank you, dear. Inko smiled. The girl was like a queen. A queen for her Izuku. She's rather terrifying, but hopefully that will be aimed in protection of him, not toward him. I've made some tea, if you'd like, Kodai-san. A slight smile came over the girl's face. Please. They moved to the table. Izuku habitually looked back and forth between his mother and his girlfriend. They were all pleasantries with each other, but the air in the room was so awkward. As the man, he was supposed to bridge this. Okay, how to bridge this? They sat down at the table, and Izuku looked down at his own tea just as Yui did the same with hers. Inko walked over to the counter to finish fixing her own. Yui picked up the cup and smirked a little. Green tea, Her eyes twinkled with humor, gaze dancing up to his hair. Izuku deadpanned at her. Hilarious. Inko's back was turned, but she chuckled after a second. It's always been his favorite. She sang. That's that's not always. Izuku muttered, as they both giggled at him. Oh, great. Now they had done their secret woman connection code thing. Guess I had nothing to bridge after all. A whole new fear would now have to take over. I have mere minutes before Mom pulls out my baby photos, I reckon. Kaminari and Shiro had warned him about this. Oh, would either of you like some cookies? Inko asked. She moved across the kitchen to pick up the step stool. They're not all that fresh, but they're shortbread. She placed the stool down in front of a high cabinet and got up onto it, opening the cabinet. Oh, dear. How'd I get them up there in the first place? She reached her arm and stretched it, fingertips brushing the box. Izuku's eyebrows went up in alarm. Oh, Mom, it's fine, we don't need cookies. Yui had stood up. She walked over to Inko and knelt down, placing her hand to the stool, and then putting her fingers together. The stool grew in size, a magic whooshing and glow accompanying it. Inko gasped in delight and grabbed the cookie box easily, looking back down. Izuku quickly stood up and helped her off the stool. But his mother's eyes were all for Yui. That's quite the quirk, dear. Izuku sighed. Speaking of quirks, you could have just used yours to pull it to yourself. Inko crossed her arms and tossed her ponytail. Well, sure honey, I could have. But Doc Matsuda gave me this regimen that includes not using my quirk for anything around the house. I mean, pulling things to me instead of standing up to grab them or picking them up is what got me like this in the first place. Izuku's mouth fell open, shocked. Why would you? I think it must be working, Yui said, quickly. You look great, Midoriya-san. Oh, aren't you sweet? Inko reached up and pinched Yui's face. Nice cheeks, too. Izuku sighed, exhaling. He took the cookie box and opened it, distributing one of the shortbreads to his girlfriend as they sat back down. That's not the real reason you gained weight, Mom. We both know it was from stress because of me. Can I get you anything else, dear? Inko asked the girl. Maybe some cheese or... Oh, this is just fine. It's lovely, thank you, Kodai answered, taking another sip of her tea. She was actually further down her cup than Izuku, which Inko found surprising, with how much he used to gulp this stuff up when he was younger. He's probably more nervous than she is. Inko smiled mischievously. Kodai really was a beautiful girl. No doubt Izuku had absolutely no idea why she was dating him, even though he'd grown up quite a bit himself. I'm proud of you, son. Have some pride in yourself. Every once in a while the two of them would exchange secret glances with each other, which Inko pretended not to notice. The girl's eyes were filled with affection. Those slight smiles she would pull said everything Inko needed to know. I wonder if she's less subdued around people her age. Surely I'm not intimidating her. You know, Izuku, you never told me how the two of you met, Inko said. Izuku lowered his cup and squirmed a little. Well, it was a party at the end of the fall semester between the two hero classes. I, needed to get away from the noise for a bit, and went to hide on the roof, and found her there. He let me borrow his sweatshirt, Yui put in. Yeah, and then we, I don't know, it just progressed from there, I guess. Izuku stared across the table at his partner, as if pleading for her to help him out. Yui smiled and exhaled through her nose. You're bad at remembering details. Inko laughed. Always has been. It was a nightmare trying to get him to talk about his days at school with me. Made me feel like an interrogator. How was school? Good, Mom. Did you get any homework? Yes, Mom. She made her voice all glum when she imitated him. Yui giggled, and Izuku turned red. You guys are too much, he sighed. Anyway, that's not really when we met, Yui said. Just when we started talking this most recent time. We met over a year ago at a joint training exercise. Izuku paled. That's true. I just didn't think that was what Mom wanted to hear when she asked the question. That rooftop story is quite sweet, it's true. Inko chuckled. What were you doing up there? Hiding, Yui said plainly. I've never been good with, social interaction. She had slouched a bit now, she was feeling more at ease. That was good. Well then, it's lucky you found each other, isn't it? Inko joked. Mom, Izuku hissed, mortified. But the two women just laughed with each other. Her son shook his head, as if certain he would never understand. Inko finished laughing and looked back at Yui. So, what was this joint training exercise? Each class was divided into 5 teams of 4, to fight a team from the other class, the girl explained. Her level voice and clear way of enunciating made it pleasing to listen to. She'd make a good audiobook narrator. Inko had been listening to a lot of audiobooks recently, and you two were on opposing teams. Both of them nodded and hummed agreement. I don't think I actually said a word to you, though, said Izuku. You did, afterward, Yui insisted. I was stuck to the pole by one of my hair thingies. It was on my stomach, so I was turned away, and you asked me why I was just standing there and if I needed any help. I didn't say anything, just turned around to show you the purple ball that was holding me there. You blushed in surprise and shouted at Mina to come release me. I remember that now. Izuku was blushing just like he'd been in the story. We didn't exactly introduce ourselves, though. Sorry for well, not remembering. That's alright. Yui took another sip of tea. That was the day you unlocked that new part of your quirk. With the whips, it had just been a few minutes before. Your brain was probably on overdrive. Not exactly focused on creating new memories. Oh, it was that day. Inko closed her eyes and clutched her chest. My goodness. When I got that phone call from the school, I about died. Don't say stuff like that, Mom. Izuku squeaked. It was scary in person, too, said Yui. Inko leveled her eyes at the girl. He's a handful, isn't he? That he is. Izuku was staring at them with his mouth half open. You guys know I'm right here. They both laughed again. Inko was very happy, she realized. Happy to talk with someone about Izuku. Happy to talk to anyone who wasn't her coworkers, really. And the fact that the girl remembered their very first interaction. Perhaps she'd been eyeing him for longer than he realized. Yui finished her tea. Excuse me a moment, she said politely, and moved toward the bathroom. Izuku watched her go. When the door closed, he looked back at his mother. He was sure his face betrayed his fears. Inko gave him a reassuring, almost tired smile. She's lovely, Izuku. A great girl. And she likes you a lot. Izuku felt heat rush to his ears all over again. How can you tell? We haven't even. He stopped talking. He had been about to say we haven't even hugged or held hands or anything in front of you. That had been sort of by design, though he didn't exactly know why he had an aversion to letting his mother know they were affectionate with each other. It all seemed kind of silly now that he thought about it. Because I'm a woman, dear. Inko tilted her head to sort of look at him with one penetrating eye. I can tell how much she likes you from everything she does. Do you like her? Izuku nodded. A lot, he croaked. Do you love her? Izuku's face twitched. For a moment, he was absolutely terrified that Yui could hear them from the bathroom. His mom hadn't exactly lowered her voice at all. The truth, now, his mother urged. Yes, reflexive. Blurted right out. Shit. Inko brightened, though something in her eyes remained grave. That's just fine, Izuku. Just fine with me. Her gaze danced to something far away, and somehow he knew she was thinking about Dad. You've got a good heart, Izuku, she murmured. Don't know where you inherited it from, but it's there. You don't give yourself enough credit, he told her gently. Don't let go of that girl, Izuku. His mother's grip on her teacup visibly tightened. Don't let her go no matter what. Izuku looked down at his own tea. He saw a shimmering version of himself reflected in the liquid. Dark silhouettes loomed behind his reflection. Dark silhouettes with glowing specks of different colors where their eyes should have been. The one at the front was unquestionably female. I won't, he promised, and picked up the cup to down the rest of the tea in one gulp. Yui briefly touched up her hair in front of the mirror, taking deep breaths. It was going well. Great, even. She and Inko had gotten off on the right foot. Thank goodness. She almost found herself looking forward to talking to her in the future. I could stand to have her as a mother-in-law. Now she was looking at a very red face reflected back at her. Great. Better get that under control before heading back out. She splashed a little water on herself, not enough to hit her clothes at all. A fool, a big old messy fool. If she wanted to have a future with Izuku, this was not the only family introduction that would need to happen. She had to pull her weight, as well. And that would be considerably more difficult. That can be for later. For now, Yui looked over at the framed photograph that was kept by the sink. A very young Izuku and his mother holding up swirling pinwheels to the camera, smiling widely, with a grassy hill and a blue sky behind them. They looked so happy. Yui sniffed. She turned away from the photograph with considerable effort, and stepped out of the bathroom. The three of them had finished their tea, and the sun had now appeared in the apartment window, just a few hours to go on its way down. Oh, I know something we could do, said Inko. Izuku, we could show her the murals. Oh yeah. Izuku cast a glance over at Yui, questioning. I suppose, if you want to, Yui. Yui tilted her head. What are they? It's just a whole area of street art. The property was bought out by some eccentric ages ago, and whoever they are, they let people paint whatever they want through there, Inko explained. Izuku's eyes widened. Oh, I actually didn't know about that. An eccentric, huh? I always just assumed the town council protected it. Well, they do. Plenty of people who live north of Ninaka Street want it all washed off. But here in our neck of the woods. Inko placed the teacups in the sink. We like to celebrate local culture. This sounds wonderful, said Yui. How close is it? It's just a few blocks away, said Izuku. We can walk. And so they did. Here it is, said Inko, pointing as they came around the corner. She had huddled up in a multi-layered shawl, and she hugged it close to herself as a gust of wind blew past. Yui looked around. This area was one she could only describe as mixed. There were local businesses on their side of the street that looked as if they'd seen better days, but just across the street was a newer-looking green space, and beyond that were large houses. In the third direction out of the intersection, the one Inko pointed down, the street was walled in by structures that reminded Yui of a skate park. But they were organized in almost labyrinthine fashion, and covered in art. Her jaw dropped, and she let out an airy gasp. The vapor cloud rose from her mouth into the air. Izuku rubbed his hand against hers and smiled, watching her reaction. Cool, huh? MMHMM. The tips of her cheeks and nose were red as they moved closer to the murals. Color and form mixed together in undulating patterns. Occasionally these patterns turned and swirled into recognizable shapes, and sections could be clearly demarcated by different art styles, the work of dozens of people who might have come through here. And yet, everything blended and connected, making it almost seem like one large piece. Yui looked down at her feet and saw she was walking on it, too. There was art on the sidewalk. Some of it was more like graffiti than anything else, but much of it looked elegant. The town should pay people to come through here, she said. This is so neat. Inko laughed. Maybe then the council would have enough money to lower our taxes. I think that might ruin it if they charged some kind of admission. Yui looked demure. That's true. Well, she glanced around at the upper-class environment that lay across and down the street. High-rises and office buildings loomed in the distance. I can see why this is so controversial. Yeah, it's in an inconvenient area of town for many. But still, where it is where it is. Inko rubbed her hands together and breathed on them, then stepped in between two of the gray concrete walls. You can sort of go inside of it. There's this little cove or hollow up through here. Yui gripped Izuku's hand tighter and followed. She nodded at the large houses before they went out of sight behind one of the art walls. That must be where Bakugo is from. Yeah. Kaken's family still lives like 3 blocks that way. Izuku inspected an area of the wall, partially in shadow, which depicted several different lizards with colored diamond patterns on their backs. When we were kids, none of this existed yet. It was a skate park, actually. Yui took another look at their surroundings. One of the walls sloped away, and 2 others formed together to create a groove. Yes, I can see that clearly. He pointed in between 2 walls to an area down the street, where a narrow strip of trees met the road from behind a convenience store. Back there's a drainage ditch. The trees widen out into a proper stretch of wood if you walk a bit of ways. It connects all the way to the preschool, which is about a mile to the east. Kaken and I used to play back there before. Izuku bit his lip. Yui gazed up at him, head slightly leaned to one side. Is that ditch the creek that you tried to help him out of? The one that made him so mad at you? Izuku looked back at her, and a smile crept onto his face. Something about your tone of voice just makes it sound stupider than it really felt. Well, I still think it's silly. She gripped his arm and pulled him along, staring at a portion of wall that had been painted to look like stars and galaxies. Hey, he did offer you a rematch. He thinks you're cool. That doesn't mean I have to think he's cool. Fair enough. Izuku shrugged. Look, there's All Might. He pointed at a portrait of the symbol of peace, formed from bright bolts of yellow lightning that seemed to carve through other scenes, framing him with his hands on his hips. I saw a few smaller All Mights on our way in. Yui smirked. I wonder how many there are. 27, last I was here, Izuku blurted, then shut his mouth like a mousetrap. She aimed her smirk at him, blue eyes glimmering. Izuku, dear. I definitely didn't paint any of them myself. Yui gasped, delighted. How many? Oh, did you paint anything else here? When did you start? How much of this is you? Keep your voice down. Izuku cast a look across the way, where his mother was standing on the opposite side of what used to be a half-pipe. Mom doesn't actually know that I painted some of this. I think she likes it as long as she knows I'm not involved. But, Izuku, that's really cool. It's just like the drawings in your notebooks. Can you? He slid one arm around the small of her back and swept her round in a circle, pulling them out of sight of his mother, and pressed her against one of the walls. Quietly, he said, in a fierce whisper, his eyes simmering. I'll give you the tour. Yui stared at him deeply, her chest rising and falling, mouth slightly open. She was paralyzed against the wall. Remember what I said last time about shutting me up? She breathed. How are you gonna do that, Izuku, and not kiss me? Izuku's face reddened. He suddenly seemed to realize that their faces were close, that he'd slammed her into a wall, and that his hand was next to her head. He seemed alarmed for a moment, and then quickly leaned in and kissed her. quickly. Sorry, he muttered when they broke apart. I guess I could have made that a cooler moment than it was. She grinned. I like you just at the level of coolness you're at right now. He somehow got even redder, but he took her hand again. Come on, I'll show you. As she expected, most of his additions to the maze of art were hero-related. There were no less than 6 All Mights, all in different styles, such as chibi or jagged or cartoon-like. He'd also drawn a gang orca, an Edgeshot, 2 Murkos and several obscure heroes Yui had never even heard of. They'll probably never know they had a fan outside their local areas, Izuku said, somewhat bittersweetly as they stared at his portrait of a hero called Starliner. They'll probably never know I painted this for them. But it's here, hopefully for a long time. That's what counts, I think. Yui squeezed his hand. You've done a good thing here, she said quietly. This is heroic in its own way, you know. Izuku looked at her. What do you mean? Just you know. Putting something out there. Contributing to something like an art scene. That enriches the world, I suppose. That's a type of heroism. Yui trailed off and looked down at the whole corridor of art that they stood amidst. I can't think of much of anything I've done that can compare. Hey, hold on. Izuku protested. You do your crocheting. You can make clothes, Yui. That's way more useful than this and it looks just as pretty in my opinion. I haven't had time to do any crocheting recently though. That doesn't matter. You'll have more time eventually. I mean, I'm wearing your scarf right now. He gestured to his own neck. You know, with the rise of hybrid hero businesses, you could sell your own line of clothes and I bet it would be super popular. Yui smiled and shook her head. Tears pooled in her eyes just a little. Listen to yourself, she muttered. I spoke up about my feelings and suddenly it's all about me. Even though we stand here in front of your achievement. You're too good, Izuku. Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve you. Izuku swallowed. She pressed herself into his side. He didn't know what to say. He was very unused to such praise being heaped onto him. But I can't let her get away with self-deprecation like that. Hey, I feel that way sometimes too. He wrapped his arms around her. That I don't deserve you. So, honestly, I don't think either thing is true. I know, Yui mumbled into his jacket. I know that deserve doesn't really come into it. I feel really blessed to be here, right now, with these things having worked out the way they did. Me too, Izuku agreed, chuckling a little. You have no idea how much I relate to that. Lightning in a bottle. Encountering the sludge villain and All Might that day by chance bringing me all the way down a tunnel that deposited me right here. But most of that she did not yet know about. Yet was a dangerous word, wasn't it? Izuku thought as the two of them pulled back from each other, Yui sniffing and recomposing herself. I'm going to tell her. Soon I will have to tell her. I will have to bring her into this. He stared at one of the All Mights that occupied the space above his painting of Starliner. Not one of his. He thought they got his face slightly wrong. Vlad King was grading papers when the boys walked in. He looked up and immediately took note of who was entering the empty classroom. Not the crowd you'd expect to come visit their homeroom teacher on a weekend. Oase, Rin, Tsuburaba, Kamakiri, Kiwaro. They had strange looks on their faces. Vlad could not immediately identify how they were feeling. Sensei, said Oase, could we have a moment of your time? Vlad sighed and lowered Takage science assignment, taking the glasses off the bridge of his nose. Sure, boys. What do you need? Noticeably absent were 3 of their usual crowd. Tetsu, Kaibara ... and Monoma. Most curious. Do you remember what you said a few months back? Rin asked. How if we ever had interesting ideas for lesson plans, we could present them to the staff and they'd take it into consideration. That's true, yes. Vlad stacked the papers up neatly. You're all developing quite quickly, and with 41 hero students to worry about, all with different quirks ... We teachers figured that if you had any good ideas as to how to develop yourselves, we should listen to them. Well, we've had an idea, said Tsuburaba. A hero lesson or exercise of sorts. Is that so? Vlad King asked, not even pretending to sound surprised. No, what else would it be? He had figured out their faces now. They were trying to appear casual but were deeply bitter about something on the inside. But what was it? You remember the period of time last year, right after the first war, said Kiwaro, in which darkness ravaged the land. Our country was out of control for a month, vagabonds and gangs running the streets, unlicensed quirk use rampant, until the heroes managed to clean everything up. I remember all too well, said Vlad. I know that was a hard time for all of you kids. If there's anything I can help with. It's nothing like that, said Oase quickly. We just thought. He looked at his fellow classmates. We thought that it would be a good thing to have an exercise that simulated an environment like that, said Rin. In case it happens again. Vlad King rubbed his chin. What are you suggesting, boys? How could we simulate such an environment here at the school? A battle royale, Kiwaro snarled. A free-for-all in an arena with all 41 of us at this grade level. No time limit. Last hero standing. Vlad King's eyes widened. A shiver went down his spine as he stared at all the boys who were nodding in unison. He understood now. A battle royale. All 41. No, that part was crucial. 41. They wanted classy involved without a doubt. That explains the bitterness. Boys, Vlad muttered. I won't deny that the staff have had discussions about a potential exercise to prepare you more for the situations like we saw at the end of last year. However, many of them have been shot down due to the risk. The risk? Tsuburaba asked, raising an eyebrow. The mental risk. Many of your classmates, names confidential, have sought out therapy and mental recovery help after that time period. It was deeply troubling for us all, and some more than others. UA cannot put those students, simulation or otherwise, into a potentially traumatizing scenario. But you're training us all to be heroes, right? Kiwaro said, a little too aggressively. There will be all kinds of darkness out in the field regardless. That's true, but it doesn't mean we have to subject any of you to an exact copy of things you have already gone through. That isn't what we're suggesting, Vlad-sensei, and you know it, said Rin emphatically. Come on. Vlad swallowed. Well, true. The battle royale idea is not one that has been tossed around. Have you refined the idea at all? It would be in one of the big city areas, said Oase. Alliances allowed, Tsuburaba added, but only until the final 10. And only alliances of up to 4. One less than the group you have now, thought Vlad King. That was an interesting detail. Anything else? How are people eliminated? The boys exchanged glances. We had a few ideas about that. It could be a target system like what was used at the licensing exam. Rin put in, but Kamakiri shook his head. No, it should be knockouts or tap-outs only. Now, Kamakiri, said Vlad. You know we can't. Fine, maybe knockouts or tap-outs if that's what it gets to, but there can be prison cages located around the arena or something. As a compromise, and your allies can break you back out of them if they so choose. No, said Vlad, because then it would go on forever. He rubbed his eyes, exasperated. Boys, I will admit the idea has merit. I will bring it up to the staff, and we'll see about possibly doing it in the future. But if a lot of the staff like it you'll be expected to come before all of us with the proper presentation. I'm expecting slides, organization, a clear plan, things like that. The boys all exchanged excited looks. Clearly they were only focusing on the positive. They had a chance. Got it, sir. Thank you, sensei. All right. Now, I've got papers to grade, so. He waved them out. When they were gone, he sighed. I'll admit that I let my competition with Eraser cloud my judgment sometimes. But, a free-for-all. What are they thinking? Maybe it will be good in the end. Yes, I could see that. We'll just have to see. It was dark when Izuku and Yui finally returned to Yui's room, and mutually collapsed onto the bed, both physically and mentally exhausted. They laid side by side, staring up at the ceiling, breathing in sync. That was a good day, Izuku said. MMH. Yui agreed. I was pretty stressed about it, actually. Did you like her? Yes, she's a lovely woman. I see where you get many of your best qualities. Oh, he blushed. Did she like me? Did she say it all? She did. She does. You got her stamp of approval. He laughed weakly. That's a relief. Yui sighed. She definitely had suppressed Mama Bear energy. What on earth does that mean? She just seems super protective of you. You're her only boy, after all. Sometimes you say things that I just don't expect. Well, Yui's face grew dark. I guess when you spend most of your time listening, you're like a sponge, picking up all kinds of things from people around you. Mama Bear energy ... That's probably a mix of Setsuna and Ryuko talking. Well, I think you have your own personality. Gee, thanks, Izuku. They both laughed a little, and then lapsed into a comfortable silence, which gradually became an uncomfortable silence, at least in Izuku's head, mainly because he was thinking of saying something he wasn't entirely sure would go well. But ... but it was only the natural thing to ask now, right? So, Yui ... when can I meet your parents? She did not immediately respond. She only shifted on the bed a little. 5 seconds passed. 10. Izuku grew frantic and quickly followed up with, I mean, it's okay if you don't want to talk about it or something. I just remembered when I brought you up here the first time you said you missed your mom, and I just took that to mean maybe something happened, but I didn't want to pry and... Oh, Izuku. That's all right. Her voice was as airy and musical as ever, but with a note of heavy melancholy. He could almost hear the history in it. You're right. It's not fair for you to go through all the stress of introducing me to your mother ... and for me to just stay silent about this. But, if you're not comfortable talking about it, Izuku protested. I'm plenty comfortable. As comfortable as I'm going to get. Yui turned over on her side to face him. My parents live about an hour's train ride from UA. I suppose we can go and visit them on a convenient weekend. An hour. That's pretty far. Must have been quite a commute before the dorms. Yui nodded. It was ... well, a lot of early mornings. But, worth it. That must be why you miss your mom. You can't really go back there very often because of how far it is, huh? Yui bit her lip. That's not why. Oh, Izuku paled. He wasn't sure how to proceed. He couldn't even begin to guess what she'd meant, in that case. Come to think of it, that was Christmas. And she was one of the few people who stayed behind that night. I mean, sure, I was also there, but I had at least gone to see my mom during the day. She took a deep, preparatory breath, and then reopened her eyes. Now she had the face of bravery, a hero's face. After what happened with my friend Saya, the incident that made me stop talking. I stopped talking at home, too. My parents didn't know how to react. The very first night, they realized something was off, and asked me if I wanted to talk about it. I just shook my head. The second night ... they confronted me. They got angry that I hadn't said a word to them in over 24 hours. I just took it all on the cuff. The third night, they panicked. They started begging me to talk to them, to tell them what was wrong. And I found that I just couldn't. Tears began to stream down her face. She sniffled. Comfort her, you moron. Izuku scooted over and took her in his arms. She accepted his touch but did not bury her face into his chest like she usually did. Instead, she kept herself at a distance, letting her tears flow, continuing to stare into his eyes. They took me to doctors and therapists and things and, I said a few things, when I absolutely had to. Eventually they figured out that something bad had happened at school, and well, they tried to stir things up there, and with Seiya's family but I made them stop. I didn't want any more trouble. I just wanted to be done with it. I wanted to quietly graduate and get the hell out of there. Yeah, Izuku muttered. He knew how that felt all too well. From there, things got better and worse at the same time. Yui continued. My parents basically accepted that I was now quiet. They no longer prodded me to talk or got mad at me. But they did treat me as fragile. They kept taking me to therapists, insisting there was some condition I had that they would be able to identify and treat. But I knew in my heart that it wasn't anything but my own defensive decision. They wanted so badly to be able to solve it somehow, to do it themselves. And I know now how they must have felt. They'd felt like they'd failed. Yui sobbed and put her face in her hands. Oh, I'm such an asshole. I'm such an asshole, Izuku. I'm such a... Hey, whoa. Izuku pulled her closer. Yui, you're not. Where's this coming from? Help me to understand. Don't beat yourself up like that. You don't get it. She trembled in his arms. I made it clear that I wanted to apply for UA, and they they didn't think I could do it. They didn't think I could train to be a hero in my state. In a way, they were right. I couldn't stay as quiet as I was then and really become a proper hero. But to me at that age, when I was full of pride, when I felt like I had something to prove, I resented them for not believing in me. I told them in plain terms that if I got accepted, then they would have to let me come here. And they agreed. But only because I think they were positive I wouldn't get in. She laughed hollowly. When I got my acceptance letter that was the only time I ever lashed out at them. I told them I would come here and be myself and find my own path, and if they didn't believe in me, then I would just do it without them. Yui sniffed again. Her eyes were bloodshot. I still remember their faces. Their stricken, lost faces. Ever since we came to the dorms, I've thought about it. I haven't seen them since Kamino. I've completely ignored them. And yet they have supported me. They let me stay in school and they text me sometimes and what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to go back to them now? I've ruined everything. She began to cry harder, now fully leaning into him. Her tears staining his front. Izuku sighed and held her close, rocking her back and forth a bit. It was a lot to take in, wasn't it? I get where you were coming from, he muttered. You had a chip on your shoulder, and it felt like they were keeping you in a box. But they did let me come here. And they let me stay here. They let me follow my dream even though it's dangerous. I was their only child, and they tried their best to help me. You know, I think everything good about myself comes from them. That over-helpful nature that I had to suppress because it was so strong, because it ruined my friendship with Seiya. That's all them. They raised me to be that way. They raised me with good values, but they must think they failed. They must. I can feel it in everything they text me. They're still trying, but what have I repaid them with? A cold wall of nothing. I'm a terrible daughter. Izuku thought about the things she'd said to him earlier that day, about being a hero in other ways. Well, wasn't this one of those ways? Yui, he said. It's a different situation from anything I've been in for sure. I can't ever truly understand how you feel. But if this is how you feel, then you have to confront it. You have to reconnect with them. I know, she whispered. Well, will you come with me? On that day. Of course, he answered. Izuku had another dream. In it, there was a man. The man looked nothing like Daigoro Banjo, fifth user of One for All. In fact, this man had no face at all. Izuku never saw it, but it was still Daigoro Banjo all the same. He was somehow alive, and teaching at UA. Or perhaps just working as part of the staff. Nezu mentioned some kind of exchange program. It all made sense in that vague dreamlike way, and Izuku's dream self-accepted it. For some reason he felt anxious about his secret getting revealed even though Banjo would never do that. It seemed like it was being held over his head. A girl who looked mostly like Yui, so he supposed that she was in trouble with Banjo for something. There was a confrontation in the hallway. Banjo was telling her off and she was terrified. Kendo tried to step up and was rebuffed. Izuku got himself involved. He said something like, "She's not yours to do that to." Later, while awake, he would have no recollection of what he said at all. Banjo turned on him and said that this was all his fault. All his fault. All his fault. Beep beep beep. Izuku felt like he'd wandered the halls for hours listening to the music. Beep beep beep. Where was it coming from? Beep beep beep. Oh, wait. The halls were fading. He was not upright but sideways. Beep beep beep. There was a blanket over his body. He was in bed. Beep, beep, beep. Izuku became lucid and rolled over, fumbling with his phone to turn off the alarm. Bright daylight streamed in through the window. His phone read 8:43. He'd slept in for over an hour somehow, through that much beeping of the alarm. How late was I with Yui last night? He couldn't really remember. All he knew was that they'd they'd done what they usually did. Izuku put a hand over his forehead and allowed himself one single sigh of exasperation before panic took over. He was late for class. Time to go now. He arrived just before the finishing of homeroom. Don't forget that you have to partner up for that, Aizawa was saying as Izuku opened the door. His eyes flashed over mid-speech, as did everyone else's in the room. Hushed whispering came from Ishido and Aoyama nearby. Izuku kept his head down as he walked to his seat hurriedly. I am allowing you to pick your own partners this time. An exercise in independence and responsibility. You know your own strengths and the strengths of your peers by now. Choose wisely, Aizawa continued. Also, Ectoplasm asked me to remind you of the pre-calc test for next week. There will be 2 chapters covered in his class today instead of 1, so you have time to study all the material. Yes, Ajiro. The blonde boy lowered his hand. Does that mean the class later this week will just be a study session, then? I'm afraid not, as much as some of you might need it. Aizawa's eyes were sullen. That time will be given over to extra instruction in heroics. You all have your faux agency operations project coming up next month, so we need to front-load fight training on you for the time being. That evil smile of his crossed his face. Do make sure you're all staying alive. The bell rang shortly after. Fuck third year, Bakugo muttered under his breath in front of Izuku, as all the students stood up and gathered their things. This shit is too much. As Izuku walked past the front desk, Aizawa said, Midoriya. A moment. He stopped. He'd known it was coming. Uraraka and Todoroki halted at the door, looking back at him with concern, but he waved them on. I'll catch up. He turned back to Aizawa. The rest of class had cleared the room. Eraserhead's gaze penetrated him. You do realize I have to mark you absent for today, and that it will be on your record that it was unexcused. Unless, of course, you have an excuse. Izuku shook his head. I don't have one, sir. You also realize, I hope, that there are security cameras on the outsides of the dorm buildings and on the paths between them. Yeah. Izuku pulled himself up a little. If he was about to have to justify his relationship to Aizawa, along with all else he'd had to do, he sure wasn't going to take it meekly. Aizawa seemed to pick up on the energy that had come between them, and sighed. He shuffled the papers on his desk. I don't want to pick a fight with you, Midoriya. You're a good student, which is why it disappoints me to see you coming in late. You've all got busy times ahead. Make sure you've got your priorities prioritized. Time management, that's the key. That's all the advice I can offer to you. It's appreciated, sir. Can I go now? Yes. Slightly annoyed, Izuku shoved the door open and left homeroom, hurrying a bit to catch up to his friends. The halls were swarming, and he supposed Yui had gone on ahead as well. Unless she slept in too. That would make him feel bad. He hoped it wasn't the case. Usually she's the one who pushes us to keep going late into the night. But last night it was me, so it'd be my fault. He quickly checked his phone. There was a text from All Might which read, We'll work on smokescreen this afternoon. Izuku texted back a quick confirmation and put his phone away again. Thoughts of one for all training fled him as quickly as paper on wind. There were other things to worry about. Didn't I have a weird dream last night? Oh well, I can't really remember it. He caught up to Uraraka, Todoroki, Ada, and Tsuyu, somewhat out of breath. Why were you late for class, Ribbit? Slept in, he answered. Uraraka blushed and looked away. I hope that's just a fluke. I would hate for you to fall behind, Midoriya. Are you getting enough sleep? Ada asked. Generally, he lied. It's just a fluke, that's all, that's right. One time when I was little, I slept through an entire day, Todoroki relayed plainly. What for? Asked Uraraka, baffled. Exhaustion from training with the old man. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Did I miss anything important? Izuku asked. Just some stuff about upcoming assignments. Sue shrugged. And that free-for-all exercise, Ada put in. What exercise? Izuku raised an eyebrow. Some big hero training thing the staff are considering doing. Aizawa was vague with the details. I hope it's not soon. Uraraka wilted. I'm about to die as it is. No wonder you crashed an extra hour, Deku. This math test, extra fight training, memorizing paragraphs in English, and this partnered project in physics on top of everything. Speaking of which, interrupted Izuku, did you want to partner up for that, Uraraka? He'd rather work with Yui than anyone else, but it was an internal project in Class A. Oh, she paused, Sue and I were actually gonna. Sorry, Deku. She coughed uncomfortably and averted her eyes. There was a strange feeling in the air. Izuku faintly felt like he had done something wrong. Okay, that's fine. I'll find someone else. Ada, I have already promised I would help Zero. Actually, Ada adjusted his glasses. He approached me yesterday about it. We can work together if you like, Midoriya, said Todoroki. Yeah, sure. Cool. Izuku sighed in relief. Todoroki wasn't all that easy to work with, but he got good grades, at least. Uraraka and Sue seemed like they were staring at him with ambiguous faces, but when he looked toward them again, they both looked away. He frowned. Am I reading too much into it? Yui joined Izuku at the lunch line. They went through and gathered their food together in a comfortable silence, their shoulders touching lightly. She sensed some kind of anxiousness, a tightness in his posture that pervaded him. She wondered what it was. They walked together into the seating area, going past Yui's usual table where Ryuko, Setsuna, and Izuku all sat. "Whoa, lovebirds," Setsuna hooted as they went by. "Not gonna sit here." She gestured to the two empty seats on the opposite side. Yui gave Izuku a look. She knew he found Setsuna to be a bit much sometimes. "Maybe tomorrow," Izuku told her apologetically. Yui agreed. "You're welcome anytime," Itsuka said kindly. "I know there was that thing with your hair, but we're happy to have you, Midoriya." "I appreciate that. Hey, why don't you come hang out with us tomorrow night?" Setsuna asked. My way of apologizing. "We were gonna go have a picnic of sorts out in the grounds, some of us. I invited Yui here, but she said she'd be with you. This kills two birds with one stone." Izuku glanced at Yui. "Did you actually want to go?" he asked her in a low voice, eyes full of concern. Yui nodded. "I'll go if you go. It could be fun." "Well, alright then." Izuku looked up. "That sounds good." "Sweet." Setsuna grinned wide. "See you there, Green." The two of them walked off, heading for Izuku's usual table. "They will interrogate us," said Yui in a low tone. "I don't think so," Izuku frowned. "I think I scared Takage off from doing that, at least. They're slowly learning to not get up in our business." I don't know. Wouldn't you like to think she's just being friendly? Who all is going to be there?" A couple more girls. Tetsu, maybe. Honuki, Shishida, Shota. Sounds like a nice crew. I like all those guys." "And the girls?" Yui asked, a bit challengingly. "Well," Izuku clicked his teeth. "I can learn to get used to them." It was hard to forget that she had only met Izuku in the first place because Setsuna had made him uncomfortable enough at the end-of-year party to come to the roof. Though if she connected the dots, she'd probably take it as a thing of pride. Yui smiled a little. "What?" Izuku chuckled. "What's funny?" "Nothing. I just think I like your friends more than you like mine." They had just reached the Deku squad table, where Uraraka, Asui, Ida, and Todoroki were sitting already. "That's good to hear, Ribbit," Asui said frankly as the two of them sat down. "Though we missed the first part of the conversation. It was private," Yui told her. "It's honestly a relief," Uraraka sighed, waving her hand in front of her face as if she was hot. The two of them and Todoroki were opposite Izuku, Yui, and Ada. "For the longest time, Kodai, I've been worried that you don't like me. You're just so hard to read. You did kidnap me one time." "That's..." Uraraka's face grew hot, and her eyes darted to Izuku. "Don't bring up old sewage, Kodai." "Kidnap?" Izuku raised a concerned eyebrow. "What's this about?" "Nothing," said Yui and Suyu at the same time. Todoroki snorted into his bowl of soba. "Regardless of your feelings, you are welcome to sit with us anytime," Ada told her showily. "Not that. I mean, Midoriya doesn't require our permission to bring you. He can do as he likes. And so can you, of course. He coughed. "Obviously you can bring yourself, too. I didn't mean to insinuate that you need. Yes, you get the idea." Yui blinked at him, fighting a twitching smile. "I'm not sure I do. Could you continue explaining it?" Sue croaked laughter and Uraraka giggled as well. Izuku smiled, though a bit uncomfortably. "It's okay, dear. I know Ada didn't mean anything by it. Yui was telling the truth when she said she liked his friends a lot. They are the main characters." She didn't know where such a thought came from, but it felt right. "I understand Uraraka's fear, though I never shared it," said Todoroki. He looked at Yui for a moment, with a neutral stare rivaling her own legendary ones. "When I first came here, I was very distant because I didn't want to make friends with anyone. I thought it just wasn't relevant. Luckily, all these guys showed me the error of those ways. When I saw you, I thought you must have been like me." Yui shook her head. "I was never disinterested in making friends," she said, quietly. "Just careful about it." She gave the fire and ice boy, the only one capable of matching her stoicism, a slightly bitter smile. "We can't all share the same tragic backstory." Todoroki exhaled and nodded his head a little, in an accepting kind of way. "That wasn't even it," said Uraraka. "Well, part of it, I guess. But mainly it was because of how I snuck up to you and stuck you to a pole in our first training match. And I touched your boobs by accident." Her face flushed. Yui looked up at the ceiling in deep thought. "I can't honestly remember you touching my boobs. Maybe you've become more accustomed to them being touched since then, Ribbit." Sue's gaze was penetrating. Izuku let out a rushed, strangled cough, half choking on his food. "I'm not comfortable with this line of conversation," Ada said plainly. Yui was fighting down a heat in her face and trying not to look Izuku in the eye. "I don't really care that you beat me. My only impression of you was that you were probably a good hero." "Oh," Uraraka's eyes shimmered. "Well, thank you. That honestly means a lot. You've improved as a combatant since then, too," said Todoroki. "That fight with Bakugo. I wouldn't have been able to keep up with him like that." "That's because you're too reliant on your quirk, Todoroki," said Izuku. "Mr. Aizawa tries to tell you every time." "Hell, Bakugo tells you that every time." Yeah, it's been the same feedback for 2 years." "I get it." The boy returned to his soba, muttering. "Nevertheless, Kodai's fighting skills now are quite impressive." "Do you two train together?" Ada asked. Izuku and Yui exchanged a glance. "Not really that much, but I suppose we could. We could. Yui nodded, smiling. She liked the idea. She suspected, looking at the circles under Izuku's eyes, that he was succumbing to stress. Class A has it just as bad as B right now. It felt like there was an infinite slew of upcoming things to worry about. Not that you need it. Izuku grinned at her. You've earned Bakugo's respect. You've reached the apex, dear. Nowhere to go but down. She gave him a bright smile to equal his, and Sue and Uraraka both made owa sounds. Then, darkness entered her heart. He didn't mean it like that. Nowhere to go but down. They weren't the first to compliment her on her fight. Her entire hero school career, Yui had felt as if she were climbing a steep hill, struggling to cultivate the right instincts, the right reflexes, the strength and tenacity and quick thinking that would allow her to compete with the best. It had not always been there. Monoma had told her to her face before that she was subpar at combat, and others had insinuated it. But now I've surpassed that. I've finally reached the top of the hill. So what's this feeling nagging at me? It was something wholly alien to her. A newly mounting pressure that, unbeknownst to her, her boyfriend felt all day, every day. The pressure of the top. After lunch was over, Izuku seemed to be in a bit of a hurry to return to class, but she tugged on his sleeve gently. Izuku. He stopped and turned to face her. Strain showed on his face. His friends walked on away. Other students streamed past them, leaving the cafeteria. I was just thinking that it was a good idea to train together, shouldn't we? Oh, yeah, definitely. I was just thinking. I was remembering when we went on that run together before we were dating, and how much I enjoyed that. So yeah. Well, I don't just mean light exercise. Yui sighed. I'd like us to train our quirks, and do rescue and fighting and hero stuff. Yui, I don't know. Izuku's face grew darker for a moment. I don't know if you'd enjoy my approach to that stuff at all. It gets pretty well, intense. She raised one eyebrow. You don't think I can handle it? Now, I never said that. Come on, Izuku. Don't you think? It would be a good way to kill two birds with one stone. He moved his head to one side in narrow-eyed confusion. Takage used the same expression earlier. What are you talking about? What birds? I just mean ... We're all about to get really busy soon ... It would be a way for us to hang out and actually do something useful instead of just sitting around making out. Oh, I see. Izuku went pale. She saw his hand tremble for a moment, and her eye twitched. The air had changed. Yui. He coughed and averted his eyes. If you didn't like to do that so much, you could have just said so. I'm sorry if I ever went too far or made you uncomfortable or... No, Yui's eyes widened, and she rushed to close the distance between them, taking his trembling hands in hers. No, that's not it at all. God, feel his hands. He's terrified of overstepping and upsetting me. She was thinking of Sue's off-the-wall comment about her boobs getting touched from earlier, and was pretty sure he was thinking of the same thing. Izuku, please don't think that. Sorry, it's hard to. He took a deep breath. We can train together if you like, Yui. Okay. She smiled, trying to relax, breathing together with him for a moment, and giving his hands an affectionate squeeze. Why not this afternoon? Didn't you say you were doing some quirk training this afternoon? Well, something else flashed through his green eyes then, something deeper-seated, something she did not understand at all. Not this afternoon. Maybe tomorrow. I do my quirk training with ... Well, it would be a lot to heap on you on such short notice. But hey, I'll talk to you later, okay? He pulled her into a hug, running his rough hand through her hair once, making her shiver. And then he pulled away and walked backwards a few steps, smiling. Bye, Yui. Bye. She gazed at him turn and go for a moment, standing there in the middle of the way, her hands folded in front of her waist, dreamingly, until Setsuna shoved her in the shoulder. Look alive, love a girl. We've got fight training in 5. More of the Class B girls followed her, going past and out of the cafeteria. Yui shook her head clear and got into step with them. He keeps a secret. It was a thought so foreign, and yet so utterly obvious, that it chilled her to her core. That look in his green eyes, his discomfort with training together, his slightly more extreme than usual response to her trying to provide help, as if he needed to be self-sufficient. But no, I chalked it up to him just being a boy. No, there was something else. Adding it all up, there was. And what scared her was that Yui couldn't even scratch the surface as to what it might be. What Izuku was hiding from her. It could be anything. Part of her, the part that trusted him deeply, said that she should just wait until he was ready to tell her. That was what he did for me, on the matter of my parents. But another part, a part of her from her earlier self, mixed with curiosity and deep concern, and perhaps a pinch of nosiness ... said that she should look deeper, and find out for herself. Tashinori stood before the cloud of smoke as it filled the gym. Out in the midst of it was Bakugo, turning in a circle, crouched in battle position, waiting for Midoriya's attack. Don't use so much right away if it's not necessary, Tashinori called to his pupil. Midoriya was vanished somewhere in the gloom, still generating smoke from his body. It is necessary. He's gonna need all of it, Bakugo snarled, a grin on his face. When Midoriya came darting from the upper left, a green streak of light, Bakugo was ready for him, whirling and slamming an explosion square on target. Tashinori winced. Kaboom! Through the burst of fire, Midoriya leapt up, but he was further away than he should have been, indicating that Bakugo's attack had landed. He tried for a kick to his opponent's head, but Bakugo slid sideways and climbed into the air with 2 small explosions, getting over him. Midoriya launched himself across the ground and backward into the gloom, dodging the next blow. Predictable today, Bakugo commented. Slow. What's up, Deku? Toshinori frowned. He's correct. Midoriya tried 3 more times to sneak attack using the smoke screen, but Bakugo predicted all his moves. After the 3rd failure, Bakugo went on the offensive. Midoriya was forced to generate more smoke ... and appeared to reach his emitting limit, running out. The stuff began to dissipate. Bakugo gave chase. They streaked about the gym. Midoriya used Black Whip to pull himself up into the rafters, and then Fajined himself down past Bakugo, but whiffed the kick. All Bakugo had to do was blow himself out of the way, and Midoriya slammed into the ground hard enough to knock himself over. He windmilled his arms and fell on his ass, and the smoke cleared. Bakugo landed, cackling. I'm too used to fighting through my own smoke, he said. It's just an unfair matchup, I'm afraid. And good luck finding a fair one. Midoriya pulled himself to his feet and let out an uncharacteristic huff of frustration. He punched the air. Hyagh. Toshinori flinched, taken aback. Even Bakugo's eyes widened. Jesus, Deku, get a grip. Sorry. Midoriya repeated himself, rubbing his face. I don't know. I don't have an excuse. The boy turned to All Might, and in his green eyes was terror. He knows he's disappointing me, and hates it, and won't be able to focus while that's taking him over. Young Midoriya, if there's something bothering you today, you can tell me, Toshinori said. He felt bad. Izuku's eyes darted over to Bakugo for a second. There's nothing bothering me. I'm just off my game, that's all. Bakugo snorted. If there's something you don't want me to hear, you can just admit that out loud. Midoriya turned on him, that flash of anger resurfacing. Fine then, Kakin, why don't you leave? Bakugo's face twitched. He said nothing, but he went to the door and walked out, obliging. Toshinori eyed his pupil with consternation. His chest was rising and falling. Young Midoriya, go ahead and critique me. I'm listening. All Might shook his head and sighed. Something's got you riled up. You can't let that happen, Midoriya. You have to calm down and focus. Focus on what? Midoriya asked, quietly. Focus on WH. Toshinori was baffled. On training, of course. That's what we're doing here. Okay, I'll do that. Worried, confused, and feeling like much was left unsolved, Toshinori doubtfully nodded and took a step back. All right, then. How about you just practice sequences of moves without an opponent? Deploy the smoke. Later, exhausted from the training, his head buzzing with hot frustration, Izuku left Gym Gamma. Bakugo was leaning against a wall outside. That took a while. You get yourself back under control. You were waiting out here the whole time. Bakugo shrugged. He opened a bag of sunflower seeds and popped one into his mouth. That is insane, Kakin. We have so much classwork you could have been doing. Why did you stay? In case All Might called me back in. I guess you guys never got ready for me, though. You could at least pretend to not still be obsessed with beating my ass every chance you get. Izuku winced at his own words, absolutely certain that Bakugo was about to scream at him to shut up now. Instead, his rival just looked disappointed. I'm doing this for you, said Bakugo. I'm the only one left at the school who can compete with your reflexes, now that Tagata graduated. You can't train with anyone else and face a challenge. Every other week I think you've finally humbled up, and then I get disappointed by the next thing that comes out of your mouth. Deku, come on. All these years and you've hardly ever gotten furious at me like that. Mad, sure, but not mad enough to say that kind of thing. Bakugo's face softened. Which means you aren't mad at me at all. You're mad at yourself. Wow, you understand me so well, Izuku said sarcastically. You know, Bakugo looked back at the gym door. There's nothing stopping you from just telling All Might that you don't feel like training on certain days. It's not like it's for a grade. And you're pushing against a skill ceiling. Anyway, what's that supposed to mean? It means that training constantly like this isn't accomplishing much. You won't catch me saying that to the man's face, but you expect me to do that. I see. You're the one with the magic quirk. But all you have to do is tell him you want to do it less. He may be a teacher but he can't punish you or something. I can't. Izuku knew that this was something he could not consider. Kakin, telling me I should take a break. Hi. No, he'd already forgotten about training a few too many times, and hadn't had enough good sessions recently. Asking for a break now would be so lazy of me. And I cannot be lazy. There were other punishments besides the ones written on paper, and they're often much, much worse. Surely Kakin of all people understood that. Besides, what would All Might's face look like if he asked that? He may not even be surprised. That would be the worst. What if he just looks resigned ... like his worst suspicions about me being a failure have been confirmed? I'm going to hang out with Yui, he said out loud, walking faster ahead of Bakugo. Good night, Kakin. Bring her to training, then, the other boy called. Izuku stopped and looked back at him. Kodai. If you can't be bothered to break from training, then bring her tomorrow. I want a rematch against her, anyway. But, what if All Might says? Screw what the old man says. He can't kick her out. If he tries, we'll all just go somewhere else and fight. All 3 of us. I mean ... okay ... I told her maybe tomorrow anyway. Those were my exact words. That she could maybe train with us tomorrow. He'd just have to preface to All Might to not say anything explicitly about One for All, and maybe they'd have to limit the things they practiced and change the schedule. And Katsuki Bakugo shook his head as he watched Deku walk off. He will never stop that fucking muttering, will he? Izuku shot Yui a text, telling her she could come over if she liked, and walked into the dorm. There were a few people about. Ajiro and Takoyami were washing dishes, while Jiro and Kaminari appeared deep in the throes of homework, papers scattered around them on the table. Todoroki was throwing something away, but he looked up when he saw Izuku enter. "Midoriya," he greeted. "I went out today and bought the supplies for our physics project. Poster board and markers and things like that." "Oh, huh." Izuku felt like he was climbing out of his brain fog. "Remember, we were working together on it." "Yes, Todoroki, I remember." He rubbed his eyes. "You didn't have to. I mean, do you want me to pay you back?" "I'm sorry I wasn't able to help." "It's fine. Using Endeavor's money. Anyway, my thought was that we could just knock all of it out tomorrow night. Or most of it, since the big math test will take up everyone's time next week." Yeah, sure, sounds good. I'm so tired." He walked past Todoroki. "Knock it all out in one go, yeah. All right." Todoroki's eyes scanned his friend as he went toward the stairs. "Are you okay, Midoriya?" "I'm fine. If Yui shows up at the door, let her in and up." He went up the stairs, and his phone buzzed. "Yui, okay. I will bring some work I'm doing, though." "What time?" "Izuku, come over in like 20 minutes. I'm gonna take a quick shower." "That sounds like a lot," Yui said. She wrapped her arms around his midsection and leaned her head against his arm. She could feel how hot his blood was. "Good lord," he stressed. "It was. I mean, it's over now," Izuku told her. Then he let out a long sigh and sank into her a bit. They were cuddling on his bed, the lights out, not really able to see each other. "Does Bakugo really have your best interests at heart?" At this point there's been so many ups and downs that I don't even know anymore. He does want you to come train with us, though." Yui swallowed. "He'll beat me up. I'm not gonna let that happen. I don't want you to save me, though. You didn't last time." Yeah, I know, and I feel bad about it." "Don't you dare feel bad." Yui poked his nose. "I'm just saying ... last time I did it. On my own. I don't want it to get any easier, but I don't think I can do that again." "Well ... why not?" Yui did not respond right away. Her grip hug on him slackened a bit. "I don't know ... just a feeling, I guess." Being realistic. "Well, what kind of training would you like to do, then?" Izuku asked, not pushing further on the previous topic. "Oh, Izuku, I love you." If only she could bring herself to say that out loud. "I'd like to practice my reflexes. Close combat. That's what I need to keep improving." It was true enough that she'd had a few good fights during classes and training ... But in all the real villain and disaster situations that they'd encountered, Yui Kodai had never done much beyond distant support, throwing projectiles with Ryuko. If she wanted to not choke up in the event that she ever had to do more than that, then she had to practice. "Yeah, I think we're in the same boat in that regard," said Izuku. He sounded wistful. "Do you want me to fight you?" "Gah. I mean ... not really. The idea scares me." "Why?" Yui's lip curled up. "Elaborate." "No, I sense I've made a mistake of some kind." She giggled and leaned in to kiss him. She'd meant for it to be a quick peck, but they ... got carried away. It wasn't until the next morning that Yui realized she'd forgotten to actually finish her homework that she'd taken to Izuku's room. She frantically finished it in the few minutes before class, leaning over it feverishly at her homeroom desk. "Mornin', Kode ... Oh. Don't talk to me right now," she muttered to Shota. "Fast girl mode." Nearby, Itsuka snickered. The confused Shota just walked onto his seat. She put her pen down with a minute left before homeroom started. Itsuka was watching her. "You got back pretty late last night." "Yeah, you and Midoriya have fun." Yui gave Itsuka her best death stare. "You could say that." Setsuna, sitting on her other side, made a show of slumping into her desk. "I'm constantly torn between being proud of you and jealous of you. On one hand, Queen Yui. On the other hand, why can't I be in my hot girl season too?" "You're always in your hot girl season," Yui told her honestly. Setsuna blushed. "You can't just compliment me so straight up like that." "Are we still on for tonight?" "The picnic?" asked Itsuka. "It's the weekend, so." "Oh yeah, we're definitely on." Setsuna wiggled her eyebrows. "You bringing your toy, Yui?" "He's coming. Let me just text to make sure." She pulled her phone out and sent Izuku a message. "Do you still want to go to Setsuna's picnic tonight on the grounds?" There were mere seconds left before class started, so she didn't expect him to be looking at his phone. But the message came back pretty quickly. "Sure, he's coming," Yui repeated. Setsuna whistled. "Phew. Bad luck, Tetsu. You won't be the only boy there after all." Tetsu, sitting across the way, shrugged. "I'm honestly kinda relieved. You guys are a lot to deal with." Behind him, Tsuburaba and Kiwara were watching them. Yui met eyes with the latter, briefly. He did not seem happy. How much did they hear? Kiwara's dark gaze shifted to Kinoko, sitting in the far corner of the room, and then he focused his attention to the front. Elsewhere, other boys seemed to scatter their eyes, as if they'd all been eavesdropping and were now acting like they hadn't been. Yui turned back around uncomfortably. She could feel the weight of resentment on the back of her neck. This class has felt more hostile ever since I started dating Izuku. She wished she could just be in class other than Bakugo and the pervert. They all seemed well-adjusted. But I'd miss the girls, I guess. Things only got worse when Vlad King went up front and announced, "We're doing a free-for-all exercise today as a class." A melee of sorts. Excited whispers washed over the room, all from the boys. Yui felt the weight of the pressure she'd been feeling increase tenfold. She cast dark, doubtful glances over to Ryuko, then Itsuka. They seemed similarly confused. You could call this exercise a warm-up for a similar one we're planning to do soon. It will be much larger in scale, but today it will just be the 20 of us. Vlad King's eyes passed over the room. Like I said, it will be a free-for-all. You cannot make direct alliances. Things don't end until there's a last man, or woman, standing. Class B were spread out around the edges of the arena, and directed to enter in groups of 3, where they would then split up. Yui was joined by Honuki and Kamakiri. Rising up ahead of them, past the gate, was the twisted industrial nest that made up their fighting ground. They awaited the signal. The 2 boys were stretching. Yui felt as if she was about to retch up her breakfast. "You look pale, Kodai. Everything okay?" Honuki asked her. She nodded. "Good. I'm not looking forward to being close to you in there. After seeing what you did to Bakugo," he joked. Yui could only nod again, and smile uneasily. He had no idea how much more nervous that made her feel. And of course, Kamakiri only watched with those narrowed, ever-frustrated eyes. 60 seconds. "In we get," the bug boy muttered, and went through the gate. Yui and Honuki followed. There were 3 ways to go: right, left, forward. Kamakiri went forward, not bothering to consult the other 2. "See you," Honuki told her, and went right. Yui went left, toward the residential quadrant of the arena. She thought she felt eyes on the back of her neck again. But when she turned back, Honuki was far down the street, not paying her any attention. Heart pounding, she kept moving. 30 seconds. She went through the automatic doors of an office building, which was attached to a parking garage. "I'll go up the stairs here and go the top of the garage and stake out." It would be easy to retreat and hide in the building if anyone she felt like she couldn't fight decided to show up. Are the boys going to target me? She knew they were resentful of Izuku for some reason, but she didn't quite know if that extended to her. Surely they weren't that petty. Surely not. She'd known them for 2 years. Whatever the case, I have to focus. Focus on lasting a while. It's a survival game. She went up the internal stairs of the office building. 15 seconds. 10. An alarm sounded, indicating the exercise had begun. Almost immediately, she heard a loud explosion. Well, that's not Bakugo. Who in her class could create an explosion? Something else crashed. Whatever it was far away, not in this building. Yui kept climbing. On the 4th floor, she crossed the office space and went to an industrial-looking door, opened it, and found herself in the parking garage. Only a few fake cars were occupying scattered spots. This side of the garage was dark and under flickering yellow lamps, but the other side opened to the outdoors, and sun was streaming in. A high view of the arena was available from over there. Yui went to it. Down below, she could see Shizaki's vines crawling up a building. Shishida roared in the distance, passing along a wide street, chasing someone who Yui didn't identify before they darted into an alley. She scanned the scene, wondering what her next move would be, when the ceiling suddenly collapsed. Yui gasped and moved sideways, her whole body flailing in terror, as Manga Fukudashi plummeted down. One of his text attacks slamming through the concrete like a hammer. He landed light on his feet, stood up straight, and his bubble read, "Hello, Kodai." His manner seemed almost smug. Yui pulled out one of her bolts instinctively, throwing it at him and enlarging it. Manga created a boing shield, and the massive piece of metal bounced harmlessly off of it. In the meantime, Yui ran back. Her mind flipped over. Need distance. Need time to think. Whoosh. Manga shouted, and a gust of wind roared through the tunnel of the parking garage. Yui nearly fell over from how strong it was. Shit. Why him, of all people? Why'd it have to be him? He was giving chase, too. Gaining. She passed a car, touched it, shrunk it, picked it up. She turned and threw it at him, but her aim was off. Shit. The car bounced off one wall, enlarged, and fell harmlessly far off to the side of where Manga was with a loud crash. Zzzzzzip. Manga created some kind of fast-moving piece of text that he immediately hopped on top of, and closed the distance to her, riding on it. Yui spun sideways, getting grazed by it, and he hopped off in midair just past her. Slam. Another text hammer, smaller, but aimed at her head. Yui bull rushed forward, attempting to bypass it and tackle Manga at the same time. But he only said, boing, and she bounced off like it was nothing. The hammer swung about. He's outmaneuvering me. Panicked, she threw 3 more screws in a scatter, and grew them all. They rolled on the floor, one of them clanging near Manga's feet, causing him to halt just briefly enough for her to run for the door, into the office. Unbelievably, in the open office space, there was another fight going on. Itsuka and Awase were duking it out amidst the empty cubicles. Itsuka's fist came down one of them with a smash. Before they both turned to notice Yui. Kodai, Awase shouted. Don't you dare interrupt. Oh god. Izuku backed off, as if she meant to run away. From me. Do they truly think I'm that scary? Just because I beat Bakugo once. I have no idea what I'm doing right now. Yui ran down to the right, away from all of them. Another SMAS hing sound of Itsuka's fist went off back there. She passed office desks. Manga was writing on another piece of text, choosing to come for her instead of interrupting the other fight. He closed the gap. He's too fast. I have to use that to my advantage. Yui banked a hard right, so quickly that Manga didn't have time to react, and he crashed into the far wall. She slid low underneath a desk and backed into the cubicle. Close quarters. Need close quarters so he doesn't have room to make big attacks. Sizzle. Cartoonish flames leapt up nearby. FWOOOSH. Yui paled. She could feel their heat. They were spreading surprisingly fast. Why would you do that? She asked Manga as he appeared around the corner. She surprised herself by how frail and desperate her voice sounded. Manga rarely spoke with his voice, but here he did. The robots will clean it up in the end. I have to prove I'm willing to go all the way. Just like you. No, you've got the wrong idea. Whatever came over me last time was all thanks to Izuku. Compared to him, I'm nothing. You can't possibly think that this is what I would do. The fire was spreading too fast. Yui hopped over the cubicle divider behind her, and then shrunk the file cabinet that was in her way. She turned back and threw it. Another bad throw, another easy Manga dodge. He kept coming. She grabbed a stack of papers and tossed them into the air, letting them cascade, and then enlarge in them. Snip. Manga shouted. A pointy sharp piece of text sliced through the big papers. But when he got through them, Yui was already running down the stairs. I just need to keep this up. I can use my quirk indefinitely, as long as I don't get totally exhausted. Already sprinting so much was taking a toll on her, and the excessive adrenaline usage from being so nervous would cost her in the long run. She knew that right now, so why couldn't she calm down? I just have to get him to use up his vocal cords. He can't have that many big attacks left in the can. She made it to ground level, and suddenly Manga appeared from through the ceiling again. His text attack this time spinning like a pointed drill. Debris rained down. Yui tried to attack him in the chaos, swinging a punch, but he ducked low and kicked her in the shins. FWOOSH. He roared. A liquid piece of text blasted at her, pushing her back like a high-pressure fire hose. Yui slid along the floor on her butt, her body crying out in pain from the blow. That's bruises. That's a lot of bruises. She forced herself up, her tailbone screaming at her, and went out the door of the office to once again gain some distance. And she stepped right into Honuki's trap. "Aw, Kodai, it's you." The lipless boy stood at the edge of the street, having used his quirk on all of it, turning the whole place into a pit of quicksand. Yui struggled as she slowly sunk down, feeling the stuff tighten around her legs, making it impossible to escape. "I heard a lot of people fighting in this building, so I figured I would catch someone. A shame it had to be you, though. Did you at least take someone else out?" Manga appeared at the doors. He did not step out fully, having seen what happened to her. "No," his face read, aimed at Honuki. "But you're next." Honuki hardened the ground around Yui, and then the two boys began to fight each other, leaving her stuck there. Her face was red hot with anger. The fights continued all around her, but she'd been one of the first out. "It's happened before. I never have been able to split my attention very well. So why am I so frustrated now? What could I have done differently?" "So many things," another part of her said. Izuku would have found a way out of this. For now, she was stuck until a robot or teacher came to get her, as the exercise went on, and she was left with nothing to do but mull over her failure. "All it took was one time rising above my mediocrity, and now I hate the taste of it." But this was her normal state, wasn't it? To be one of the early defeats. One of the low supporting players of the class. Izuku liked her pretty face, but there was just no way he respected her as a heroine. She couldn't believe it. How could I have deluded myself into thinking otherwise? She loved him. But even if he stayed with her, even if he didn't get tired of her eventually ... she would always play second fiddle. That truly sunk into her now, as she herself sunk into the ground, and it hurt.